He was the Emperor's hunting dog. No will, no memories, just a weapon on a leash. Used, controlled, and discarded the moment he turned against his master. But instead of dying, he opens his eyes back at the very beginning, inside the academy that turns kids into monsters. This time, he remembers everything and has one thing he never had before, a clue about his family. So while everyone else is still being trained like puppets, he's already moving differently, like a hunting dog that finally chose its own target. Bow before the Emperor. Give thanks to the heavens for the grace that has descended upon earth. Bow down, collect all the words of blessing and gratitude. The knight continued to repeat these words tirelessly until his weapon broke and he fell in battle at the hands of a traitor. His comrades ran to meet the enemy with outstretched spears, but immediately collided with his blade. They are from an organization subservient to the Emperor. The Special Forces Regiment, better known as the Special Squad, exists for only one reason: to protect Emperor Leon Cavalan. However, this version is complete nonsense. The captain of the Special Squad, Yan, killed his own subordinates and looked at the palace blazing in flames, vowing that he would kill the Emperor with his own hands. The knights he killed began to move and repeat those very words. They crawled towards MC, then began to merge, and when they grew into a huge knight, he said that even as they became dead, they remained the Emperor's puppet. The knight ordered him to bow before the Emperor and attacked him, but he immediately struck back with his blade. Meanwhile, the palace was completely empty. The Emperor sat on the throne and played with a fairy. He asked if she was surprised by the noise outside. She shouldn't worry, it was nothing special. Hearing footsteps, he turned his gaze to Yan and said that he couldn't believe it. He was the one who was most loyal to him, and yet he simply betrayed him. MC, badly injured from the recent battle, approached him and glared at him. Leon asked how long he had been serving as captain. He remembered the times when he was a simple cadet. The Abyss of Loneliness is the training center for Special Forces warriors. There he was able to go from an ordinary warrior slave to a captain. He snatched his opportunity with his bare hands, but now he betrayed him. What more does he want? He broke off the blade protruding from his leg and, stabbing it into his ear, said that he was not satisfied with the bugs he was planting in other people's heads. He pulled out some kind of parasite from his ear and exclaimed, "He says he got everything? This is complete nonsense. Everything is lost, even his memories." The Emperor meanwhile grabbed a little fairy and MC screamed, "Who is his family? Who is he? He lost his entire life." Suddenly, the Emperor devoured this fairy and said something in an unknown language, which is why Yan's chest was immediately pierced by his sword, and he didn't even have time to notice it and was very surprised. After that, the Emperor rose from the throne and said that he didn't know how he noticed the bug, but he was sorry, it was his favorite puppet. After looking at the Emperor for the last time, MC felt his life fading and closed his eyes, thinking that everything was in vain. But suddenly, a female voice told him to wake up, and he immediately opened his eyes, realizing that he was in a completely different place. He was shocked. His heart was pierced through, but it was still beating. He needed to pull himself together. This place seemed familiar to him. He looked around, noticed a giant column next to him, and when he looked up, he realized that it was the Great Stone Sword. This is a legendary structure, the symbol of the Special Forces Warrior Training Center. Countless students died before this sword. And then a thought occurred to him. He looked at his body and asked, did he become younger? He was wearing a cadet uniform. Had he really gone back in time? Suddenly, a guy appeared behind him and said that it was too noisy. He immediately struck, but he was able to react and block it in time. Then the guy hit him again, telling him not to look away. MC hit his back against the wall and gritted his teeth in pain, and the guy said that impudence doesn't make him special. He thought it was that easy to defeat him. It was the 12th cadet, Roman. MC immediately remembered him and began to slowly get up, and Roman said that he knew there was nothing outstanding about him. He approached him and asked if this was a warm-up. The cadet answered him that he wanted to deal with a loser under the pretext of training. No one cares when a low-level cadet dies. Yan remained silent and thought that this couldn't be true. Opening his eyes, he saw the Great Stone Sword. His body became younger. Given the situation and the words of this big guy, he returned to the past, and this makes him very happy. He doesn't care what happened. The most important thing is that he can start over. This time, he wouldn't make those mistakes and would deal with the Emperor. He told the cadet that he had important news. He wouldn't have a girlfriend even at 40. He would quickly forget about relationships and devote himself entirely to military service. Upon hearing this, Roman became very indignant and attacked him with his fists, shouting, "What did he just say?" He dodged and said that he couldn't believe he'd knocked him down with such a slow punch. That meant he was pathetic. Roman, enraged, called him a brat and then used a series of techniques, but MC dodged each one and remarked that it was quite good. He would give him one piece of advice: let him attack when he'd already closed the distance between himself and his opponent. He demonstrated this by punching him in the stomach. It was the Dark Spirit's 7th attack, a strike from 3 centimeters away. Roman was shocked that he was able to use an advanced level attack, and then MC ran up to him and said that after that he needed to hit the target right away. But something stopped him. A pendant flew out of his pocket, and his gaze caught on it. He wondered if it had been with him all this time. He picked up the pendant and told Roman that they would be done for today. He was lucky. He realized that there was something inside and lifted the lid, and under it was an old photograph of a man and a woman with a child. He immediately recognized them, although he saw their faces for the first time. He burst into tears, because this was his family, his memories, his love. He remembered the words he forgot 30 years ago. He couldn't get all this even after he burned the capital of the empire to the ground. He couldn't get it by killing all the knights, and now he holds it in his hands. He closed his eyes, calmed down, and realized that he almost made the same mistake. Stop wasting his life on pathetic revenge. He needs to get out of here. No matter the cost. He will definitely return to his family and the life he lost. A special forces regiment under the Emperor's command laid siege to Verna Fortress and eliminated the Archduke of the North. The special squad carried out countless missions that shaped the course of the Empire's history, with Yan at its head. He was the Emperor's right hand, the Empire's finest knight, and now this mighty warrior somehow has to haul biological waste. Now he's working as a cesspool cleaner in the Cadet Corps. There are only 1,000 cadets in the Warrior Training Center. To survive here and become stronger, you have to kill. On average, 3 or 4 people die here every day, and then the space is replenished with new volunteers and kidnapped people. The training center is located in a dragon's nest in the northwestern part of the mountain range. The interior of the training center is a dungeon labyrinth. Each cadet has a number, the number depending on personal abilities. You could advance in the ranking through exams and tournaments. In this pyramid system, where your rank determines how you're treated, cadets walk over each other, but are also under strict control. In such a system, it's almost impossible for students numbered 900 and above to survive, and if a low-level cadet dies, they can be easily replaced. But usually, they're either sent to do dirty work or help high-level fighters train. And MC suffered this fate. He's number 9 in 74. He's lucky he was only given dirty work, because in this pyramid, there are students at the top-level cadets, heirs of aristocratic families. A passing cadet bumped him with his shoulder, causing him to drop some boxes and grumpily tell the cadet to watch where he's going. These were the very same heirs of aristocratic families. The girl who had offended him apologized to him for her carelessness and moved on. Maintaining loyalty to the empire, procreation, and maintaining control over high society are the main reasons why the children of aristocrats are trained at the Special Forces Training Center. This place provides them with the most comfortable living conditions possible. Those bugs don't get into their heads because they are already hostages to the privileges of aristocratic society. Cadets above this level always occupy the top spots in the rankings and enjoy all the benefits of their position. And among them are Lorena Beowulf, Cruel Dwight, and Kasia Everain. They occupy the top 3 spots throughout their entire stay at the training center. Cruel stopped and asked Lorena why she was apologizing to this scum. MC immediately mentally called him an idiot, and he asked, does she think that just because they are all cadets, that means they all have the same status? How dare such riffraff even talk to her? He glanced at his number and noticed that he was on the lowest level. He understood that himself. Hadn't he learned the local laws yet? MC really wanted to split his skull right then and there, but he was forced to apologize to him to avoid getting into trouble. Then the guy spat at him with the stick he was chewing, which angered him, but he didn't react. Cruel asked, is that all? Only worthy people addressed him like that, while people like him had to beg for mercy, kneel, and slam their foreheads into the ground. As soon as he said this, his body was cut in two. Unfortunately, this was just Jan's thoughts. He closed his eyes, trying to calm himself, while Kasia quickly stacked the boxes in one place and they continued on. Cruel told him to be more careful in the future, and the girl waved and apologized to him, saying that she had collected all the boxes. MC wiped his face and thought that they could enjoy their ranks. The worse they treated him, the better for him. He continued working, walked along the wall, and felt a raging rage emanating from around the corner. Someone was definitely hiding there. Roman immediately came to mind, but it didn't match his energy. He decided not to waste time guessing and check everything out, then walked on, pretending he hadn't noticed anything. A female voice came from around the corner. Lorena said she had been waiting for him. He was very surprised to see her. She was actually quite famous. The most dangerous criminal of the state? Even the Imperial Knights couldn't catch him. Blue Iron Guard. He committed his first murder at the age of 11, and by 20, he was already leading his own gang. He destroyed 23 villages and 17 guilds. His hand, capable of withstanding even orichalcum weapons, became a symbol of fear, but he quickly lost it. Lorena Beowulf claimed his murder, holding his severed limb in her hands. From that moment on, Lorena became the commander of the Knights of the Imperial Palace, the Beowulf Duchy, one of the 4 noble families ruling in the northern snowy mountains. The Knights of the Duchy described Lorena as having the potential to become the continent's best swordsman and the youngest swordsman, and she was also the strongest warrior born into the Beowulf family. And he agreed with their opinion. She was the kind of person best avoided. If he crossed her, it would be bad. He needed to deal with her first. He told her that she seemed to have misunderstood, and she said that she would express herself differently then. What was his goal? Why was he hiding his strength? He told her that he had no idea what she was talking about, and she said that she had seen him fight near the Great Stone Sword. She thought he was just acting as a punching bag like all low-level cadets, but she realized she was wrong. She saw him perform a blow from 3 centimeters away, which no one here could perform. Why does a low-level cadet have such incredible abilities? He realized he screwed up, but he decided to pretend he didn't understand anything until the last minute and asked what she was talking about. She didn't press him for answers any further and said that her eyes had deceived her. She extended her hand to shake his and apologized, and when he extended his in return, she suddenly moved her hand sharply towards his face. But for him, such a movement was too slow. He wondered why she suddenly attacked. Did she plan to test him? This was too emotional an attack. There was nothing he could do. He took the blow with his face and immediately grabbed the sore spot, exclaiming that he could have died. What wrong had he done? She was taken aback by the surprise, then looked down and said that he should have parried the blow. He exclaimed in response that he had told her that he had no idea what move she was talking about, and she awkwardly apologized to him. She didn't mean for this to happen. So MC made Lorena feel guilty by pretending to be a commoner who was unfairly beaten. Knowing her character, she would fall for it. She asked, wasn't he carrying some things? She would help him. Where should they be delivered? He politely refused, but she insisted and took one box. They continued on their way, and she told him not to talk to her too respectfully, since they were both cadets. He refused, since she was an aristocrat after all, and she said that she thought it was unfair when higher-level students treated lower-level ones like slaves. If she became the leader of the duchy, she would stand up for the protection of slaves. He mentally noted that she was more talkative than he expected, and soon they finally reached the warehouse. He put the boxes down and said that thanks to her, he was able to carry all this cargo. She said goodbye to him and before leaving, said that she would ask him something just in case. He saw how she attacked, right? He followed her hand with his gaze, and she hoped her eyes had deceived her this time too. After that, she left, and he thought that she really was very smart. He wouldn't be able to get rid of her that easily. Maybe he should kill her right now? He could easily deal with the current Lorena, but then the Beowulf family would become his enemy. He would be a fool to make himself a dangerous rival just because Lorena was bothering him. First, he needed to focus on escaping. He went into the restroom and looked around, thinking that this place was somewhere around here. When he was captain of the special unit, there were many deserters. None of them managed to escape from the training center, although one managed to reach the forest where he was captured. Then he politely asked the cadet how he managed to escape, and he answered just as politely. In the third zone, there is a closed fifth stall in the restroom. There is a hole behind the wall. He broke down the wall and smiled. The cadet had told the truth. A long tunnel was visible through the resulting hole. The hole was too small, but if he pushed the stones aside, he could escape, and then he would finally be free of this squad. Night had fallen. All the cadets had dispersed to their cells, and roll call began. It was room 974's turn, but there was no answer. The instructor immediately approached his cell, thinking he had escaped, but Yan belatedly answered that he was there, sitting motionless. The man irritably ordered him to answer faster in the future, then ended roll call and announced the all clear. The lights went out, and MC wondered, what had he learned in this place? The more carefully you move, the higher your chance of success. He only had one chance to escape. Even if he managed to squeeze through the hole, a squad of guards would be sent after him, and there would be many difficulties along the way. If the plan fails, he'll only be a shining example for the other cadets. He needs a map to create a detailed plan. Perhaps with such a weak body, nothing will work, but he has no choice. He assumed a meditative pose and concentrated. The Dark Dragon's Breath is a mana manipulation technique mastered only by special squad leaders. Although he has mastered this technique, his body won't be able to perform it. He needs to create an internal mana engine, a core, to relieve the heaviness, but there's no time to create it. He might not be able to master the Dark Dragon's Breath. With no other choice, he decided to try and took a deep breath, then gathered his strength and used the dragon's breath. The flow of mana immediately became rapid, even faster than he expected. Every inch of his skin exuded energy, as if the dragon itself had entered his body. This is the secret technique of the first emperor, the founder of the empire, who conquered many countries with a single sword. This technique was created by the ruler out of boredom, and the name of the technique reflects its power. Suddenly he opened his eyes, mana began to leave the core, and he became worried, because this cannot be allowed. Veins all over his body bulged. He clenched his teeth, holding back a scream, and then the light faded and his breathing became heavy. He cursed in frustration. It did not work. Apparently, it is impossible to create a concentration of energy with a secret technique, especially with such a body. One day, the emperor gave him a training scroll. He does not know if it was an attempt to test him or just a fleeting generosity of the ruler. The writings contained information only on how to inhale mana, but nothing about how to retain it within oneself. He knows where the other scrolls are, but now he needs to escape before that event begins. The next day, the cadets were gathered around the sword, and they began to discuss it. Judging by their whispers, today they gathered only those who would be sent outside. But Jan knew the truth. That would not happen. If his memories serve him correctly, he will arrive today. He needs to try not to attract attention. Roman's voice rang out behind him, his gaze darting around the crowd and loudly calling his name, causing him to immediately pull his hood over his head. The instructor appeared, and the cadets immediately began peppering him with questions. He loudly called them idiots and ordered them to shut up, causing them to flinch. MC immediately covered his ears, wondering if this was a voice control technique. Why was he testing forbidden techniques on the cadets? The voice control technique is performed by concentrating mana in the vocal cords. Untrained people can suffer fatal injuries from hearing something like this. Some started bleeding from their eyes, mouths, and noses. Their hearts could barely bear it. The instructor said that their abilities and status are irrelevant. Do they have a reason to live? Yan felt a little nervous. He didn't think he'd see this madman again. This was the chief instructor of the Special Forces Training Center, Damien. Some cadets couldn't take it anymore and were dragged away by the instructor. Other children crowded around him, and he ordered them to immediately return to formation. The instructor was actually looking at them. MC glanced nervously at Damien and thought that he needed to be more careful. Low-level cadets were just toys for this idiot. If the chieftain paid attention to him, he could say goodbye to his escape. No, even his life. Damien greeted the cadets and said that everyone gathered here was a bunch of incompetent, lower-class scum. He would gladly finish them all off, but they shouldn't worry. The Emperor did everything for people like them, giving them one last chance to be chosen for the Dragon Warrior project. Yan thought there would be a rigorous selection process, with the best cadets tasked with a noble mission to protect the Overlord. But in reality, a bug would be implanted in the students' heads, brainwashing them. The real goal of the project was to create puppets of the Emperor who wouldn't even be able to die without an order. Damien joyfully spread his arms and said that they had such a brilliant and caring Emperor. They should thank the ruler for his endless kindness. They applauded, and he noted that at least they clapped better than high-ranking cadets. MC thought he needed to be less conspicuous, and one of the cadets raised his hand and told the instructor he had a question. Yan turned to see who it was, and it was Roman. He asked, "Is the Dragon Warrior really that important? If one of them were chosen for such a great purpose, would he still have the right to punch them in the face? Every single one of them?" Suddenly, a bullet pierced his chest. MC got scared, and Roman fell to the ground. Damien asked, "Is he okay?" There are too many intrusive thoughts in his head. They are all just bugs. The cadets crowded around Roman. They all felt sorry for him, and Yan thought that if he stopped the bleeding, he could survive. But now it is too dangerous for him to leave the crowd. Despite the wound, Roman got up and asked, "What did he just say? So they are bugs? Then why did they recruit slugs like them?" To survive on the streets, he did dirty work and endured humiliation, but he continued to live because there was a reason. Emperor, Dragon Warriors, is it so important? MC's jaw muscles tensed. He agreed with him. Roman asked, "And he says that they must protect their beloved lord?" The instructor noted that he is quite a persistent bug, just like a cockroach. They say they can survive even if their heads are torn off, and he should check if that's really true. Seeing him raise his hand and prepare a spell, Roman, although nervous, stood firm. Suddenly, a crystal mole jumped out of nowhere, and when the shot was fired, it jumped, catching the bullet. The crystal mole, a wild rodent that lives deep in the mountains, and is famous for more than just its cute appearance. This beast got its name from the fact that when its crystalline part is struck, it explodes, emitting a blinding light. As soon as the bullet pierced the mole's body, it exploded. The instructor was slightly surprised, and while everyone was wondering where this creature came from, Roman was blinded and fell again, but this time unconscious. Everyone immediately rushed to help him, and Yan thought that he felt sorry for blowing up the mole. He found it in the restroom and decided to leave it just in case, and he couldn't even imagine that he would use it like this. The problem is, the head instructor, he probably noticed everything. If he saw it, then that's the end. The instructor didn't seem to pay attention and exclaimed that he really is stubborn as a cockroach. He even likes it. He dismissed the cadets and left, and MC breathed a sigh of relief. Watching Roman being led away, he called him an overconfident idiot. After a while, Damien returned to his office and smirked because he found himself a funny toy. He noticed everything then. Time passed. Yan went to an abandoned restroom in the 3rd zone and continued to make his escape route. While crawling along a narrow passage, he realized that he had been careless. 3 days have already passed. He can't believe he forgot to take his mask with him. Dig forward. Secure the tunnel with planks. Repeat. The 3rd day of work was progressing without a problem. Because he had concentrated his mana in his eyes, the darkness in the tunnel didn't bother him at all. No one had entered here in the past 3 days. This abandoned room wasn't even marked on maps anymore. At this rate, he'd finish sooner than planned. He stabbed again and felt resistance. The blade hit something. He stabbed again, harder, and suddenly something splashed in his face. Soon after, he and the others went to work. The instructor took roll call. The cadets piled the barrels together, and when the man called out to Yan, he told him to stop because he smelled suspicious. He ordered him to remove his hood immediately, and Yan, throwing it off his head, told him that he'd accidentally broken the container he was carrying and found waste inside. The instructor immediately yelled and told him to get away, or the stench would make his nose fall off. After that, MC took a bath and washed his clothes, hoping that would be enough to get rid of the smell. He was glad that there were no suspicions. He didn't expect to break through the sewer pipe, and what burst out of it looked like a dragon. What were they eating there, that he had to fight something like that? However, there was nothing to worry about. Nothing would interfere with his plan. He managed to get daggers, ropes, and everything else that could be useful during the escape. The improvement of his body was also almost complete, although he was afraid of dying due to too much muscle strain, but the results were already visible. The voices of the instructors were heard around the corner of the house. Yan quickly got dressed and approached them to eavesdrop on the conversation. One of them asked, Did you hear what they were saying? That guy, Gale, apparently had his tongue cut out for laughing at the instructor. His colleague said he was so scared that he couldn't breathe, and the man said that the main thing was to hold out for this time. It was probably just rumors. Moreover, the instructor was supposed to leave soon. Hearing this, MC smiled. He had an opportunity. He wouldn't be there. It was very good that he found out about it, and he couldn't pass up this great chance. He left, but he didn't even suspect that he was being followed. Time passed, he finished work in the abandoned toilet and was about to leave, but he heard footsteps. He froze and thought, who could have needed to come here? Who could it be? Lorena, the head instructor? Did they really know about his escape? Seeing a shadow in the passage, he was already braced for a confrontation, but it turned out to be only Roman. He asked, so it was him? He irritably asked in response, so what's the big deal? Jan said that if he was following him, there was no time for showdowns. He told him that he actually came here for work, and he asked if he could move after that. He asked with displeasure, who did he take him for? Such scratches were nothing to him. MC frowned and looked at his wound, saying that blood was gushing out like a fountain. He told him that it was a regular pimple. He had recently squeezed it. Jan, of course, didn't believe him and quickly said goodbye to him, citing work, and when he wanted to leave the restroom, Roman smirked and asked if he was assigned to dig an escape tunnel. He froze in fear, and this guy asked if he thought the instructor would be happy when he found out about this. Seeing his look, he noticed that he was scared. Immediately after that, MC abruptly approached him and swung his dagger, causing blood to immediately spurt from his neck. Roman gritted his teeth in pain and asked in a hoarse voice, what did he do? But Jan couldn't kill him. It would lead to problems. Roman distracted him from thoughts of killing him, asking why he was silent. Was he so scared that he was speechless? He should know that the death penalty awaits him for escaping. He didn't expect him to find out. He should beg him to keep quiet. Maybe he would agree to keep his secret. MC asked, why? He wouldn't tell anyone anyway. He became indignant and exclaimed that he would go right now and tell everyone about it, but Jan confidently declared that he wouldn't do it because he hated the special forces more than he did. Even when he was facing death, he couldn't contain his rage. He knows. He dreams of returning home, and he wants to tell the instructor about escaping. He highly doubts it because he wants to escape so much. Roman noted that he is not that simple. During their fight, he seized the moment. If he really wanted to, he wouldn't be here. Besides, he could easily recognize him among the cadets. He smells different. MC asked in confusion, what, a stalker? He even knows his set. He exclaimed that he didn't mean it that way, and he asked how he knew he was digging a tunnel. He told him that it was actually very simple. His footprints gave him away. Most of the rooms in the center had granite floors, but he noticed strange footprints with limestone dust. The shoe size and stride length matched his exactly. He asked, was that enough to understand that he was going to escape? He answered that he also looked at the work reports. He was here too often. Jan noted that he was smarter than he thought. You can't tell at first glance. Roman was a little confused, as he didn't understand whether it was a compliment or not, and asked him to tell him about the plan. Where was he digging his tunnel? What were the chances of a successful outcome? He asked if he was interested because he wanted to join. Roman answered him that he couldn't say right away. He needed time to think everything over. MC said that in that case, let him stay here. He has good enough skills to get a higher rank in 10 years. But what will happen to those he's trying to protect if even now he's not sure if they're alive? What will happen to them in 10 years? There's no time to think, so he has to decide now. If he joins him, they won't be here the day after tomorrow. The guy's face darkened slightly and he clarified. He thought through every action, right? He confirmed it and asked, did he want to know about it? Roman said there was a difference of 962 people between them. If they both escape, the instructors will try to catch him, number 12 first. As he said, they won't be here the day after tomorrow because he'll be rotting in the grave. Jan smiled and noted that it was surprising that he thought about the consequences. He usually doesn't give the impression of a reasonable person. Roman again didn't understand whether he was praising him or humiliating him, and MC told him not to whine. He was risking just as much as he was. So what did he decide? Roman closed his eyes, pondering this, then looked at him and said there was one more thing left. Night had fallen, and the chief instructor gathered all the cadets and, quietly humming a tune, remarked how pleasant it was to breathe the cool night air. They had gathered them at such a late hour to announce important news. Usually, he preferred not to see them at such a time, but the news was excellent, so he wouldn't delay. Jan thought that if he wasn't mistaken, today was the day he should announce the exam. Damien said that the date for their first exam had finally been set. The gist was very simple. They would all go to one place, and if they could survive there for a week, the exam would be passed. The location of the first test was the Blade Mountain Range. MC thought that of course it was the Blade Mountain Range. Many years ago, there lived a traveler named Nilf. He learned that herbs capable of curing his mother's serious illness grew in the Blade Mountains. Young Nilf promised his mother to find a cure and set out on a journey, but he suffered the cruel fate of being devoured by one of the monsters. They say his mother waited for her son every day until she died. Among all the troubles, it was fortunate that Nilf's mother never learned how he died. The Blade Mountains are home to a huge number of monsters, which is why the range is nicknamed the Forbidden Zone. The most harmless are goblins, but the further you go, the more bloodthirsty the creatures become. They range from large monsters found nowhere else to giant ones, the stuff of legend. Furthermore, the mountains harbor creatures the world has yet to discover, creatures that have never been discovered before, and in the most remote part, that has taken up residence. Damien clapped his hands and asked with a smile. They're probably eager to get started. How many bugs can survive this week? He enjoyed imagining the torment of pathetic cockroaches. The instructor interrupted him and said that a message had arrived and he had to go. Damien frowned, clearly displeased, and Jan smirked. After that, Damien told the cadets that the conversation was over and they could all go. MC removed his hood and thought he seemed upset. He ended the conversation so abruptly, without explanation. The children began to discuss the upcoming exam. It was almost impossible for cadets with little experience to survive in these mountains. High-ranking ones would be protected by instructors, since they were the children of aristocrats. Suddenly, someone ordered everyone to make way. Lorena was coming. Jan pulled his hood back up and thought that she was there like an idol, and he was too close to her. He turned his head so she couldn't see his face, and mentally asked her to just pass by. She caught up with him, and suddenly turned her gaze on him, which scared him. She noticed him, but passed by, and he thought that everything wasn't so bad. There was no point in worrying about her. He would soon escape from here. He asked Roman, had he done what he asked? He told him that everything was ready, and he happily said that it was just excellent. Let him then admire this great stone sword a little longer. He wondered why he needed to look at this wretched thing, and he answered that he wouldn't see it tomorrow. Roman turned a nervous gaze on him, and he thought he knew what the chief instructor had been instructed to do. Before the first exam, he must personally visit the imperial palace to notify the emperor about the test. The chief instructor doesn't like visiting the ruler, but he can't disobey the order. Thus, one of the main problems in their plan disappeared. Tonight, they will escape. Night fell. Roll call began. The instructor walked along the cells and began listing the numbers. He reached number 974. There was no answer, and he exclaimed irritably, "Is he fooling around again? Let him answer him immediately." He called him again, and MC answered that he was there, but the voice came from behind him. Immediately after that, he grabbed the instructor by the head and eliminated him, and told the rest of the escapees to get to work. Jan, Roman, and 2 other cadets began to escape from the warrior training center for a special unit. MC said that the guard change was coming soon, and let them hide the body so that no one would notice. Jake and Todd took care of this matter, and the 2 went on. Roman said that, as he asked, he brought the 2. He asked if their skills could be relied upon. He confirmed it and asked if he was going to use the guys as bait, right? He told him that he would never have asked him to bring them if that was his intention. They both finished with the body and approached them, telling him not to worry. They would not be a burden. They were also in danger of death here. Jan asked everyone to be quiet. They did not want to wake up the light sleepers. They approached a large gate, and he said that he needed them for this. He wouldn't have been able to open the gate alone. That's why they were needed. To get from the barracks to the abandoned toilet, which is in a closed area, you need to open the double gates. However, for the doors to swing open, 2 people must stand on the pressure plates, and on the other side of the other gate, a lever must be pulled. First, 2 people step on the plates to open the gate. Then the other 2 go through them and press the lever at the other gate to open the first one again, so the remaining 2 people also go forward. That's why he would never have been able to escape alone. Roman said that he understood everything and called out to Jake. As soon as he gave the signal, they both would step on the plates. He nodded, and they both stood on the plates, immediately after which there was a grinding sound and the gates opened. MC passed through them and called out to Todd, and he ordered Jake and Roman to remain standing. Roman asked, how long should they stand there? He answered that they should stay put until he gave the signal, and they disappeared behind the gate for a long time. Roman was already tired of waiting. He began to worry that they were gone for so long, and then there was a grinding sound and the gate suddenly closed. He immediately rushed to them and started pounding them with his fist, cursing Jan in every possible way, and shouting that he knew from the very beginning that he would abandon him. MC stood on the other side of the gate and listened to his curses with a smirk, and then asked if he was blind. The gate opened. Roman stepped back in confusion, and Jan said that he was more than sure that he told them to wait for the signal, but he couldn't even do that. And who abandoned whom here? He wiped the blood from his face, and Roman worriedly asked, whose blood was it? What happened inside, and where is Todd? They went to the second gate, and he told him that they were both fine. All his worries were in vain. They had to delay because of one variable. He thought he could simply drug the bait, but it didn't work. After passing through the gate, Roman saw a dead giant wolf, and MC said the beast was crazier than he thought, so it took him a long time. Roman was surprised that it was so big. Did he kill it alone? He didn't answer this question and said that they shouldn't linger. They needed to run as soon as possible. The escape went smoothly from there. Through a tunnel dug by Jan in an abandoned restroom, the 4 cadets managed to escape the walls of the training center. A hand emerged from the ground at the top of one of the cliffs. MC climbed out of the tunnel and looked around, noting that they had succeeded. While the 2 boys were pulling Roman out of the hole, Jan approached the edge of the cliff and thought that there was no sign of pursuit yet. But the guards had probably already learned of the escape. Roman approached him and said that they had escaped so easily, which was even disappointing. MC disagreed with him, looking at the moon and saying that it had taken a lot of time and effort, really, a lot. It had been so long since he had breathed fresh air. Roman asked if they would stay or move on. He advised them not to let their guard down. Everything was just beginning. He took a pendant out of his pocket, looked at a photograph of his family, and thought that now the journey in which he would get his life back would begin. After that, he gathered them all together and told them to listen to him carefully. He would explain everything to them once. The great forest of Atrion is made up of ancient redwoods and is located in the northern mountains of the Empire. He showed them figurines and a tablet with a map of the surrounding area, saying that they were now in the very heart of the forest and would have to run for 2 days to get out. Roman stopped him and asked if it wouldn't be better to hide in the very depths. Redwoods are tall trees with wide trunks, so they should hide well. He replied that the most monsters were where it was easy to hide. Besides, they were probably already being pursued, so capturing them was only a matter of time. The pursuing party consisted of about 20 people. Once they caught up with them, they would be finished. They could increase their chances of a successful escape, only in one way. They should split up, thereby dividing their pursuers. If they scattered in different directions, the guards would have to do the same. Performing simple mathematical calculations, it turned out that there were 5 guards for each of them. Therefore, everyone's chances of escape would increase. Roman said with displeasure that he would end up being bait. They would go after the cadet with the highest number first. He asked if he was unhappy with something. He could have trained less hard then. Who forced him? But if they were together all the time, they would definitely be killed. At least one of them had to escape successfully. Jake and Todd exchanged nervous glances, and Yan said that was exactly why everyone should scatter in different directions. Any more questions? Roman said he didn't understand something. This game board, each piece has a number written on it, and why did his piece say fool? He remained silent and said that since there were no questions, it was time for them to go. Roman asked him to wait and answer his question, and then Jake called out to Jan and thanked him. Without him, they would never have gotten out of here. He would definitely repay him for his help. In the future, they wouldn't have to pretend they didn't know each other. Jake, MC thought of him as an ordinary cadet, but he probably had a good reason for risking his life like that. Roman said it was ridiculous. He hoped he'd never see them again. Yan remarked that he was a good cadet, but heartless as a person. He indignantly exclaimed that that wasn't true at all, and rubbed his nose in embarrassment, saying that they would only meet again if they were all captured, and if they never saw each other again, then the escape was a success. MC thought he sometimes sounded like an old man. Had he regressed too? They gathered in a circle, and he said Roman was right. He wished they would never meet again. After that, they scattered. Yan ran through the forest, thinking that the guys were probably running as fast as they could, and it was time for him to start too. He took a deep breath for the dragon breath, then used the acceleration technique, the wings of the windbird, and accelerated sharply, leaving only sparkling light in his wake. He climbed the nearest tree, stood at the top, and looked out over the forest. Dawn was already breaking. He thought that the physical capabilities of this body were the main problem. He had trouble even maintaining dragon breath, and his veins still couldn't pump enough mana. He remembered the guys and smiled. He couldn't even imagine how the others were doing. He was so pathetic. He was the 5th captain of the Special Forces, a master of assassinations, pursuits, and surveillance. Now he wondered if he had inherited the skills from his past life. Meanwhile, in the abyss of loneliness, the instructor asked if there was any news from the pursuit squad. His colleague told him they hadn't returned yet, and he exclaimed that they were idiots. Why did they notice the disappearance so late? They must catch the deserters as quickly as possible. If the head instructor, that crazy idiot, returned from the palace, they would be in trouble. His colleague said they needed to catch them before he returned. But suddenly, Damien's hand fell on the instructor's shoulder, and he said that it seemed like they wouldn't succeed, since that crazy idiot had already returned. The man got scared and started making excuses. Damien didn't like his recent words, and a thought occurred to him that made him smile. He let him go and said that everything was fine. It happened to everyone, so he could relax. He nervously apologized to him. He speaks faster than he thinks, and Damien said that people curse even the emperor when he's not around. Another instructor was stopped by his subordinates, and he took this one aside and asked if he was in charge of the cadet barracks. He must have been really tired trying to find the fugitives. He told him that wasn't true at all. He shouldn't worry. The pursuit squad would catch them without any problems. Damien asked, but how could they do that? After all, problems had already arisen. Immediately after that, he pushed the guy down with all his might, which caused his legs to take an unnatural position and break. After that, a loud scream echoed throughout the room. He tried to get up, and the chief instructor said that he didn't even know they were planning an escape, didn't even suspect that they had dug a tunnel. He didn't notice that they had stolen the supplies. He began to beg him for mercy and to give him another chance, and he put his foot on his head, pressing it into the floor, and said that he didn't have a chance he could give him. The instructor was very afraid of approaching death and asked for mercy, and he said that he didn't even feel who was standing behind him. He applied more force. There was a crunch and blood spurted. He approached his subordinates and ordered them to call off the pursuit squad. He was taking command. The man asked if he would personally handle this matter. He smiled and answered that he had discovered something tempting, so he couldn't hold back. It was already daytime. The 3rd team of the Special Pursuit Squad was currently chasing the deserters. Suddenly, the squad leader, Kelly, noticed something and signaled the others to stop. His subordinates asked what was going on. Had they lost the trail? He took off his mask and told them that everything was going smoothly. But didn't they find it strange that everything was going too smoothly? Jael and Andre told him that the cadet only had number 974, so naturally the chase would be easy. he was too suspicious of everything again. Jail said that they were following tracks leading from the cliff. Then they found prints leading in that direction. This puppy was just in a hurry to escape from them. Wasn't it because of his suspiciousness that his partners were constantly abandoning him? He became indignant and wondered if it was really just him. However, he still couldn't calm down. Noticing that the fog was lifting, he told the team members that they needed to catch the fugitive before he disappeared. They slowly walked on, and Jail said that they had number 974, so they would cope quickly. The team responsible for number 12 must be having a hard time right now. Andre said that even though he was number 12, he was still a cadet, so he would be captured quickly. Jail noted that he was overly confident. What was his number at the training center? Suddenly, Jan appeared behind him. He grabbed him and returned to the tree with him, thinking that there were 2 left. Andre wanted to answer his question, but noticed that he had disappeared somewhere and called out to him. And then a blade jumped out from behind the tree trunk. Now there was only 1 left. Hearing the noise, Kelly turned around and said that they were too loud. Are they on a picnic? He would run away when he heard the voices. Finally, he noticed that they were nowhere to be found. The team members had disappeared without a trace. Could this really have happened? And in such a short time? No wonder he had a strange feeling. No, this simply couldn't be happening. Even if they were chasing number 12, he wouldn't have been able to defeat a member of the special forces. How did 974 do it? Hands reached for his head from above. He immediately noticed it and spun around sharply, swinging his blade. His blow cut down a tree, and he furiously exclaimed that he was insolent. He thinks he can do it a 3rd time? A strong fishing line wrapped around his neck and his feet left the ground. MC pulled on the line, lifting him even higher, and Kelly felt a searing pain on his neck. The line began to cut his skin. Now he understood. The footprints and scraps of clothing were not just footprints. They were bait to catch them. He looked at Yan and said that this couldn't be true. Cadet number 974 couldn't defeat the pursuit squad. He called out the names of his comrades, realizing that they had suffered the same fate, and then his twitching legs froze. The 3rd team of the pursuit squad was eliminated. After that, MC changed his position and climbed a tree. He looked at the knife and thought that it was a pretty good blade. It could be used. Pulling off the attack turned out to be much easier than he thought. If he continued to use the body enhancement technique, such clashes would not pose a problem for him. He needed to get out of the forest before the fog descended. There were traces of blood everywhere, and the hounds could smell the stench and lead others there. But if he masked his body odor with slime, it would be easier to hide from them. The berries of this herb are poisonous, and the leaves emit a disgusting stench. If he made a paste from the leaves and spread it all over his body, he could escape. Dogs can't stand the stench of slime, so they won't smell it. Thanks to this herb, they won't find him. He needs to hurry. Time is running out. Even in the farthest corners of the empire, he won't be able to hide if snares are spread against him in the sky and nets on the ground. He noticed something in the sky. A column of black smoke. The squad would never light a fire, and only Jake or Todd could be in that direction. What idiots. Do they really think they're just going on a hike? If the fire isn't put out, they'll be discovered. He immediately dismissed the thought. Now was not the time to worry about the others. He had taken them anyway to use them as bait. If they attracted attention, it would be even better for him. He remembered their conversation last night and immediately rushed toward the smoke. He couldn't stop worrying and tried to convince himself that maybe there would be some benefit in their survival. If only he could put out the fire before his pursuers noticed him. He wanted to use the acceleration, but suddenly a chill ran down the back of his neck. He felt it. The gaze of death that had haunted him on the battlefield. Something was standing behind him and watching him. This feeling coiled around his body like a snake. And then Damien's voice was heard. He said that he was glad he fell for it. He knew at first glance that he was an interesting guy. Jan nervously looked to the side. He saw a butterfly, and the flapping of its wings now felt like an incredible typhoon. Damien said that he knew he would prove himself, and he did. His eyes did not deceive him. He appeared from the shadows and said with a smile that he was glad to meet him, and he remained silent. Lightning flashed in the sky, and a few seconds later thunder resounded. Damien noted that it seemed like a rainstorm was about to start. Or should he limit himself to just lightning? MC glanced at him nervously and thought that this couldn't be true. What was the head instructor doing here? Before they escaped, he made sure the instructor had gone to the Imperial Palace. He heard that during his visit, he was scolded so much that he was almost sent to prison. So why was he here? Had the future gone wrong? Could his actions have influenced previous events? If so, what was it? None of his actions could have affected the head instructor. His antics had created cracks that weren't there before his reincarnation. They had destroyed the future that was supposed to be his. Damien asked what he would throw out this time. A crystal mole or an electric mouse? He frowned and wondered if he had noticed that too. The instructor asked if he really thought he wouldn't be caught, but he was still impressed. He didn't think he could organize an escape in such a short time. He moved surprisingly fast. At first he was shocked, didn't understand what happened, but it immediately caught his eye. He thought that only cockroaches lived here, but among them there was such an interesting specimen. MC realized that it was a stupid act. He doesn't know how much the future has changed, but this situation can't be worse, although he is no longer sure of that. The chief instructor was nicknamed the Three Swords of the Continent, but he will get his middle name later. And now he is just the chief instructor. Seeing his menacing look, Damien grinned and said that he was so funny. He laughed and clapped his hands, exclaiming that it couldn't be better. He is thinking about how to kill him now, right? He hasn't had this much fun in a long time. Maybe he should tell him how he plans to kill him? Usually, people in such situations think about running away, but he is thinking about how to kill him. He doesn't even have words. He calmed down a little and asked him for forgiveness. He himself does not know how to stop, but he can give him a unique opportunity. His face instantly became serious and he told him to try to kill him. Then he would give him the freedom he dreamed of. Yan's eyes widened slightly and Damien smiled contentedly, thinking it was funny. As soon as he said this, he began to look at him differently. He had never met such people before. A low-level cadet was able to kill a hellish wolf and even destroy the pursuit team. He possesses prudence, courage, and endurance at a completely different level from other scum. It was as if he was born to carry out a special mission. With such progress, what kind of monster will he become later? Seeing that the cadet was about to do something, he was already anticipating his skills, but he did something he completely unexpected. MC fell to his knees and excitedly asked him for help. Damien was at a loss and didn't know what to say. Yan looked at him with tearful, frightened eyes and asked, "He's the chief instructor, right? His eyesight is terrible. He doesn't even know who is in front of him." He wasn't planning on escaping. They grabbed him and told him they'd kill him if he didn't obey them. He thought it was over because they left him alone, but then he came. Damien asked if he meant to say he was forced to escape. He confirmed it and told him that number 12 had orchestrated the escape, and he'd been cursing him for days. Damien wondered if he really thought he'd fall for this charade. MC's voice trembled. He burst into tears and started playing on his pity, but he immediately realized it was a ploy. Right after that, a knife flew at him. He deftly caught it and asked if he decided to play a trick while he was off guard. What a disappointment. But as soon as he blinked, a second knife appeared right next to his eye. He barely managed to dodge. The knife flew past, leaving a cut on his cheek, and he wondered if he'd thrown two knives in the same trajectory. He didn't expect this little rat to use such a trick. Looking back, he saw that he was nowhere to be found and asked, did he escape? So this was his plan? Suddenly, Yan appeared right above him and said that this was what he was really trying to achieve. The instructor immediately looked at him with annoyance, not understanding when he had managed to do that. And MC used the 15th form of elusive shadow summoning, and struck. There was a flash. Yan retreated because his opponent had parried the attack, and he hadn't expected that. A cut appeared on his shoulder. He glanced at the tentacles of black fog and thought, did this idiot hide behind this? He didn't waste any time and rushed to attack, and the black fog swirled and began throwing thickened chunks of darkness at him. MC deftly avoided every blow, but if it continued to pursue him, he wouldn't be able to escape. So he took out his dagger, ran his palm over the blade, empowering it, and used the first shadow form technique, Fifth Sense, Secret Technique, and Darkness Absorption. A few quick swings and the fog was gone, but his dagger gave way. Damien said he'd promised to let him go if he won, but he wouldn't keep his word because he didn't want to lose such an interesting toy. He emerged from the fog and exclaimed with delight that it was unique. Even if he were forced to play with it for the rest of his life, he'd never get tired of it. Yan mentally noted that it felt like he'd been bitten by a rabid dog, and then he saw something that surprised him. There was a mark on the instructor's shoulder. He'd seen it before. 22 hours before the escape, the cadet barracks called Mass Grave. Lights out had just been announced. MC was sitting on the bed, thinking that everything was ready for the escape. This was his last night in this hole. He couldn't wait to get out of here and return to his family. He knows nothing about his family. All he has is an old medallion. They will be together soon. He wants to live peacefully with his family. He did something, and the inside of the glass lid cracked and a piece broke off. He cursed, since this medallion was his only clue, but quickly noticed that there was something behind the glass. He picked at the lid and saw an unusual pattern, and the thought immediately occurred to him that it could be his family's coat of arms. The drawing was engraved on the back of the medallion. But why? It was as if they were trying to hide it. If his family has a coat of arms, then he is not from a family of commoners and slaves. This is great. Now he has more leads. If he can find someone familiar with this symbol, he can find his relatives. That's what he thought, until he saw this sign on the instructor's body. Why does he have his family's coat of arms on his shoulder? Damien pulled off his torn shirt and asked why he stopped. Had he really given up? Yan ignored him, lost in thought. He saw a familiar pattern in the most unexpected place. Could the instructor really be his family member? That couldn't be right. Damien noticed there was no reaction from him, even though the fun was in full swing. Apparently, there was no choice. These words tore Yan from his thoughts, and the instructor suddenly appeared right in front of him, saying that he would die right now. He reacted quickly and jumped and kicked him in the head, but missed. The instructor blocked his kick with his hand and said that it was powerful. Where did he learn his techniques? He also wanted to show him something. After that, tentacles grew from his shadow and hardened, turning into daggers. After that, several more such daggers grew from the ground, and MC began to dodge, miraculously avoiding being hit. He retreated to a safe distance and thought the instructor was just having fun, otherwise he would never have withstood the attack of the black dagger. Perhaps he could slip away when he was least vigilant, but then he wouldn't know why he had his symbol on his body. He must find out everything he can about his relatives. Perhaps this idiot has some connection to his family. A powerful uprising is soon to begin on the continent. It will be called the Armenia Rebellion, and will lead to the destruction of more than 10 kingdoms. Many aristocratic families will be exterminated. The Armenia Rebellion will leave an indelible mark. The entire imperial family will be in great danger, but the ruler will suppress this huge rebellion with his great sword. He executed the instigators of the rebellion and their relatives, and then incinerated everyone else. The fire did not die out for almost a month, which is why that time was nicknamed the 20-day sunset. The main instigator of the rebellion was the bastard son of the previous emperor. Rumors abounded about the reasons for the failed revolution, but no one ever knew the truth because all records of those events had been destroyed. However, everyone who remembered the rebel called him the Three Swords of the Continent, although he was better known as the chief instructor of the Special Forces Training Center. Damien approached him and said with a smile that he saw that he wasn't with him, but seemed lost in thought. Jan thought that if his family was somehow connected to the chief instructor and the Armenian rebellion, then his relatives could die in the coming uprising. He had to stop this. The escape plan should be postponed. He would have to stay at the center and gain the instructor's trust. He had to believe that he was needed, and he knew that he would help him. He said that he was amazed by his skill. He didn't expect that the instructor would personally pursue him. Damien happily said he was pleased to hear that, but when MC said that the leader of the special squad was probably grateful for his hard work, a hint of displeasure flashed across his face. Before Jan could finish speaking, Damien grabbed him by the head and rushed forward, then threw him with all his might against a tree trunk and exclaimed in irritation that this was such a funny joke. There was a loud crash, and MC flew several meters, cutting down all the trees in his path with his body. When he finally stopped, he coughed and tried to compose himself. Then the instructor approached him and lifted him by the clothes, saying that he thought he was nice, but he clearly didn't know how to watch his mouth. Did he really want to part with his life like that? He responded by saying that even his impudent tongue could sometimes say useful things, and Damien gave him the opportunity. When Jan said that he knew the captain's weakness, which could kill him, his gaze immediately changed. He called him an idiot and exclaimed, "How could he know such a thing?" He said with a smirk that Simon's County number 52 was his weak spot, and the instructor asked in surprise, "Is that true?" A few hours later at the training center, Damien changed his clothes and noticed with annoyance that the clothes were a little small. He never thought he would have to ruin his favorite uniform, but nothing could be done. His subordinate asked what to do with the three he mentioned, and he told him to just throw them in a mass grave. He didn't want to worry about some bugs. Damien wanted to say something else, but a man appeared in his way and said that he was pretending to be the busiest. Let him just look at himself. He has too much free time. At one look at him, the head instructor was overcome with anger, but he restrained himself. The man asked, "Is he just lazy? Let him explain." Damien smiled and inquired why Captain Meyer himself had come here unannounced. It was Rodrigo Meyer, captain of the special squad, first rank. Rodrigo asked him to tell him how training was going lately, and he dryly replied that they were working as hard as they could. The captain said he had heard otherwise, and he responded that he had heard that their cadets were superior in skill to the squad members. Rodrigo said that was a lie. Graduates of the center possessed monstrous abilities. Damien asked if it was the squad members' fault. The one under whose command they were should be punished. The captain thanked him for the advice. He would take it into account. The instructor's subordinate felt mana begin to vibrate in the air, and this began to affect the surroundings. He thought it was incredible. Untrained people usually fainted. Rodrigo said he had heard that he had failed to report to the palace by imperial decree. He replied that he had more important things to do and didn't want to waste time on pretentious meetings. The captain asked what could be more important than fulfilling the decree of His Majesty the Emperor. He thought the blue blood coursing through his veins would help him survive. These words angered the instructor, and the captain asked, "He didn't show up for the meeting because the cadets had escaped from the center, right? He couldn't even handle them." He interrupted him and said he'd misunderstood. There had been no escapees. He walked past him, and Rodrigo, confused, said that it could be him. He'd heard him clearly. He asked in response, maybe his hearing was impaired by old age. The cadets went outside, accompanied by their instructors, to prepare for the exam. By the way, there are so many cockroaches now. Did he notice? He turned around and asked what he meant, and he said that if he sees a bug in the center, he immediately crushes it with his boot. But it's so annoying that no matter how many you kill, they still come back. But it seems he managed to find a cockroach nest, so he will destroy all the larvae. He said goodbye to him and left, and then told his subordinate with a smile that he managed to calm his feelings at the sight of the captain's confused look. The old man needs to start organizing his own funeral. Everything he told him is 100% true, right? He took off his mask and told him that he shouldn't worry. He doesn't lie to his allies. He will soon be convinced of that. All the information he gave is true. That's how MC returned to the training center. Simon's County, abandoned street number 592. Jan lived there as a child. It's a place where there are almost no people. He ran to his friend's house and asked her to open the window. He wanted to show her something interesting. He caught such a big rat. It was so cute. When he didn't hear an answer, he asked, "Isn't she home?" He was about to leave, but the window opened and the girl asked, "Is he completely stupid? Who would want to look at a rat anyway? He should have brought a squirrel instead." This street was completely unsuitable for children, but that's where the captain's daughter lived. When he told the instructor about this, he didn't seem to be particularly impressed. He told him that there weren't many children on that street, so everyone knew each other. Damien summed it up. The girl he played with as a child turned out to be the captain's daughter. What luck. MC realized that the head instructor didn't believe him, The lie was too implausible. He had to make him believe there was a hostile relationship between the captain of the special forces and the head instructor. The instructor was combing every inch of the county in search of the captain's weak spot. But so far the search had been unsuccessful. His reaction to his words proves it. He must use the information. Damien asked, even if he knows where his daughter lives, why does he think it is his weak spot? He answered that he personally heard it. When he met with that girl again, she told him that she would soon leave here. Bad people want to harm her dad. That's why they are looking for her to blackmail her. Her dad said that they better leave here. And a few days later, she disappeared, accompanied by people dressed in black. Only when he got there, he realized that they were soldiers of a special unit. And her father is the captain of the unit. After listening to him, Damien smirked and said that it was incredible how well everything was working out. It turned out that he was friends with the captain's daughter. Then he found out that there was a strained relationship between him and the captain, and that he was looking for his weak spot, and he knew exactly where this weak spot was. Are such amazing coincidences possible? Yan noticed that he was under the protection of the goddess of luck, and he immediately threw something at him. He dodged, and the thing hit the wall behind him, but left a cut on his face, and the instructor said that instead of thinking that all this was a lucky coincidence, he would rather consider him a spy for the captain. Don't you think that would be more logical? MC wiped away the blood and said that it was natural that he thought so. The coincidence really was incredible. 1 piece, 2 pieces, he collected them to survive. His childhood memories, the captain's relationship with his family members, the hierarchy within the Special Forces unit, even their feud. He thought about what information was worth saving so that it would benefit him. He put the memories and the information he received together in his head like a puzzle for the sake of his own survival. If he was the captain's spy, as he said, he wouldn't risk his life to escape. He saved his knowledge in case the escape plan failed. He thought about his words and thought that he would mix truth with lies, so that he would experience both hope and disappointment. In the chief instructor's heart, the scales of faith will be balanced against the scales of doubt, so that faith will ultimately prevail. He declared that he knew where his daughter was, and his gaze immediately changed. He would prove to him that it was more profitable to trust him. He would have no choice but to tip the scales in his favor. Damien rose from the table and went to the window, nervously wondering if the scales had tipped. The instructor asked, so, the goddess of fortune really does favor him? Jan had succeeded, and he answered that it was true, and he was like a talisman bringing good luck. Damien told him to stop chatting. He would close his eyes to what had happened today. He ordered him to go back and be silent, and he headed for the exit, thinking that the test had been passed. He didn't believe every word he said, but this would do. He wouldn't rush things. He said goodbye to him, wishing him a good rest, and when he left the office, Damien glanced at his file and thought that he only had number 974. Were the instructors really that blind? Either the evaluation system had failed or something else. And then, he noticed something interesting in his file that made him smile. A week later, Blade Ridge. The first exam for the Special Squad cadets began. The Emperor forbade entry to this territory, as a wide variety of monsters inhabited it, making the ridge incredibly dangerous, and one of them was a swamp goblin. The monster attacked a group of cadets, and one of them quickly dealt with it. Seeing how easily it died, the boy joyfully exclaimed that he knew they could handle it. The swordsman sighed with relief, and the shield wielder said that there was nothing special on Blade Ridge. The swordsman told them to be quiet. There were still monsters here. One of his comrades told him to forget about them. They had cleared the area of monsters. They had also said that to pass the exam, they needed to hold out in the mountains for a week. At this rate, they would definitely succeed. The swordsman asked him again to be quiet. But this time, he raised his voice, and the boy apologized. The swordsman asked if he was so happy that he had forgotten about the other conditions for passing the exam. They needed to kill monsters and collect mana stones. Even if they managed to survive, their results would depend on the number of stones they collected. Only if they had more than they did now, if they could get past the cadets from the 4 great families. He turned to them and told them to slow down. They needed to remain vigilant, then their skills would be enough to survive. Before he could finish, the monster grabbed his head and spun it sharply. Cadet number 320 was eliminated. Seeing this, the others froze in horror. They didn't even notice the giant monster appear. The monster shook their comrade's body in the air, mocking them. It was a great golden ogre, a subspecies of ogre possessing invisibility magic, capable of sneaking up on its prey undetected. Suddenly, it waved its hand, knocking the cadets off their feet with their comrade's body, and from such a powerful blow, they died instantly. Watching this through a crystal ball, Damien laughed and called them trash. 30 cadets had already died. Let them be more careful, as they were tired of picking up their bodies. Now, let them move. Every 5 minutes they will send 50 cadets through the warp gate. Everyone lined up in front of the portal, and MC thought, eventually, he will get to those terrible places. The chief instructor was in a good mood. He probably already ordered his bloodhounds to search the place he named. They will be able to find some traces, but they will not find anything worthwhile. To get even closer to the head instructor, he needs to achieve excellent results on the exam. Therefore, he will have to work on his body. Because he has only half mastered the Divine Dragon's Breath, there is a limit to his possible progress. Being on the ridge isn't so bad. It's an opportunity he must seize. There are 2 treasures in the mountains that no one has yet discovered, and if he can obtain them, he will become stronger and faster. Something began to happen above. One of the instructors relayed a message to the head instructor, and he exclaimed in surprise, "Is this true? Yan wondered what was going on as he looked confused. After that, the instructor stepped aside, as if making way for someone, and knelt with the others, telling the cadets to greet the sole ruler of the Kavalan Empire, the legitimate heir to His Majesty the Emperor. Leon stepped forward, and MC's eyes widened in surprise. If his memory serves him correctly, 500 cadets died during the exam, but nothing special happened then. However, it seems that something unusual has happened now. Why is the Crown Prince here? Yan couldn't forget this. He was the last person he saw before his death, the face of a monster for whom his life was just a toy. Leon greeted all the cadets and introduced himself to them, and they bowed in respect. MC also had to bow. He thought he would never regret anything again, but when he sees his face, rage boils up within him. Leon said that as Crown Prince, he declares with confidence and asks them to speak without fear. Those who want to get out of this hellish place right now should raise their hands. He swears on his name that he will ensure their safety. Let everyone who was forcibly brought here tell him about it. He promises to free them all. Yan was shocked and thought, what kind of nonsense is he talking about? Is this really the Crown Prince he knows? In the past, he was completely different. One day, he came to report to him that the 4th Special Squad had just invaded enemy territory. Leon asked, what was the outcome? He answered that everything was successful. The information that the Mana Stone mine had been burned down was confirmed. Leon said that they had done a good job, and he said that they would send reinforcements to ensure a successful retreat. Leon asked why, and he answered that the invading squad was too small. Their forces were not enough for a safe retreat. There was no guarantee that they would be able to return alive on their own. Leon told them to do nothing in that case, let them sacrifice their lives to destroy even more enemies. MC objected. They couldn't abandon their warriors fighting for the future of the Empire. Leon said that the whole world is chess. Slaves, citizens of the Empire, knights, aristocrats, they all exist only for the Emperor. Hundreds and thousands of people die for the sake of a single ruler. That's how an ideal world works. And in his opinion, there is nothing more honorable than dying for one's emperor. At the moment, he nervously pursed his lips and mentally called him a vile idiot, but he remembered perfectly well what he really was. Leon said that some children of nobles entered this place to gain power. He advises them to go home unless they want to face the consequences when he takes the throne. One of the cadets asked in surprise, is that true? The guy next to him answered him that it was unlikely, and he said that these were the words of the Crown Prince himself. Yan wondered if this was the same person, and how could he have changed so much? Damien turned to His Highness and noticed that the cadets were shocked by his words, and he asked with displeasure why he was treating them so inhumanely. He told him that a special squad existed to ensure the protection of the Emperor, and he exclaimed that this was all complete nonsense. The Emperor should protect his people himself. The crown won't last long on the ruler's head if he condemns to death those he's supposed to protect. What good is power then? He can't allow lawlessness to flourish. This disgusting place will be destroyed. The instructor noted that, after all, this place was created by the Emperor's will. Everything here is conducted according to the law. The prince waved his hand and asked, in that case, had any of the cadets agreed to take this exam? If even one was found, he would retreat. A few seconds passed, no one raised their hand, and everyone began whispering, while the chief instructor silently called the prince a stupid populist. But one was still found. MC stood up, as he couldn't allow the exam to be cancelled. He addressed His Highness and said that he was cadet number 974 and that he wanted to take the exam. Leon thought the number sounded familiar and said that, as far as he knew, low-ranking cadets were treated unfairly. Didn't he want to get out of this place? He replied that, as he had said, they were treated poorly. But they were equal in one thing, regardless of rank, the evaluation of their skills through which they rose in the hierarchy. He wanted to pass the exam because he had something to strive for. After listening to him, the prince turned to the chief instructor and said that he didn't deserve this cadet. He wouldn't go back on his word, so they would continue the exam, but he would personally oversee what was happening. After that, he stepped into the background and Damien loudly told the cadets to look at how generous the Crown Prince was and to do everything to repay him for his kindness. The instructors below continued their work and told everyone to listen carefully. They would now explain the warp gate's operation. They would pass through the gate and be teleported to the mountain range. After that, their location would be determined. Sometimes, due to errors, some cadets' bodies would split during teleportation, but they didn't need to worry about that. It was Jan's turn. He stood on the magic circle and the countdown began. He thought that in his past life, Leon had never come to the training center, but now everything was completely different. Had his actions really affected him too? If that wasn't the reason, then what happened to Leon? The countdown ended, and he was teleported. Once he arrived, he first checked his body to see if any of his limbs had been torn off. After that, he looked around and wondered if he had been thrown into some wasteland. First, he needed to find something he could use as a weapon. He smelled a familiar scent and immediately realized he was in the Valley of the Winds. He hadn't smelled that stench of sulfur mixed with demonic energy for a long time. Suspicious sounds were heard behind him, and some kind of monster pounced on him. Meanwhile, a group of cadets was attacked by a cockatoo griffin. They immediately started running, knowing they couldn't handle it. The griffin screamed and suddenly blood spurted from its head. Lorena cut the monster with her sword, saving the cadets. They all thanked her. If not for her, they would have died. She said that she saw many wounded among them. Are there only low-ranking cadets in their squad? Their leader confirmed it. They mostly have 700 numbers. Many of them were injured. They were planning to get out of there, but those monsters attacked. Will she let them follow her at least until they exit the valley? She told him that she didn't care, and he excitedly thanked her. All her thoughts were now occupied with Yan. She kept wondering where he was. She wouldn't believe that he was already out. He remained confident, even in the presence of the crown prince. Why did he even do that? Cruel distracted her from her thoughts. He approached her and noted that the princess was making stupid decisions again. Was she really going to hang around here with these lower ranks? Had she decided to set herself up? These idiots aren't even good enough as a human shield. Or had she decided to become their nanny? Did she think her pity would help them? She ordered him to watch his language. You can't judge a person by their number alone. He said that it seemed like another cadet would get the first place after the exam, to which she replied that if he only thought about numbers, he would miss something important. Kasha approached them and said that they apparently had a lot of free time since they were here sorting things out. She told Cruel that he was too short-sighted. They received individual grades for the exam, but they didn't have to compete with each other. He asked if she wanted to hang around with these slugs too. She answered him that the larger the squad, the better he would handle crisis situations. She promised them that she would help them pass the test. Moreover, they, as aristocrats, should take leadership over commoners. He smirked and asked, since when is a family of traitors among the aristocrats? She wants to lead commoners? Then what has the Everain family done to the people? She should be more careful. It will be sad to see the last of the Everain line on the guillotine. These words hurt her, but she didn't show it and thanked him with a smile for his concern. Apparently, she was too fixated on recreating her family. At moments like these, she really envied him, because his two older brothers were responsible for their family, not him, and he didn't have to burden his head with complex thoughts. He got angry and wanted to hit her, but Lorena grabbed his wrist. Kasha looked at him with a confident smile, and he cursed and tried to reach her, but Lorena was stronger. She sternly ordered him to calm down, and he, gritting his teeth in irritation, threw her hands away and left, saying that they were so worthless. He thought that it would be worse for him if he continued to hang out with them. He remembered a moment from childhood, how he was told not to ask for anything and not to think about anything, to live as if he were dead. He cursed because he didn't think he would ever remember that day again, and then he noticed drops of blood under his feet that led to the very rocks. He smelled it and noticed that the blood was fresh. Could this really be a monster's lair? They would have problems if there were many creatures here. He needed to hide and assess the situation. He carefully peered out from the shelter and saw a cadet below surrounded by dead goblins and thought, was it he who killed them all? And his eyes widened in surprise when he saw that this cadet was eating goblin hearts. Some time ago, MC thought that there were 2 artifacts in the Blade Mountains. He had to get them for his plan to work. He was about to set off, but a red goblin attacked him. He quickly dealt with him with Dragon Flame. His body burned, and he took the heart. But he wasn't alone. A whole crowd of goblins had gathered around him, and he remarked on his luck. He leaped at the monsters and said it was amazing how his first target had leaped into his arms. Mana stones are a reward for defeating monsters. Previously, they were used only as raw material for creating magical items, but one day, an event occurred that redefined the value of these stones. Professor Isaac published a scientific paper at the Academy. The mage Isaac wrote, when using mana stones, it is possible to absorb monsters' abilities as well as their mana. This explains the endurance of orcs, the regeneration of trolls, and the physical strength of ogres. Of course, this work caused an outcry in scientific circles. Everyone said it was nonsense, and that the use of mana by humans and monsters differed greatly. Then Dean Neuron asked Professor Isaac to prove it, threatening to fire him, but he successfully proved his thesis. When the professor's statement was confirmed, mana users across the continent were alarmed. Monsters are now easier to find in pharmacies than in dungeons. Question: is it difficult to absorb mana crystals? Extracting poison from them is quite difficult. It requires moon beetle juice and lava stones. But normal mana absorption is very simple. You just need to eat the stones. And that's exactly what Jan was doing now. He bit off a piece of flesh with the crystals and said he never thought he'd have to do that again. He still can't stand the taste. You need to absorb the stone, which has a 2-to-1 ratio to the monster's heart. But then he'd have to absorb the monster's poison. To absorb the stone's mana, you have to be prepared for death. Nausea rose in his throat, and he immediately covered his mouth with his hand, thinking that the poison was eating away at him from the inside. He could neutralize it with his dragon breathing technique. He used the technique and immediately felt relief. It seemed it would take longer than he thought. He couldn't rush. Suddenly, Cruel attacked him. He hit him with all his might, slamming him into the ground. He said with a smirk that he didn't think he'd meet a cadet with such a low level here. But he couldn't defeat him. He would take the mana for himself, but when he saw that there was no one under his foot, he became confused. An MC, standing nearby, said that in the Blade Mountains, there was someone more dangerous than monsters. He was talking about scumbags like him. Cruel remarked that he was lucky to escape his blow. He had heard of the existence of savages who devoured monsters, but this looked more terrible than he imagined. He was worthless, and he would beat him to death, but if he sincerely begged, he would spare him. Well, when will he start begging? Or maybe he'll give him all the mana stones he's mined, and then he'll show him how merciful aristocrats can be. He calmly replied that he didn't have any, and ordered him not to lie. He was going to take pity on him, but he was too stupid. There's no one here, and no one will even know he killed such a small fry. If he wants to live, he must give him the crystals. Yan suddenly realized this was a perfect opportunity and grinned, saying he was right. After all, there's no one here. Cruel said he respected his choice, but he couldn't let out a squeal of pain. Before he could finish speaking, Yan's fist struck him in the stomach. Cruel was supposed to be the next owner of the mansion. Even at 12, he understood that most of the world was populated by scum, and that he was the heir was a given. However, 2 idiots stood over him, afraid that he would become the head of their line. Under the guise of caring for his education, they sent him to a special warrior training center and dumped him in a stinking garbage dump. He will never forgive them for that. Cruel Dwight, the true heir of the Dwight family, towers above the rest of the scum, and he swore that as soon as he got out of there, he would burn those scum to the ground. But now that heir has been struck down by one of those scum, they went to the Snake Gorge. It's the only way under the rocks, and they called it the Snake Gorge because it resembles a snake. They say that no living creature dares to go there. No one has ever managed to reach the end of the gorge. Cruel whined and cursed him the whole way, dragging a bag with goblin bodies behind him. He asked how he had the nerve to treat him like this. He didn't know what he was going to do, but he wouldn't succeed with him, because he was the true heir of the Dwight family. MC pulled on the leash and told him to shut up and move faster. And why was he blabbering about his family? How much longer was he going to whine about being the heir to the Earl's family? They had a long way to go, so let him move. He indignantly told him to pull the bag himself then. Why was he making him do this? He told him that it was his own fault. This is still too simple a punishment for the idiot trying to kill him. He exclaimed, "What does this mean? What is he going to do with all these goblins?" Yan asked him to shut up. For a skilled craftsman, he complains too much. He smiled and asked, he knows that according to the laws of the empire, he will be punished for mistreating an aristocrat, right? Or is such a barbarian not familiar with the laws? He is the heir of the count. A stone immediately flew into his face and he fell in pain, indignantly saying, it hit him in the nose. MC told him to get up faster. Don't aristocrats hurt when they get hit? Cruel almost cried in pain and thought, who is this guy? He thought that he would catch him off guard if he attacked suddenly. But after that blow, as soon as he approached him, he got a blow to the face every time. He did not expect such humiliation. He stood up and walked on, and Yan said that even if you make a mistake, but apologize properly, you can avoid getting punched in the face. Did he understand him? He remained silent and thought that he couldn't lose to him, even if he couldn't concentrate his mana flow during their battle. As soon as his mana recovered, he would immediately kill him. It seemed that MC read his thoughts and asked with a threatening look, didn't he understand him? Should he repeat it again? Cruel, furious, wanted to say that he would kill him, but quickly changed his mind and instead stated that he respected him and would like to be friends with him in the future. Yan asked, does he think he doesn't see the thoughts in his stupid head? Let him shut up if he doesn't want to crawl around like a cockroach. He fell silent and Yan glanced at him, thinking that he was an amazing guy. Although he has a thirst for life, the energy emanating from him is erratic. Only one thing can emit such energy, demonic knowledge. If there is a sorcerer who uses black magic and the power of darkness, then there are also warriors who use darkness in sword fights. They achieve success faster. However, for those who use black magic, the mind and body gradually deteriorate until the darkness completely consumes them, and then they go mad. In his past life, Cruel earned the nickname Bloodstar because he led the family only through his cruelty. Or was this due to demonic knowledge? Most likely he hasn't fully mastered it yet. Cruel asked him to wait, let him at least take off this collar. He asked, was he trying to run away? He replied that this was the only way. There was nowhere to run. He wasn't an animal, and besides it looks strange. Who leads men on a leash? Does he at least understand what people think of them? He thought for a moment and agreed with him, after which he took off the collar and said with relief that now he could at least breathe normally. He felt like he would be dragging it around with him for the rest of his life. MC said that his suffering would soon end. They were there, and he asked, where are they anyway? He walked to the cliff and looked at the palace, going deep into the abyss, and answered him that the real treasure was kept here. Or rather, it was not even a treasure, but a monster. Cruel threw the bodies of the monsters into the abyss and said that he could not believe that he made him drag these monsters here just to throw them away. He threw off the goblins as he asked, so is his work done now? Yan said that as a thank you for his hard work, he would give him some advice. He smiled nervously and told him to run away from here now and not look back. As soon as the monsters' bodies reached the bottom, a pair of glowing eyes appeared in the darkness. The bodies of monsters were lying on the floor where a black seal was drawn. It began to glow and a voice was heard. Who dared to wake him up? A loud roar was heard and Cruel screamed. Yan, what is he even doing? Yan asked. No, what is he doing? He's coming. The monster was walking towards them and ordering them to give him their souls. Kasha looked to the side and asked, Lorena, did she feel it too? She answered, yes, she felt it. Too much black magic. Kasha said, it came from the Snake Gorge. What happened there? She turned around and said, she hasn't encountered anything like this before, so she's not sure. But how strong is this magic? Lorena said, Kasha, change of plans. She went ahead and said, They must return to the gate immediately. Kasha asked again. What? Why so suddenly? Lorena waved her hand and said, Everyone, attention. We need to go to the gate immediately. Let them drop all unnecessary cargo, including mana stones. Someone asked, what about the exam? Lorena screamed, they must evacuate. Let them run. People screamed, yes sir. They are obeying. Kasha asked them to stop and asked, Lorena, what's the rush? Lorena said she recently asked her how strong this black magic is. Kasha answered yes. Lorena muttered, it's as strong as her father's. Kasha asked again, like her father? This can't be. He is the divine guardian of the north, famous for his incredible power. Is magic really as strong as him? Kasha said that no instructor at the training center could stop such a monster. It was terrifying. At the instructor's station, a guy pointed upward and asked, what is that? There was something flying there. Another guy said, stop talking nonsense. Let it move. The voice said, still not enough. More, more. The guys were killed, and the man screamed, Roman, what kind of nightmare is this? Roman asked again, how should he know? Just let it hit. Their bodies were covered in fire and a loud scream was heard. The monster ordered them to give it their souls. Cadets were running along the road, screaming, hurry. They will reach the gates very soon. Someone said, this sound. Everyone stop. Who is he? The man was walking towards them and speaking, a voice in his head. He tells them not to stop. He said in a drawn-out voice, he tells him to give up his soul. He screamed loudly, give up your soul. Kasha looked at him in surprise, when suddenly the guy died. Lorena screamed, is this an ambush? Kasha pointed her finger to the side and screamed, no, let her look there. The blood is gathering in the pattern. It's a magic seal. The voice said he found them. The cadets grabbed their heads and screamed, their head. Lorena ordered to be careful. She frowned, and the voice said, it was them. They woke him up. A thin hand reached forward, and the voice said, thanks to them. He woke up. Thank you. He will repay them for this. The ancient lich appeared before them and said, their death. The wizards were sad. Magic was endless, but human life had an end. However, greedy sorcerers found a way to comprehend all magic. They sold their souls to the darkness and gained eternity. Reincarnated as a monster that hated all living things, Lich. The cadets clutched their heads and screamed. Their head, Lorena screamed. It's not just a lich. Over the course of an eternity, it's consumed countless lives. But why did this monster show up now? At that moment, Jake, Todd, and Roman were running forward. Todd asked why they had to run so suddenly. Roman ordered him to shut up and watch his back. What is this? Jake asked, what is this? All the cadets are dead. But who did this? Roman frowned and thought, Yan. Shortly before teleporting to the Blade Mountain range, Roman approached MC and said, Yan, he didn't manage to escape either. But it's not as bad as they thought, right? Yan replied, he talks too much. Roman asked, wouldn't he like to go to the mountains with him? It was dangerous to be alone there. Yan replied, let him. He was going to go alone. But since they had so much in common, he would tell him something. Roman asked, what then? Yan frowned and said, if he thinks something terrible is coming, he needs to run through the gate immediately, and let him forget about the exam. Now Roman frowned and thought, Yan, so he planned this too. But what did he do anyway? The Lich said, pathetic mortals. They woke him from his sleep. A scream rang out. You need to forget about this gate. Let them run to the others. Number 3. They are the closest. Lorena ordered everyone to get out of here. Kasha screamed, Lorena, she must run too. She answered, no, she will stay here. She drew her sword and said, she will hold him off. Kasha, let her help the cadets escape. Kasha screamed, she can't do it alone. She too. Kasha, she must survive for the sake of her family. She turned and screamed, okay, she will do as she said. She clenched her jaw and begged Lorena to forgive her. She can't die here. The Lich said she was stupid. Does she really think she can stop him alone? A mortal? Lorena thought she had to try. She had 2 advantages. First, her sword was made of mithril, which slays the undead. Suddenly, she heard a spell, and a projectile of magical skulls appeared behind the Lich. He commanded her to die. The skulls flew towards Lorena, who used the leap of confrontation, dark ceremony, and wings of the windbird. She gripped the hilt of the sword, and threw it towards the skulls. Lorena jumped onto the slope and screamed. And secondly, she quickly attacked the Lich and screamed. Wizards cannot cast an attack spell and a defense spell at the same time. By taking advantage of this, she can win the battle. She heard the spell again, and her eyes widened questioningly. She asked, is this the seal of protection? The Lich cast a wall of defense, and Lorena asked how he managed to cast 2 spells at once. Skulls can cast magic too? This can't be. Then how many spells can these skeletons cast? An attack was aimed at her, and Lorena screamed loudly. Her sword. The skulls bound her and she screamed, a nightmare. What the hell? She screamed in irritation, you vile idiot. Let her go immediately. The Lich replied, he needed her. Only she had the courage to stand up to him. He would destroy her valiant soul. He would turn her into a corpse that would serve only him. Lorena carefully looked at the shiny stone in her opponent's forehead. At that moment, a monster stood in the lair of the ancient Lich and said, he was defenseless. This magical seal is a trap. High fire magic and a flash of storm were directed at the ceiling, and the monster said he thought that robbing the empty lair would be easy. It turned out that the monster was MC. He took off his mask and said, but he's greeted fully armed from the very door. It's good he took care of this beforehand. He threw off the volcanic armadillo shell, the skin of which is resistant to fire. It can also resist fire magic. Jan said there are about 500 magical traps here in total. But there are also 30 moving traps and more. He used the goblins to lure the Lich out of the lair. Now he needs to get the treasure. This was his original plan. but executing it won't be easy. Of course, it's entirely possible, given sufficient knowledge of the lair's structure. He knew about the Lich when he was captain. After he returned from the mission, he was given a report on it. Case number A582157, Ancient Lich. Participants, first training group of the special squad. Location, Blade Spine. Species, high-ranking monster. The total number of cadets was 1,000, with 0 wounded and 100 survivors, while 900 were killed. The losses were so great that the existence of the training center was in jeopardy. An additional report stated that the Lich, which had been dormant for a long time, awakened after drinking the blood of a cabbet who had entered its lair. The investigation revealed the location of the treasure. It was assumed that the lair was built in ancient times. It contained many mysterious treasures. There were books, and by reading just one of them, one could become a sage. Jewels and just one coin could ensure a comfortable life. MC said so, but the most important thing was missing: the Vessel of Life. This is a magical egg that stored the Lich's life force and mana. The Vessel of Life, lost in his past life, should still be here now. The surviving half of the Imperial Scroll stated that it is possible to accept the vessel's contents, but it is impossible to absorb its full potential. However, the scroll didn't say that by obtaining the life vessel, the mana stones would grant much greater power, and then it would be entirely feasible. He would be able to comprehend the divine dragon's breath. Jan grinned and said, taking this opportunity, he would be able to surpass his previous level. He stopped and said, he's here, the lower floor of the lair. The ancient Lich's altar should be here. He'll take a look, according to the report. Well, shall he try it? He tried to enter the hall but was suddenly thrown back. He screamed and a seal appeared on the door. MC frowned and said, it said the gate was guarded. That's the thing. Even before he reached the gate, it noticed him. Is it a disembodied ghost? Then it's not that simple. A magic seal, Facelock said. The face wasn't recognized. The correct face. It evaporated. And MC said, there's one way. The place described in the report was somewhere around here. He found it. He pressed the wall and the doors started opening. Jan said, this is a secret passage created for moving slaves. Supplemental report number 2 said that it is believed that in the past, the lair housed many slaves. A passage was discovered. MC said, this labyrinth is stuffed with primitive traps. It will take him time to overcome it. But as the captain of a special squad, nothing can stop him. Besides, he has plenty of time for this. And the more time, the greater the reward. At that moment, the skeleton reached forward, and Lorena screamed, what could such a rotten skeleton do, which reeked of rot? The Lich laughed and said that he was really looking forward to seeing the torment of her soul. He would rip her head off and make it his pet. Or maybe he should transplant it onto the body of an orc? Or maybe just make her a zombie that devours people? Will she still be as insolent then? The Lich extended his tentacles towards her and ordered her to forget about chatter. She was finished. He attacked her and laughed. Lorena screamed, does he think he can intimidate her? So far it hasn't worked. The Lich screamed, insolent wretch. He will not leave a single piece of her flesh. He will turn her into dust. The Lich released the magic of dark destruction, dark fracture, and his eyes widened. Lorena looked at him questioningly and wondered why he stopped the attack. The Lich said, it's a strange feeling, isn't it? The barrier on the altar was destroyed. Who got into his lair? She was just bait. He squeezed the tentacles on her neck and said, so it was planned. While he was distracted, some rat got into his abode. Lorena asked, what other bait? The Lich slammed her to the ground and ordered her to shut up. Vile girl. He turned around and ordered to return to the shelter. The gates need to be opened. Gate number 127-5. A black seal appeared in front of him and the Lich climbed inside and said, into the altar. Lorena sat up and asked, where is he going? Did he disappear? The Lich moved to the Lich's altar and shouted, what kind of idiot? Who dared desecrate his altar? He thought, how could he get through all the traps? He broke through the barrier that he had been creating for 1,000 years. No one but him knows the location of the altar. Who exactly could it have been? Someone from the Magic Guild? The Emperor's Knights? He looked at the floor and asked, his elixirs? Did they drink them? He spent 1,000 years perfecting them so that they would restore mana and physical strength. 1,000 years to be reborn as a human, and now all his work has gone down the drain. MC sat behind him and said, he says the extra elixirs taste very good. The Lich turned around and asked, so it was him? He was the one who broke through the protective barrier. Jan ordered him to calm down first. Calm down, come over and drink with him. He wants him to save this wonderful drink for him, a state of excessive consumption of magical power. When using a lot of magical energy, a person enters a state similar to alcoholic intoxication. MC asked if he didn't know that saving good things for later was a terrible decision. The Lich thought, not the Wizard's Guild, not the Emperor's Knights, but some drunk teenager. His barrier couldn't handle him. MC said, he sees it. He was in such a hurry to get back, and he distracted him from his fun. It was really cool for him to walk straight through the front entrance. The Lich ordered him to shut up. First, he would kill him, and then everyone outside. Did he really think he wouldn't know a rat got in here? Jan answered thoughtfully, but he didn't notice how the Lich stole a rare item from him. He walked through the tunnel. The Lich asked, was he mocking him? Then why did he break the barrier at the front entrance? MC answered, yes, that's what he meant. He just wanted to do it. Besides the elixirs, there are a lot of ancient texts here. There's even a book called Dungeon about the mana engine. Was he possessed to collect these works? The Lich laughed loudly and asked, does he know where he got this? His name is Momon. He turned into an undead for 1,000 years for revenge. He's been preparing for this for 10 centuries. And a rat like him decided to change all his plans? to take revenge on the one who betrayed him and took everything he had. He cursed himself to exist in the form of an undead. Because of him, all his grandiose plans failed. MC sipped the potion and said, yes, yes. He asked for forgiveness and to continue. Momon looked at him puzzled, and Yan said, he's too drunk. Momon stretched out his hand and said, he sees that a fool like him has too much self-importance. He cast a great flame spell and screamed, it will burn out all his arrogant blood from the inside. MC closed his eyes and ordered him to stop. Momon stopped spreading his mana and asked puzzledly, what? His mana energy? Yan smirked and said, he thinks fast. Momon screamed, you idiot. His life vessel. Yan pulled back his shirt and showed the seal on his chest, and Momon screamed, he ate this? That's it. A mana heart. He created a new heart from his life vessel? How does he even know how to do that? After a while, MC was running quickly across the bridge, when suddenly he started being bombarded with wide area fire magic and a rain of fire. Momon chased after him and screamed, worthless. Will he be able to escape his death? MC screamed, if he were him, he would just stand there. He absorbed his life vessel. If he kills him, he will die too, won't he? Momon screamed, no, he will not kill him. He will be reborn in his body. Yan turned around and asked, what did he say? Momon replied, since he destroyed what he had waited for 1,000 years, he would take away his appearance. It was a fair exchange. Besides, his body contained the power of elixirs, so he would just take it from him. MC asked, did he decide to take his body? He asked for forgiveness, but that was not in his plans. Momon screamed, nonsense. He ordered him to surrender immediately. He would handle his body with care once it became his. He used parallel chain spell and curse storm, and Yan screamed, multiple magic seals at once? He had no other choice. He released divine dragon breath and also activated mana heart. The seals broke, and Momon said he hadn't used his power for a long time. Could it be that he was still alive? MC crept up behind him and asked, is he so worried about him? He was touched. Momon turned around and screamed, idiot. He released Dark Dragon Rise and screamed, what's speed? Is this all he can do? You pathetic idiot. MC quickly ran away, smashing doors. He didn't think things would turn out like this. Mana is in constant motion in the heart, just like air in the lungs. So this is it, the true power of the divine dragon's breath, monster hearts, magic stones, and elixir. He is ready to eat anything to become stronger. Even the Lich's vessel of life. At this rate, he will soon restore his strength to the level of his past life. No, perhaps. He will become many times stronger. Suddenly he stopped near the wall and asked, is it a dead end? The door has disappeared? There was definitely an exit. How did this happen? Momon chased after him and laughed out loud. He screamed, he is like a rat choking on poison. He activated all the traps, so the doors disappeared. He has nowhere to run. What will he do now? Yan thought, given all the circumstances, he will have to kill the Lich. No, it is impossible. He has no weapons or other tools left. He is unable to resist him now. Momon screamed, he will cut off all his limbs. He activated the summoning ceremony and ordered his body to be brought to him. A huge dragon skull headed towards MC, who thought, although he can't resist the Lich. Suddenly it dissolved and a voice rang out. Is he okay? MC thought, he must have a way to defeat this madman. Leon stepped forward and said, he did well. Now let him provide it to him. He heard that an emergency happened during the exam, so he immediately came here. He didn't think that such a monster had settled here. Because of him, hundreds of cadets died. And not only cadets, but also his people. So many flowers withered before they could bloom. Leon screamed loudly, he will never forgive him. Momon looked at him silently. Yan bowed and greeted him, His Highness. Leon turned around and asked, He is that very cadet volunteer? What is he doing here? MC replied, he had rushed after the Lich alone and was stuck here. Leon said, so that's who alerted him to the monster's location. He did a great job. Let him escape as quickly as possible. Yan grinned and thought, the Crown Prince arrived just in time. Well done, Roman. Shortly before the first exam, MC said that as soon as he reached the gate, he should transmit these coordinates to the head instructor. But he needed to make sure the Crown Prince could hear it too. He would voice the coordinates to him. Momon now asked, this flesh and energy, really? How is he connected to Bahamut? Leon asked again, Bahamut? Why is he mentioning the name of the Empire's founding father? Momon cried out, the founding father. So his blood flows in him. How ridiculous he is. They are all so stupid. He laughed out loud and said, this is a special day because it reminds him of old times. He remembered the words that were said to him some time ago. How wonderful that he created the breath of the divine dragon, Momon. He did his job perfectly, but now he must die. For the breath of the divine dragon can only belong to him, Bahamut. Momon screamed. Right in front of him stands the blood descendant of his enemy. Some time ago, the wizard Momon stood in the library and cast a spell. He was curious. Stable circulation and retention of the dungeon's energy, expanding the boundaries and absorption power of the mana circle. How much power could he gain if he combined everything, making it one? To satisfy his curiosity, he began to conduct experiments on the body of his close friend Bahamut. The experiments were successful, and he was able to recreate the body with new mana. This is how the mana heart was born. Bahamut showed off his muscles, and Momon ordered him not to put on a show but simply to get dressed. Significant changes are observed in the numerical indicators. Does he feel new sensations? Bahamut replied, a pleasant feeling. If he uses this power, he will be able to create a new combat technique. Together, they created a weapon based on the mana heart. Bahamut gave it a name, the breath of the divine dragon. Momon turned away and said, these are not all the heart's capabilities. The more he studies it. Bahamut asked for forgiveness, Momon. Momon asked, what is he talking about? He looked at his hands and cried out, Bahamut? What does this mean? Bahamut said his role is over here. Momon screamed, how could he do this to him? Bahamut said, Momon, he truly was wonderful, his dear friend. Without him, he would not have been able to create either the mana heart or the breath of the divine dragon. It is time to stop. He knows too much. Because everything they created should belong only to him. How much time has passed since his best friend betrayed him? With the remnants of his magical power, he was able to hold on to his soul. By repeating the same spell, he was able to imprint its effect on his rotting body. Vengeance. The one who took everything from him, he will receive what he deserves. The one who betrayed his trust will suffer punishment. He is prepared for this for 1,000 years. Momon rushed forward and his eyes widened in surprise. He screamed, the insolent idiot. He used the parallel chain spell and shouted, he will crush him to dust. He used Curse Storm, and Leon attacked him with the secret technique of the dragon's breath and broke all the seals. He swung his sword and created the attack, Yellow Dragon River. Momon screamed, Bahamut. Even in death, he torments him. Leon ordered that you dare not speak his name, Lich. They both pushed off the floor and rushed to attack. Momon screamed, he's preventing the magic circle from activating. That means, his slaves. Let them tie his legs. Leon screamed. Does he really think he can stop him with his sorcery? Even better, since they met him here, he used the third form of Yellow Dragon Summoning and the Evil Dragon Spirit. Momon screamed, how dare he, you little brat, let him die. He used 4th tier Dark Magic, weapon enhancement spells, and Leon used the 7th form of Yellow Dragon Summoning, the 3rd form of the Dragon Sword. Momon commanded the bastard from before to disappear. He stretched out his hand and used 5th tier Annihilation Magic. Leon reached for the Noble Imperial Sword and grabbed the hilt. Their attacks coincided and a bright explosion occurred. MC looked at this and said, this is incredible. He can't believe that he can fight the Lich on equal terms. He doesn't even know which one of them is the monster. A materialized sword. Such power could only belong to a dragon. Is this a breath effect? This is a great chance to see what the Crown Prince is capable of, since he might have to fight him in the future. Of course, it won't happen anytime soon. The most important thing for him now is to find his family. Should he try to escape? Suddenly a voice came from behind him. Where is he going? Rodrigo put his hand on his shoulder and said, the fun is just beginning. Yan thought, Rodrigo Meyer, he completely forgot about him. Rodrigo said, it's strange. First, the Cabedians escaped. Now the Lich has appeared and he always ends up in the center of events. Number 974. MC turned to Captain Rodrigo. He removed his hand from his shoulder and said, Lord Captain. Yan said, yes, Lord Captain. Rodrigo skied and said, what has happened to modern education if he behaves like this with a senior officer? This isn't even drill training but basic etiquette. How do they teach young people these days? MC looked at him and thought, another grumbler. The head instructor tried to hide the fact that there was an escape, but it became known. Some time ago, Rodrigo asked, did they escape? Only 4 escaped. Cadets from numbers 10 to 900. 3 of them were caught in the nearby forest. During the search for the last one, members of the 3rd Pursuit Squad were found dead, but the location of the cadet could not be determined. Rodrigo said that the escaped kid was number 974. That is him, right? MC looked at him carefully and remained silent, and Rodrigo said that he heard that even the head instructor had to go looking for him. And how, with such a low ranking, did he manage to survive the pursuit squad and the head instructor? Now he was able to survive the battle with the ancient Lich. Will he say that he was just lucky? He doesn't think so. MC replied, it wasn't luck, it was super luck. He probably did a lot of good deeds in his past life. Rodrigo thought, this guy is joking, like he is an old man. MC said he had no chance of escape. A little more and he would have fallen victim to the Lich, but then the Crown Prince appeared and saved him. Rodrigo asked, is all this just luck? Does he think he will believe it? Yan said, but he really was very lucky. Is he really going to punish him just for luck? Rodrigo shouted, what? He thought, shameless. How dare he treat him like this? He only has the number 974, but he has enough impudence. Maybe he is the bastard of some important aristocrat? That can't be. MC asked, Sir Captain, can he help the Crown Prince? Rodrigo asked, does he want to help him? What nonsense. If he joins the battle, he will only hinder the prince. But well, there probably won't be room for anyone else. Yan thought, the Lich has lost the vessel of life, but he is still not dead. Didn't he completely absorb the vessel? If he activates the mana heart, using up the remaining power of the life vessel. Leon swung his sword and screamed. It's the end. He struck Momon and screamed. What is it, a Lich? Why is he running away? Momon ordered him to shut up and screamed. The mana output is decreasing. It feels like his magic power is being sucked out. Really? He looked towards MC, who gave him a thumbs up, and screamed. It's all because of him. This brat treats him with disdain. He won't figure anything out. Momon began to rip his clothes and screamed. He was going to take this body for himself. Leon screamed. Is this really it? Momon screamed. He doesn't need this now. He will kill them all. He showed a portal in his body, and Leon screamed. This is domain expansion. Domain expansion. This is a state in which the magic caster's hidden wish is realized in the real world. Domain expansion can only be used by the 4 heads of the strongest families in the empire, except for the emperor himself. Leon screamed, this technique. Momon ordered the descendant of Bahamut to die. Leon screamed. He decided to take everyone with him to the afterlife. You can't allow this. The heart of mana. Complete devastation. Let him have it. This is all the energy of the life vessel. Momon looked at him in surprise, and Leon screamed, rupture. He will put an end to this. He used the 5 senses of the yellow dragon phenomenon and broke his sword. Momon screamed, attempts in vain. The domain expansion technique is activated. He thinks a mere attack will stop it. Leon recovered his sword and ordered him to approach. Dragon sword. Using the 5 senses of the yellow dragon phenomenon, he attacked Momon. The Lich screamed, it's not over yet. Leon said, he's finished. Momon said, just like that, right before his eyes. It was all in vain. He had been secretly preparing a plan for 1,000 years. For thousands of years he held a grudge, and because of some little kid, everything was lost. He extended his hand and said, how so, Bahamut? If it was all for him, his life was not in vain. Why? Why did he have to do it? Momon vanished, and Leon said, it's over. A terrible creature. He definitely used the domain expansion. If the move had been performed perfectly, they would no longer exist. Leon said, he is still weak. Rodrigo stepped forward and said, he's very exhausted, His Highness. He can't believe he decided to fight him personally. As the Crown Prince, he should be. Leon ordered him to stop. It turns into grumbling. Cadet, is he still here? Is he hurt? MC said, he saved his life, His Highness. Thank you. Leon asked the captain to escort the cadet to the medical unit. Rodrigo replied, of course. Yan thought, so his plan in the Blade Mountain range came to fruition. The results exceeded expectations. With the help of the life vessel, he created a mana heart, and he managed to find out what the Crown Prince was capable of. Thank you, Momon. He did all this with its help. When they left, Momon began to regain his appearance from a small rag. After some time, MC sat in the room and said that he hadn't tried this drink in a long time. He drank it often in his past life, and he hadn't relaxed like this in a long time. It seems to him that everything that happened in the mountains happened a long time ago. And in this place, similar to a mansion, live the cadets. All aristocrats live in places like this. This castle is very different from the mass grave in which he lived. A mass grave with an area of 5 square meters is a bucket for excrement, a table, chains, and a cockroach. A mansion is 82 square meters in which there is a bed, a sofa, a shower, and even food. MC said that after all, he did well on the exam. The grades were recently announced. A while ago, the man said, first of all, he wants to thank them for their efforts. The first test was interrupted due to an emergency. But thanks to the bravery of His Highness the Crown Prince, everything was quickly resolved and they were able to complete the exams safely. They can be proud of the fact that they managed to survive. Well, he will begin announcing the scores. 1st through 10th places will receive the highest score. 11th through 10th places will receive an average score. The rest, low. Kasha looked around and said, it looks like the head instructor hasn't come. The man said that their score will determine their place of residence. Those who are awarded high scores will be granted access to the Imperial Armory. Someone asked, will they be allowed into the Imperial Armory? The Imperial Armory. Treasures, books from the founding of the Empire, and weapons are kept here. There are hundreds of the latest swords there. It is said that the library is the size of an entire fortress. The man said that those who took 1st through 10th places will be allowed on the 3rd floor, up to the 100th place on the 2nd floor. The rest will only be able to access the 1st floor. And now he will announce the results. Roman asked, only 5th place? 5th place. He was able to defeat the largest number of rare goblins in the mountain range. Cruel was in 4th place. He was able to single-handedly conquer the troll's lair. He said they were just doing them a favor, not wanting to let anyone even on the 4th and 5th floors. 3rd place, Kasha Everain. She conquered the orc village without receiving any injuries. She smiled and said, it was very easy. She didn't even get injured. 2nd place, Lorena Beowulf. She defeated a golden ogre single-handedly. Someone asked, shouldn't Lorena be in 1st place? The guy replied, there is no one better than Lorena. She frowned and thought, this ranking makes no sense. Her 1st place is just an illusion. After all, she couldn't cope up with a real monster. She needs to become stronger. Cruel said mockingly, how ridiculous she looks now, Princess Lorena. She said, Cruel? He turned to her and said, she was so arrogant, as if she could save everyone, but she couldn't maintain her place in the rankings? Someone asked, they say that she is the only one who could stop the Lich? This is incredible. She is simply the pride of high society. Kasha told her to ignore him. After his return from the mountains, Cruel's condition became even worse. Lorena ordered Kasha to shut up. Cruel said, but there was another interesting rumor. In fact, she didn't fight the Lich at all. She barely persuaded this pile of bones to spare her life. Lorena answered, that's right. Her skills were not enough to defeat him. Thank you for worrying about the rumors concerning her. Why shouldn't he worry about his grades? Cruel shouted, what did she say? He grinned and said, Lorena, she's a very good person, so maybe she will be able to take the place of the deceased Duke Wolf. She started to leave and turning around said, Cruel. He said, the heir to the Wolf family. Initially, her brother was supposed to be it, but after his death, the title has remained vacant. She wants it, right? It seems to him that now is the best moment for her to. No. What if she herself arranged everything so that she would have a chance? If this is true, then she is good, Lorena, she said. Then she will ask him a question too. Let him try to guess whether he will die now or not. The question is very simple, isn't it? Cruel waved his hand and shouted, okay, Lorena, let her see for herself. She is no different from him. He released mana and said he couldn't stand it when she acted like she was the only one here. Well, let him attack. He will deal with him. Suddenly, someone came up to him and grabbed him by the ear and said, he will take off his mask. Or maybe he will just stand there? Cruel screamed. Who dared? Let him stop. He will rip it off now. Let him let go. His ear. Who is he? The man asked to let him announce the student who took 1st place. It went to Yan, number 974. MC held Cruel by the ear, who shouted loudly, Yan is a savage. He took 1st place? Everyone started asking, Number 974, a cadet of such a low rank took first place? Seriously, 974? Yan? They seem to have heard of him before. Kasha asked, Yan, did he become the leader? Cruel screamed, how could someone like him achieve this? If he doesn't let him go immediately. Yan asked, then what? Cruel answered, no, he's just in pain. Lorena walked up to him and said they haven't seen each other for a long time. MC said, Miss Lorena? She said, no need to call her miss. MC replied, okay. He asked how he and Cruel met. She replied, well, they crossed paths during the exam. The man said, that concludes the announcement of the results. Yan said, he was glad she escaped without serious injuries, Lorena. She thanked him and thought, Yan? She knew he was an extraordinary person, but she couldn't believe that he made Cruel afraid of him. Besides, she felt a power in him that was ready to explode at any moment. What happened to him? She wished she could ask him a few questions, but right now she could only say one thing. She called out to him and said, Cruel has been insulting him for a long time. A moment later, Cruel shouted again, that's a lie. MC thought he got his quarters as a reward for first place. He said, sitting still with nothing to do turned out to be harder than he thought. He took a book from the Imperial Armory. He looked at the door and told him to come in. The man opened the door slightly and asked how he knew he was standing outside. He seemed to have made too much noise. Damien entered the room and asked he hadn't forgotten. Had he? There were some unresolved issues left between them. After a while, MC asked if he liked the wine. He would have prepared himself if he had known in advance that he was coming. Damien replied, it was a tolerable drink. Yan asked, even out of sight, you can't get rid of the chief instructor's aura, right? Damien said, and again a lie. How did the Crown Prince make him do this? He must have been very worried. Some time ago, Leon ordered to make sure number 974 received good treatment. Currently, Damien asked, perhaps he was another of his infatuations? MC asked again, infatuation? Damien asked, but what else could he do? Of course, he didn't want to upset the Crown Prince, but he still wanted to kill him. The report just came in. Simons County, number 52. Yan said there was nothing there. Well, that's to be expected. He screamed, but no one has lived there for several years. MC said that captain, the old fox, probably had a hand in it. He thinks he realized he was being followed and covered his tracks. If he doesn't believe him, Damien said no. He won't accuse him of lying. It doesn't matter now whether he's telling the truth or not. The point is, he's completely useless now. He quickly attacked MC with the Dark Spirit sword and cut the table in half at the same time. Yan said he doesn't think he needs to kill him. Damien wondered if he repelled that attack. MC said it was because he discovered a very important puzzle piece. He took out a book and Damien asked, puzzle? What kind of book was it? A study on energy interruption? Yan thought he got that book from the Imperial Armory. He was given access to the third floor where the main armory is, but he decided to go to the first, where a special library is. This is where the books and research papers collected by past rulers are kept. Most of the books were devoted to researching methods for subduing monsters. MC dug through the books and said, this isn't it, and that isn't it. He asked, is this it? He found a research paper on energy interruption, written by Captain Rodrigo. Energy interruption is a disease in which internal energy doesn't circulate properly. With age, a large person's energy depletes, and in most cases, they die before reaching 20 years of age. Damien opened the book and asked, so, what's the problem? Yan asked. Isn't that strange? Why would a special forces captain research energy interruption? It doesn't seem like he has such a disease, and Captain Rodrigo chose a very interesting question to study. He doesn't have energy interruption, but what if his daughter has it? Because she never had energy, she always stayed at home. This matches the symptoms. For the sake of curing his daughter, the captain continued researching this disease. He thought he hid his daughter because she was his weak spot, but things turned out to be completely different. For the sake of his daughter's treatment, the captain decided to move. Finding a good doctor is not easy at all. He was wrong from the very beginning. Damien asked, so the captain's daughter is not his weak spot? And what does he mean by that? MC replied that he wouldn't be able to keep the captain on a leash with her. Instead, he, the chief instructor, could hold the captain's very life in his hands. There is still no cure for energy interruption. To maintain health, at least in a stable state, a large number of medications are needed. He himself could not have earned so much money. There was clearly some embezzlement of budget funds involved. The ideal place for this, of course, is a special squad. And if evidence of embezzlement appears, hunting the old fox will not be difficult for them. Damien said so, but everything he said now is just a guess. Yan replied, yes, right now it's just a guess. But if this turns out to be true, they will be able to bury the captain. Besides, they have absolutely no risk. And they have every reason to investigate this matter, because embezzlement of funds is illegal. Damien closed his eyes and said, there is every reason. That's not bad. He gave the book to MC and said that he has his own man in the audit team of the Special Forces. It will not be difficult to implement the plan. And in the meantime, let him try to find out more about this disease. Yan thought, this is incredible. It seems it worked. Everything he told him is true. The captain really did steal money to pay for his daughter's treatment. This news in his past life had such a resonance that he still remembers it. Damien said, by the way, he gave up the opportunity to go to the third floor and went to the first for this book? MC asked again, give up the weapon? What's the point of a weapon if it can't help him, chief instructor? Damien answered, okay. He headed towards the exit and said, good. He will personally compensate him for this loss. From now on, his training in the basic program is over. MC asked what this means. Damien said, number 974, he is now his disciple. Yan smirked and thought, the head instructor took him as a disciple? This is a great opportunity to get closer to the instructor. However, he asked, is number 974 worthy of being his disciple? He doesn't deserve it. Damien cried out, what? But he's a very talented warrior, isn't he? who masterfully attacked him from an ambush. Yan said in the end, he still caught him. He is afraid that such an inexperienced cadet like him will only tarnish his reputation. Damien shouted, "Stop talking. No, he will become his new toy. I mean his disciple. Whatever the case, let him remember this and prepare." MC thought, good. Otherwise, he was already starting to irritate him. Now he can get even closer to him. This symbol is his family's secret. He has a chance to reveal it. Arena number 3 is a training ground accessible only to high-ranking instructors. Even cadets from noble families don't have access to this arena. After a while, a countdown began to sound in this arena. MC was doing one-arm push-ups and counting to 200. He said he needed a break. This place is so depressing because he's all alone here. He feels his body beginning to change due to the implantation of the mana heart. But these changes are happening too slowly. He will have to train for a long time until his strength matches his internal energy. He has access to the arena thanks to the head instructor. However, those around him reacted differently to his privileges. Roman was angry with him, and Kasha was happy. She began to watch him even more. He thinks the instructor was impressed that he chose the first floor of the treasury. But this book was just a trick. He was pursuing another goal. In fact, this is what he was looking for, a book about the founding of an empire. Although this looks like an ordinary history textbook will become a sensation in the future, it turns out that this was written by the founding emperor. Now he has the mana heart, but he is still unable to use the divine dragon's breath to its full extent. This breath was created by Emperor Bahamut together with Momon. He needs the power of both of them to master the technique. Now he needs the knowledge of the founding emperor. If you think about it, it's even a pity for Momon. He was robbed of what he worked so hard for and then killed. A good reason to become a vengeful creature. MC said, okay, he'll take a look. Is there anything here that can help him? He widened his eyes in surprise and asked, what? There's nothing? What is this? The other pages are also blank. But there was a rumor that the book was written by the founding emperor. He even killed Momon to become the sole wielder of the divine dragon's breath. That's probably why he didn't just write about it like that. Or else. Suddenly an energy hand appeared behind him, causing Yan to quickly turn around. He looked around and saw nothing. MC asked, what was that just now? He just felt like he was being watched. He looked at the book page and asked, what is that? There's still nothing here. He has an idea. He used a dark spirit strike and attacked the pillar. He said he tried cutting it, but he still hasn't succeeded. He's still not as good as the head instructor. Suddenly, he heard laughter and a voice. He's an idiot. Yan looked away, and the voice said, he won't be able to solve the book's mystery. MC asked him. Momon came out from around the corner and said, how long has it been since they saw each other, stupid kid? Yan shouted, Momon, how did he get here? He survived such wounds? Momon laughed and said, then he realized something. Even such pathetic bugs can become annoying if ignored for long enough, especially people like him. Momon rushed towards him and screamed, he'll kill him immediately. MC screamed, what a nightmare, Momon said. He'll kill him no matter what. Yan said, Momon. His face? A woman's face appeared on Momon and she screamed, she'll take his body for herself. Momon screamed that she would kill him at any cost. Yan tensed and clenched his teeth in anger, and Momon screamed that she would take his body for herself. The protagonist realized her face looked strange. Her appearance wouldn't fool him. Even though it looked like it, she was still just a lich. He screamed at her to die, but Momon flew past him several times. Yan realized he was mistaken and didn't understand what was happening. Could this really be a ghost or a manifestation of thoughts? Perhaps even after the transformation of the lich's vessel of life, Momon's heart remained a manifestation of her ideas. She posed no danger, because she didn't really exist. However, this began to anger him, because Momon circled around him and rejoiced. After some time, he turned to Momon and asked her to go to the afterlife. Why was she still wandering in this world, and what was happening to her appearance? She started laughing and saying it was wonderful. All this time she'd been a walking corpse, but now she'd regained the appearance of her days as a living sorceress. Yan's mana heart had given her true experience. After that, Momon asked if he really thought she'd just disappear. Now that she'd returned, she could kill every single one of them, like that guy, the descendant of Bahamut. She'd kill those who betrayed her. Yan looked into her eyes and asked if she was really getting smaller. She replied that it couldn't be helped. Her magical abilities were being used more economically. He asked again, how could she take revenge on them? She looked like she'd had plastic surgery. Momon replied that all people looked the same inside, and it was all their fault. She maintained her manifestation only thanks to the energy of his mana heart. But the connection was too weak to display her full form. She started screaming, asking why. After all the elixirs he'd drunk, his energy was so low, any mutt would be stronger than him. Yan noted that this was very rude, and thought that it didn't currently pose a direct threat to him. But he could sense a weak flow of mana being transmitted to Momon. But the fact that this path was open suggested that she could become a hindrance in the future. His opponent was one of the most powerful mages, and if she were to parasitize on his mana in the future, he would be powerless to stop it. At that moment, he turned his attention to her and said that nothing could be done about it. He was glad to meet her, and that she should see this world before she disappeared. Momon told him not to be sarcastic and called him a child. He doesn't adapt well to mana, so how could he possibly get rid of her? He was no different from a human after all. He replied that he simply needed to sever his connection with her. Momon was dumbfounded when she heard this, and he continued to say that she was simply parasitizing on his mana heart. If he reduced the flow of mana, would she be able to continue her manifestation? He told her to disappear, as her age had long since ended. She became angry and realized she had to stay alive and couldn't disappear under any circumstances. Momon yelled at him to wait, as he would regret her disappearance. At that moment, she picked up the book of Bahamut and asked, "Doesn't he want to know its secret?" There was silence, and the protagonist cut his hand until it bled and dripped drops of blood onto the empty book. He said he needed to sprinkle it with blood containing the breath of a divine dragon. But what should he do next? Momon moved her hand forward and said that if he gradually channeled mana into it, the blood would transform into letters. Yan realized it was light and darkness, the two components merging, but he wondered, what kind of nonsense is this? Momon, doesn't she understand what this means either? She replied that she didn't know what Bahamut wrote. The founding emperor couldn't have written such nonsense. At that moment, the protagonist tensed and opened his eyes in surprise. He realized the letters were starting to fly. Then the letters began to form other words. He watched tensely, shouting, "What?" A sentence of them appears on his body and gathers together into a mana heart. He exclaimed, "No, they pass by this heart and form new ones?" At that moment, he heard Momon call his little one, and he dropped the book on the floor. She asked why he suddenly dropped it. He looked silently at the floor and asked again, did he just imagine it? The letters reassembled into different words, and a new mana heart. It couldn't be just an illusion. Bahamut, so that's the great secret he hid here. He must uncover it, even though it was very dangerous. He took a few steps toward Momon and told her to follow him, because in the future he would find a way. And she asked again, what was he talking about? He said he would find a way to give her a new body, and she couldn't parasitize on him forever. They would study this matter together. When Momon realized his tactic, she rejoiced and asked, "Is this really true?" He's a good talker, so what came over him? He told her not to get too excited. She knew he wouldn't help her for no reason, right? So she shouldn't do anything weird. And she obediently answered, of course. Although in her mind she wondered if he really thought she'd help someone like him. What an idiot. Right now, she just lacks energy, but as soon as she has enough, he'll be the first to die. She watched him go with a sly smile, and when Yan turned around, he said, "It's kind of dubious, but to banish her right now." She asked again, "Why is he doing this?" They were sharing the same body now, weren't they? Yan asked. The same body? Actually, it was his body. Why would it be hers? After a while, evening fell and a bright sunset enveloped everything. The leaves began to disintegrate, and at that moment, the protagonist swung his fist, creating a bright beam of light. His muscles became toned, and he continued to fight. He penetrated these beams and fragments and continued to fight. When everything around him began to glow with a bright light, he didn't stop, continuing to engage with this light with various movements and turns. He raised his hand up, and catching his breath, stared ahead for a long moment. Opposite him was the instructor. Yan suddenly accelerated toward him, and suddenly dark magical power began to flow from the instructor. Yan tensed and frowned when he saw this, and the head instructor began to cultivate this dark magical power with his hands and raise it upward. After that, he created a magic sword in his hand, which he began to swing, preparing for battle. He looked at his opponent, and the protagonist covered his chest and face with both hands. When the instructor struck him with the sword, he was stunned, and for a moment nothing happened, until suddenly everything around him shone with a bright light. After a while, in the silence, the instructor said that this was simply incredible. He was fighting with the desire to kill him, despite his lack of power. Even he didn't know if he'd survive. Yan approached the instructor and said that he would not kill him during sparring. He hadn't yet taught him how to block attacks like that. Shouldn't he be teaching him? The instructor told him to use all his self-defense skills and use his arms, jumping higher using centrifugal force. He replied yes, but he was already jumping. He thought he really was crazy, attacking with a real sword the entire training session. That paragraph from the book on the founding of the empire had been useful. If not for that, not even a stump of trees would have remained. Momon, who was nearby, said that he clearly knew how to handle the dark dragon's breath. Yan turned around in surprise and asked, "A dark dragon?" Momon asked, "Who is this strange guy?" He didn't look like a weakling, unlike him. He asked, did she call him a small guy? She should stop wasting his mana and get out of here. Momon replied that he was the head instructor at the training center. And he asked again, head instructor? He was familiar with his energy. She should get used to it. After all, this idiot was the current emperor, which meant he would also be the imperial founder. She asked in surprise, what? A descendant of Bahamut? She wouldn't let this go. Let him pay with his death for the sins of his ancestors. The instructor couldn't understand why his shoulder suddenly hurt. Momon had started hitting him. He was saying how nice it was to relax like this, spending time with his student. He asked again, was it that easy for him? He had just seen the first form of the dark breath sword called Cowardice Killer. None of the cadets had seen the second yet. And did he know why this was happening? Because no one had survived the first. How boring it was. Number 974, or rather his student Yan. He's very curious to see how long he can hold out. Yan asked himself, hold out? Afterwards, he smiled and said he didn't know how many forms of this sword exist, but he hoped there were many. If lessons were held every day, there would be 365 forms. The instructor remarked that his audacity was even pleasant to hear, but mastering even one would require several decades. Yan replied that he didn't need to worry about how many forms he could show him, since from now on, he only needed to worry about the consequences of these lessons. After some time, their battle continued. The head instructor struggled with the protagonist, who first threw him aside, then created dark magical energy around his hand, from which which the sword appeared. With a sly smile on his face, he approached his opponent. Thus, every day, the head instructor taught him. Time passed, and after 2 years, everything changed. After some time, it was announced that the top 50 cadets would be determined based on the results of a test. The testing was practically the same as the previous one, but the one at the bottom would have to train separately. Naturally, Yan beat Lorena again. She couldn't understand. Yan had recently stopped coming to training, yet he always ranked first. How did he train? She clenched her fist in anger and asked where he was. She trained constantly with terrifying creatures, slitting their throats. She wants to win the next exam at all costs. She's currently in second place, but this time she'll definitely surpass it. At that moment, a terrifying-looking dragon monster, a worm, ranked A, began to loudly roar and meow at her. When this monster attacked Lorena, it began to roar loudly in pain and terror, and she, with agility and ease, destroyed its opponent with a single swing. She told Yan to wait, because during the next meeting, she would take her victory. 2 years later, the final test of the third arena began. The purpose of the test is sparring with the assistant instructors, and the results of this test will determine who will join the special squad. However, all the guys were discussing, when will this end? It's so boring. This whole grand event is just a formality. Lorena is a top-class cadet and ranks second overall. Most top-class cadets easily outshine assistant instructors in combat, and just a year ago, no one could beat them. But if you don't take this test, you might not be able to join the special squad. So, the cadet has no choice but to be here. Yan, he has no choice but to come to this test, and she will personally test his abilities. Let him come here quickly, Yan. At that moment, she paused, stopped, and looked away. Someone shouted that the test was over. The trainee had received his assessment and should return to his seat. At that moment, a bright beam of light appeared in front of the boy, and someone shouted at him to fight for real. Did he really think that saying, stop, in real life would stop the fight? It was cruel. A top-class cadet ranked third overall. He was shouting that in real life, it would only end with the death of the enemy. Was he having fun this whole time? Or does he think his assistant instructor uniform allows them to treat an aristocrat so rudely? He swung his arm, and the instructor suddenly yelled at him to stop. Lorena understood that this was just a game for him, and it was disgusting. He was simply crazy, and even now, he was acting like an idiot. Everyone around him was discussing his behavior and confirming that it was very rude. Roman commented that this cruel, when the head instructor stopped coming to training, started acting like the whole world belonged to him. Casa said she also felt sorry for the assistant, and of course he got cruel, and let Roman please help him, because she really felt sorry for him. Roman asked again, did she feel sorry for him? And how many low-level cadets did the instructors kill? Everyone fights for themselves. She turned to Lorena and said that Roman seemed to have chickened out. Lorena thought the two were a good match, and Roman asked with surprise, what? He chickened out? At first, he didn't think he was that crazy, even though he had a bad temper, but he recently killed the instructor's assistant and completely lost it 2 years ago. Why isn't anyone doing anything about this mad dog? This psycho is from an influential family, and Roman also avoids him. He asks again, what, is he avoiding him? He just doesn't touch him, and doesn't want to get his hands dirty. Casa confirmed that this means he's avoiding him. Lorena remained unconvinced. The training will end soon anyway, and no one wants to cross the Dwight family. At that moment, the instructor's sword broke in two and he fell to the ground. Cruel screamed that he couldn't even fight back without a weapon. Even though he called himself the instructor's assistant, he screamed no, and at that moment, Lorena closed her eyes and froze everything. When all the action stopped, the instructor didn't understand what it was. Cruel straightened up and asked, is that an ice axe? In any case, she didn't want to cause a stir, but it was unbearable to watch. He saw Lorena and asked if she was messing with his family. His sword was the family talent, the wolf ice sword. Lorena told him not to attack her or even try to utter a word. He laughed and said he wanted to finish her off before graduation and that the right moment had finally arrived. Lorena called him a goat, and in her mind, Cruel said, Lady Lorena, this is the last test of her life. He smiled, looking into her face and baring his sharp fangs. Lorena replied that he always chose only easy opponents. Maybe he'll fight someone stronger than himself at least once? He laughed and said that their lady always spoke with such nobility, and Lorena thought that his fighting spirit was growing stronger. He said he wanted to see that noble face contort with shame. Lady Lorena. And a moment later, their battle began. A strong wind and a bright beam of light appeared on the battlefield, engulfing everything. They grabbed their swords and began to fight. Lorena attacked first, gritting her teeth as she shouted that if he needed a sword so much, he should just say so. He shouted that he could handle such a cur in hand-to-hand combat. They began to wrestle, and Roman, watching, thought it was already clear who the winner was. Casa asked, does he understand? But they were not inferior. He remarked that Lorena was slightly ahead. After 30 Cruel's attack, it would be difficult to keep up. Casa replied that she was glad about that, but strange energy periodically emanated from him. He was a member of the Dwight family and had never used the secret of the Special Squad's dark technique, and if he decided to use this, the outcome would be disastrous. Besides, unlike Lorena, he fought for real. Roman addressed her by name and asked what she could possibly know, being in 5th place. He grabbed her head to pet her, and she asked, what? He's been ranked 3rd for the last couple of years. Doesn't he know that the top 3 are called the Heavenly 3? He's just focusing on more important things. He replied that he knew and asked, so what was she focusing on? She created a private squad of 80 people made up of commoners and the children of aristocrats from the border regions, didn't she? It looked more like an idol fan club than a military squad, and apparently she was busy recruiting aristocrats. She asked again, but he was busy too. Wasn't he, Roman? He also created a squad of slaves and cadets from other cities. That's 56 soldiers, 7 groups of 8 people. They could be carrying out some kind of mission right now, right? For example, they could be organizing an escape. Roman got close to her face and said that she was too interested in other people. Casa chuckled and asked again, but it seems like he's too interested in her, doesn't he? At that moment, they heard a loud scream, and Roman said that he thought so, that it looked like the match was over. Lorena pressed a sharp sword to Cruel's throat, and they spoke. Thank God. He told her. Lorena, but Lorena asked if it was over, or if he wanted to do it again. If he continued to rely solely on his own strength, then let defeat await. He should learn to be humble and not disgrace himself again. Did he understand everything? He was angry with defeat. And at that moment, a shadow appeared next to him and asked, is he going to endure this again? He was dumbfounded, and the shadow continued to say that he was poor. Cruel. He always loses. His own is always taken from him. He is always above her and always gives away his own, and in the future, nothing will change. If he had fought and killed, this would not have happened. Let him remember that it was all his. The mansion, the place of air, the love of his father. How pathetic he is, Cruel. If he fights and kills, he will have everything. The mansion, the place of air, and the love of his father. All of this could have been his. He replied that it was true, that if he were the one killing, it would all be his. At that moment, he became angry, and his eyes turned bloodshot. He smirked and asked, is she really that confident, lady? Lorena asked again. What is he talking about? He replied that he was talking about how she could kill him. At that moment, he plunged the sword into his own throat, and Lorena didn't understand what he was doing. He said he'd rather die than lose. She put the sword aside and screamed, he's crazy, what is he doing? And he had to stop right now. He replied that he had thought so, and at that moment, his shadow headed straight for Lorena. She wasn't ready for it. At that moment, he grabbed her and began to attack. Her blood spilled, and he screamed at her to die. Now, as he lunged at her, a multitude of shards of dark magic flew everywhere. He watched her with thirst and asked the magical creature that appeared in front of him, who was he? Who dared to stop him? Was that a wolf? Where did it come from? And what the hell was going on? The wolf said that it had returned. It was a black wolf. Cruel realized that the voice sounded familiar. Could this be the same creature? At that moment, Lorena was in the arms of this guy, and it turned out to be the protagonist, Jan, who saved her and held her in his arms, after which he turned to his pro-opponent with an aggressive expression. Roman, Casa, and Cruel were stunned by what they saw. The wolf began to approach him, while Lorena was unconscious, but suddenly she woke up, and seeing Jan standing before her, exclaimed, it's him. Cruel was saying that luck was smiling on him today, and he dealt with him just like Lorena. Jan looked at him silently, then laid her down on the floor and told her to rest for a bit. Cruel asked mockingly, did he really adopt a mongrel? Was he training the wolf for the circus for 2 years now? Jan said that 2 years had passed and he still hadn't changed, and Momon, appearing in the air, asked curiously, has someone interesting appeared? This guy's energy was eating away at her. Jan knew it, and she asked again, does he see it too? It seemed he'd made some progress, and it was time to fix it. Otherwise, he'd become a demon in no time. At that moment, he laughed loudly and began to attack. Asking again, what was he talking about with the owner of this body? Jan asked again, was he really worried about his future? He would regret it. At that moment, someone interrupted and said, enough chatter. He'd been gone for 2 years, and they'd gotten too cocky. They felt this amazing energy, and it turned out to be the head instructor. He wanted to make a final announcement, so they would stop everything and take their seats. They were surprised to see him, and the head instructor told him to hurry up. They didn't want to die here on their last day, did they? After a while, he announced that they'd worked a little, and out of 1,000 cadets, only 200 remained. This was quite a good result, and the final score would be made up of 50% strength and agility and 50% mana. Since they were no longer cadets, instead of a number, they would be given a different distinguishing mark. This was the rank of Imperial Knight. They exclaimed in surprise, because an Imperial Knight was an amazing thing. We're not talking about those guys who fight on horseback, but those who use mana. There are 10 phases that determine a knight's strength. These include those who have mastered mana, dungeons, a knight who can summon a named sword, a knight who can project energy onto objects, a knight who can cast spells on their body, one who can improve swordsmanship with their internal energy, one who can create a sword from energy, and, time to finish the speech, the rankings will be announced starting from first place. Jan took the lead, and he was assigned a rank. Thus, the rankings were announced, and after a while, everyone found themselves in a dormitory for the best cadets of the special squad. Jan said that he had been looking for a normal bed for 2 years, and Momon asked, what kind of knight qualifications are these? What do all these ranks mean? He asked again. Hasn't she heard of the qualifications of Imperial Knights? Apparently, 1,000 years ago, such a thing didn't exist. In simple terms, knights within the same category are like magic circles. Most knights reach rank 7 or 8, which may seem low, but it's enough to single-handedly defeat most types of monsters. The Elite Four reached rank 6. None of the cadets could defeat these four. Having rank 6 at their age angers everyone. Lorena approached him from behind and told him he'd changed too much in 2 years. They hadn't seen each other in a while, and his hair had grown a lot. He mentioned her name and said she seemed to have grown a little. After a long silence, she asked what happened to Cruel, but before she could finish, the protagonist suddenly told her not to worry about it and asked if she was feeling better. He had a healing ointment. Lorena asked again, why did he do something no one asked him to? Did he really think she would lose to him? Jan was surprised and wondered what she meant. Lorena told him not to think he won just because he was a rank 5. It's just a number. A rank 5 Imperial Knight. Many knights can only dream of such a level of profound energy mastery. It's not like there weren't any rank 5s in the Empire, but the Crown Prince was the only one who had reached that level at 17 years old, and that hairstyle doesn't suit him. She left with this remark, and Jan said it was sarcastic. She knew she had committed a shameless act, but her brother was now also a rank 5, and because of the prince, he didn't become the youngest representative of his category. What a pity. She doesn't want to admit that he surpassed her older brother. How childish. Momon said she didn't think rank 5 was so outstanding, but why was he hiding his strength? He could rise even higher. Yan replied that it would be better if no one saw his power now. He needed to show only as much as would attract this moth's attention. He smiled and continued on his way. At that moment, a subordinate approached the chief instructor and, smiling, said he'd heard that Yan had intimidated others. He said he hadn't expected that, especially that black wolf. He hadn't been taught that, and it was very interesting. Did he use the dark dragon sword technique? His subordinate said, Mr. Chief Instructor. He apologized, but he felt he'd grown too attached to this cadet. Allowing him to use such a technique was a violation of the training center's rules. He turned to the senior instructor, who asked again, what was wrong? The chief instructor said it seemed he'd completely lost his fear. How long had he been promoted to senior instructor? Since when had he been allowed to express his opinion? Jock apologized, and the instructor told him to go ahead and clean up the place. Jock had thought so. The chief instructor's judgment could no longer be relied upon. His subordinates confirmed that it seemed so. He thought they should get rid of him right now. After a while, the protagonist lay down on his huge bed and fell asleep, but suddenly he woke up and felt something was wrong. Momon sat on him and said that this body was now hers. For the past 2 years, they had taken every opportunity and gradually gained strength. Did he really think she had given up, right? She would hint to him that this was not the case and use the mind-breaking seal. She was in no hurry and would do it little by little, maintaining control over his body. And finally, she suddenly saw him open his eyes and tell her to let him go. She grinned and asked if he had really woken up. She was just checking if everything was all right with her magical abilities. Jan replied that it was funny, because he had warned that if he caught her doing this again, he would grind her into dust. She screamed that all this was because he was delaying handing over his body to her. She asked if he was at the training grounds. At that moment, he stood up and asked who had come to him at this hour. When he opened the door, Jock told him that the head instructor was looking for him. He had come to escort him. A vacant shopping alley belonging to a special squad. The street was deserted, and Jock was escorting the protagonist, who was asking why the head instructor had called him, and why did he need him at this hour? The exams were already over. This was such a strange place, for starters. Was he really calling him? At that moment, Jock, dumbfounded, used a dark attack. He pulled a sharp dagger from his pocket and shouted that he was thinking quickly. He swung the weapon at the protagonist, who disappeared. Yan declared that he was not only quick-witted, but also capable of thinking quickly, and appeared on the other side of Jock. He was stunned with fear when a bright flash of light erupted. The protagonist attacked his enemy with a Form 7 Dark Spirit. It was close combat. Jock asked, so he noticed? Yan asked. How could he not notice after everything he'd been through? Shouldn't he be better trained to be stealthy enough? Jock called him a confessor, and Jan realized that the energy that had just emerged from his sword was a blood-red sword. Which swords were used in a certain place? He asked. He's the senior instructor, isn't he? The senior instructor knows everything? Are senior instructors allowed to do such things? What will he do with the consequences? He called him a freak and said he was so arrogant just because he got the 5th rank. It always happens like this. He gets lucky on the exam, and then he gets insolent. How much longer will his insolence last? At that moment, many other guys pounced on him from behind. He was surprised, turned around, and said he didn't think he could handle several opponents. After some time, he was defeated and tied up with ropes. Momon asked what he was doing. He told her to shut up, and at that moment he asked, Senior instructor, why are they doing this? Let them tell him the reason. One of the guys told the captain to deal with him quickly and get out of here. Jock asked. So he needs to know the reason? He answered yes, so he could understand where he went wrong. Jock silently looked at him from above and asked, does he remember what happened 2 years ago? Jan didn't understand what he was talking about. The day he escaped with the other cadets, many instructors were sent in pursuit, and they all died at his hands. Among them was his younger sister. At that moment, the protagonist realized what was going on, and he couldn't even remember her. His younger sister was the leader of the 3rd pursuit group. He hadn't forgotten, because she had been sacrificed for a cockroach like him. She writhed in pain, her face filled with such anguish. He remembered only that day, and he would kill him, avenge his little sister, let him go to hell. At that moment, he drew his dagger, and Jan told him to let go. Jock cried out. He would pay with his life for his sister's life. and swung at him, when suddenly the protagonist used the black wolf, and this creature protected him from the attack. It was the form of a black dragon sword, causing Jock to tense up. He realized that a black wolf stood before him. The protagonist said his sister had done her job well, but they had fought tooth and nail and he had won. How could he pity her? Besides, he found it hard to believe they had come here solely for personal vendetta. Jock asked, "What is he saying?" Yan wondered if he should call them rebels. The Armenian Revolt, an uprising that shook the entire empire and continent, ultimately failed. A small group of rebels managed to gather a huge army of comrades and called themselves the Revolutionary Army. The Order of the Red Revolution took its name from the sword they used, the Red Revolution. And the good news was always the sprinkling of one's own blood. To give the blade a terrifying color, battles fought by the Red Revolutionary Detachment were always bloody. An artificial skill was developed by the leader of the order to allow other knights to inflict greater damage. But there was one drawback. When using this skill, the blood began to burn, and to mitigate the negative effects, the Knights of the Order resorted to vampirism. Yan had said that the rebels were beginning to plot a rebellion. He wanted to meet him himself, but he found him first and saved him time. Whose orders were they following? Were they the orders of the chief instructor? Or were there other conspirators in the training center? He was dumbfounded, called him a brat, and said he didn't know how he knew. But now that he'd mentioned rebellion, he could kill him with a clear conscience. At that moment, he became enraged and shouted at his subordinates to start a red revolution. And Yan realized he'd thought so. A bright magical energy shone around him, and everyone pounced on him, shouting for him to die. Yan, alone, said that 3 people had used the skill against a 5th rank knight, and they would have to fight their strength as well. Have the black wolf come immediately. After this spell, dark power began to spread, and Yan used the dark dragon sword. And Jock, who noticed this, shouted that this simply couldn't be. This was the chief instructor's attack. Could he really be so strong at such a young age? The dark power continued to spread, and Yan was confident. He struck his opponent with the blade, cutting down several with a single swing. A moment later, a bright pillar of light rose straight into the sky. Jock, who was left alone, asked, "What? What was that?" He struck the sword once, and how was that possible? How could he destroy them all? He was just a monster. The protagonist approached him, and Jock, frightened, asked what he was. Was he a spy sent by the Empire? And how did he know who they were? Or maybe the chief instructor had turned them in? Yan replied that he was the one asking the questions here. He shouldn't worry, because if he behaved well, he wouldn't touch him. He should watch carefully. Had he seen the design on this medallion before? Jock realized what the symbol was and screamed, but why was it there? Yan exclaimed that he had finally found it and grabbed Jock by the shirt. He angrily asked, "What does this symbol mean? Was it a family crest or maybe a guild crest? And how was this related to the head instructor? Did other people have this symbol too?" Jock didn't understand why he was asking him this and repeating it. Yan became angry and screamed, "What's wrong with his face?" At that moment, he spoke the symbol, and his face began to swell violently, and a moment later, it simply burst. He died in a pool of his own blood, and the protagonist silently looked at him and asked, did he really ended his life? Momon replied that a magical taboo had been placed on him, but he probably didn't know about it himself. Yan was surprised by the taboo, and Momon explained that it was magic that, when a certain word was spoken or a certain action was performed, drained energy and blood from the dungeon, causing the body to explode. She didn't know what kind of magic it was, and she'd hinted at it. He told her to stop teasing him, even if it was a weak one, but he'd gotten a hint. This symbol was connected to the head instructor and the rebellion, and his parents were also involved, so he had a bad feeling about this. He'd have to tell the head instructor what had happened. Momon asked again. He wants to do it now? He's planning to kill all his subordinates, and then him? But hadn't the instructor himself sent the fighters? That was most likely true. But he didn't think he'd ordered his death. Perhaps he sent them to kill them, right, master? The head instructor appeared right behind him and, smiling, said, "Of course not. Who in their right mind would send their subordinates to their deaths?" Jock had been beating him up lately, and he needed to be taught some manners. He could go now that he graduated. Starting tomorrow, he'll give him a real job. Let him get some rest. At his current level, the job will seem difficult. With these words, he left. When a new day dawned, a loud train passed through the forest. It was a transcontinental train to the Wolf family's northern holdings. There were many suitcases on this train, but not many people. The conductor decided to check the passengers' tickets, and, after apologizing, asked to see one of them's tickets. It was Yan, who said he'd take care of everything right away. The conductor looked at the tickets and wished him a pleasant journey. The exams were over, and now they were traveling quietly and peacefully on the train. But of course, that wasn't true. He was heading north to complete missions. After the exams were over, all the surviving cadets were officially designated as the remaining knights of the special squad, and without any primates, they were sent on their first mission. The soldiers were posted in 4 directions: east, west, north, and her empire across the continent, with their own missions on each route. Undead, east of death, adjacent to the lands of the dead. Casa and 80 soldiers under her command were sent there. The strange west, with its unusual natural phenomena and teeming monsters, was assigned to Roman with a detachment of 50 soldiers. South of storms, ravaged by storms and pirates, was assigned to 60 high-ranking soldiers. The northern border, bordering their lands and barbarian territory, was assigned to Yan, the top-ranked soldier, and 3 other soldiers. Only a few people expressed a desire to go north, perhaps because even dragons froze there. Yan thought it was a good thing. He'd be safer without extra people, but the squad he assembled was questionable. Lorena and Cruel, as well as Cheryl, were near him. These were the 3 biggest screw-ups in the world, all gathered in one place. Cruel asked if she was the one following him. Princess? Had she decided to get revenge on him this way? Lorena ignored his words and looked out the window. He called her a fool and asked if she was really ignoring him. Cheryl asked him not to swear. Perhaps Lorena's people wanted to say the same thing. He exclaimed angrily, "What? Who was she? Some kind of servant?" Cheryl sadly replied that she wasn't a servant. Her name was Cheryl, and she had been friends with Lorena since the trials. She had decided this for herself the day Lorena saved her. Wherever she went, she would follow her. All this time, no one had ever stood up for her, so let him shut his filthy mouth. That's what Lorena is probably thinking right now. Cruel got angry and said that then she should tell him so. She asked again, was he really tired of living? Jan asked again, why can't they ride in silence? Honestly, Cruel doesn't care about Lorena. He decided to go north for only one reason. It was all because of Yan. He's going to kill him. He didn't like him from the very first meeting. Why does he always get on his nerves? Now that they're no longer in the training center, he could attack him at any moment. He asked how many times he should hit him. Maybe he'll answer him quickly. Yan asked again how many times he should hit him. He froze and asked again, once? He answered no and punched him in the face more than once. Lorena continued to silently stare out the window, paying no attention. She didn't think she'd be back home so soon. She recalled the words about how they didn't want to listen to her. If she mentioned that name again, she would be banished to the territory. This was the homeland she'd left without a second thought. Since leaving, she hadn't been able to find out anything about her brother, and she couldn't return like this. Jan couldn't understand why Lorena was so quiet today. It seemed she wasn't very happy about returning to her homeland. Soon, she would hear news that would open her eyes. She would be surprised too, wouldn't she, Lorena? They would soon arrive in Avalon as they had announced on the train. At that moment, the protagonist overheard a conversation between 2 people behind him. One of them asked the master if he would really do this. Avalon was obviously nearby. Surely he wouldn't stop there? Perhaps something was bothering him? He couldn't just pass by. The prince would be disappointed. The master replied, "You're welcome." The prince's training had ended, and he had nothing more to say to him, so why was he asking him to come? Jan understood. That's why he chose the north. At first glance, he might seem like a mischievous old man with a bad temper, but this is Elder Rigor. He is the teacher of the Emperor and the Crown Prince, considered the Empire's foremost sage. He came to meet him. Although he came from a commoner background, had no knowledge of magic or martial arts, he became an outstanding man and earned incredible respect for his knowledge and philosophical teachings. For this, the Emperor awarded him, a commoner, the title of Count. He had also lived solemnly in his past life, as befits a man of his rank. At that moment, a subordinate cried out, "Your Majesty, how is their world different from hell if the ruler cannot reach the suffering of the people? He must open his eyes. The rebels can be called a revolutionary army. Doesn't he understand that he has abandoned his people? Where has the sensible emperor of yesteryear gone? He was blinded by petty power and completely forgot the true, radiant authority of a monarch." The old man suffered tears of blood for 3 days and 3 nights, begging the emperor. For his loyalty, the emperor rewarded him with death, but this would happen much later, and he still had time. The conductor apologized for the inconvenience. They kicked out everyone who was in his way, and they had prepared separate compartments. Would he like to move there? Uyghur said, "Okay, thank him." Jan silently watched as they moved past him. He watched them go and saw a special sign that, in sign language, signifies a message for another person. The train moves on, through a tunnel, an old man, and a murder. He smiled and said he had been expecting this. He who was loyal to the Empire, not the Emperor, a man prepared to sacrifice his life for the country and the people. The sage was too intrusive, and soldiers of the Revolutionary Army tried to kidnap him. This special sign language was used only between soldiers of the army. For technical reasons, the train would later make a stop in the tunnel, and they asked passengers to remain in their seats. The Revolutionary Army would soon start a brawl in the tunnel, and he was expecting it. He'd have to rescue the sage and re-establish contact with him. The protagonist told everyone to be on guard, and Cruel and Lorena turned to look at him. He said he would now speak to them through a mental link, and they should listen calmly. Their enemy had seized control of the train, and an hour after the accomplices entered the tunnel, they would attempt to kidnap an important person on board. The enemy was disguised as a conductor and quite possibly as passengers as well, so he wanted to explain what to do next. But Cruel smirked and said they hadn't even received their assignment yet, so why would he listen to him, Jan? At that moment, he punched him in the nose and he remained silent. After that, Jan asked if anyone had any questions. Lorena asked him to wait, as she had trouble understanding what was happening. How did he know about this? He said it was a secret assignment from the chief instructor, which was why he chose the north. She replied, "I see. Does he know anything else? Who are their enemies?" He replied that he did not know the exact number of enemies, but he knew who they were. The Revolutionary Army. They were the ones involved in the kidnapping of this VIP. After a while, it began to snow outside. The conductors discussed among themselves, had they put all the other passengers to sleep? One of them had sprayed sleeping gas. They would transfer them to the freight car. But were there members of the special forces among the passengers, and why would the conductors need weapons? At that moment, Lorena appeared among them, and they exclaimed, "Who is she?" She immediately struck one of them with her sword, and the others were dumbfounded. The guy shouted that she had wounded him with ice. It was an ice sword, which meant she was from the wolf family. Lorena looked confidently ahead and assumed that Jan was probably right. One of them said, "Wow, he knew there were members of the special forces on the train. but he had no idea that the lion cub from the wolf family would be here too. He was very sorry that the child had gotten in the way. Perhaps now they would be promoted, or maybe even paid ransom. She silently said that they were from the Revolutionary Army, and did they even know what had been done to them and her family? She had left her home and joined a special unit to find them, the reason for her brother's disappearance. Therefore, she was very grateful that they had fallen into her hands. She had used a magic sword and said it was funny. The guys asked, so she knows what her family did. While she was wallowing in luxury, everyone was forced to survive on rotten food. Who does she think is behind all this? Wolf is on a path to protect the Empire and the North, and she will not let them win. All this is because they threaten the Northern Empire, and they are a creation. At that moment, after her blow, many windows in the train shattered. One of the conductors didn't understand what was happening in the next car. Why did they suddenly stop communicating? He saw one of the conductors and said he'd been looking for someone to vent his anger on. They were perfect for it. The train continued moving and moments later destroyed several conductors. He kept saying that this was a sword from the Imperial Treasury. Wasn't it magnificent? He took a deep breath and said how he'd missed the sight of blood. Yan should prepare himself because he was next. Momon sensed magic in the first car. He should stop summoning it for every little thing. Yan replied that she needed to earn her keep. But should they go now? They needed to save the sage. Lorena took the front car. Cruel the cars at the back, and he would sneak into the front through the roof. Momon replied, what a sly one he was. Lorena turned out to be more talented than she thought. It was good she didn't kill her then, wasn't it? She was like a ticking time bomb. But did they really need this old man that much? Was he part of his plan? He replied, of course. In the future they will encounter the Revolutionary Army more and more often, and there is no one more useful than this sage. With him on their side, the battle with the Revolutionary Army will be much easier. Now they should go, and Momon confirmed that wherever she looked, there were very calculating people. She still couldn't believe it, but now they would see what was happening. The old man was wrapped in ropes, and they asked him again, so he really is the Emperor's teacher? Across from him sat Hela, the commander of the 7th Corps of the Revolutionary Army, the third disciple of the Holy Sword Erectus. Hela asked, so he really is the Emperor's teacher? If he's so smart, he must know ancient languages and dialects. He replied that he knew something, and she asked, does that mean he can bark like a dog? Well, dogs have their own language too. Hurry, let him start barking. Why isn't he doing it? The old man didn't understand what was happening and suddenly began barking. She laughed loudly, and Uyghur said that meant she was very beautiful, my lady. Yan decided that judging by the energy emanating from them, there were only 2 of them, but that was in the compartment, and the others, before they could discuss it properly, Hela said he would now demonstrate his cat language. He began meowing, and Momon wondered if this guy would really help them. He smiled and replied, yes, he's always been that way. That's what scares him most about him. He's willing to throw away his pride without a second thought if it benefits the Empire. He's a true utilitarian. She kept saying how ridiculous it was. He's the best. She killed all the Empire's scientists because they were arrogant. He replied that he was simply glad she liked everything. Hela said she couldn't escape work. It was fun with him. The old man. Uyghur addressed her as his mistress, and she said it was time to catch those rats. She struck with her sword, but before she could, Yan was able to parry the attack. Everything around her lit up with a bright light, and Hela, stepping outside, said, it's cold here. Maybe there are so many rats here because the train is old. At that moment, she heard a strange sound and turned around to see a sword. It was the protagonist who approached her and asked, is he okay, Sage? He came to save him. Uyghur replied, did he sneak inside while the enemy was distracted? That's good. He's doing well. Yan confirmed this thought, and Hela addressed him as if he were a child and asked what animal language he could speak. Maybe pig language? She'd make him run like a pig. He knows pig language, right? He asked again. What? Yan apologized and said he thought she was just lying there like a pig. She called him a freak, and Momon said she found out what rank this girl was. It was at least 5th, but her sword has a special energy. Yan thought so. A sword of white, the color of Erectus's lightsaber. He became famous thanks to his students. Apparently, this was one of his students. He suggested that she sort this out quickly. At that moment, someone told them not to move and to lower the sword, otherwise the old man would be left without a head. It was the 4th lightsaber student, Varus. Uyghur realized that this was stealth magic, and Yan turned to Momon and asked, there were only 2 people here, weren't there? She silently looked away and said that she had definitely said there were 2, so she was confusing the enemy with the sage? Momon asked again. What did she have to do with it if the energy didn't come from the old man? At that moment, Hela threw the dagger at his feet and came closer to Yan. How scared he looked. He asked again, didn't she want to hear the pig squeal? Hela replied that it was too late, and now instead of a pig's squeal, she'd rather hear his head crack. She tensed her muscles and pounced on Yan with incredible agility and speed. Her subordinates were ready, and at that moment Lorena arrived, using her vision in wolf. The windows in the carriage cracked again, and everything around them was chilled by frost. The conductors found themselves trapped in ice and unable to move. She said, the beginning of winter, when she suddenly began coughing up blood. But she overdid it, and it caused frost. Her body wasn't ready for it. She wouldn't be able to use snow for a long time. A muscular guy approached her and said she was making a lot of noise. It was too rude and loud for hidden wolves. Everything is different from what this freak said. right? She didn't understand who he was. He neutralizes frost with dark energy. If he came out of the car where Cruel was, then it was him. But before she could fully consider this thought, he suddenly asked, "Is she really a girl from the wolf family?" She turned around in fear and screamed, "Freak. How did he know that?" Meanwhile, at the end of the train, Cruel found himself in a pool of his own blood. He didn't understand how he was supposed to defeat this monster. This was on a completely different level from all his past opponents. He remembered Lorena and wondered if he was stronger than the head instructor. She asked, did he stop her with his hand? The guy apologized for offending her and said what a shame. If they hadn't met there, she wouldn't have had to die. A moment later, blood splashed right onto the window inside the train car. Yan, meanwhile, was in a difficult situation, and she said she wanted to hear his boss scream. At that moment, she lunged at him, but he smiled, and at that moment, Cheryl said that she knew how to fight too, but she was simply asked to hide. She may only be an 8th ranker, but she passed the exams well and became an Imperial Knight. I wonder if Lydia Lorena is okay? She was supposed to protect her after all. At that moment, Lorena was destroyed, blood spilling from her head. She lay immobilized. The train continued unstoppable. And the guy who destroyed her said what a shame. If she hadn't been an upstart, he would have spared her. Lorena drew her sword, and he asked if she really decided to run into trouble. Is she really that stupid that she doesn't even realize she can't defeat him? What could she possibly do to him? She answered, that's right, she's not like the other members of the wolf family. She's poor with a sword and relies on emotions, and she can't even use vision properly. But even so, she can at least die as one of the wolf family. She won't be able to win, but she will fight until her last breath. The guy lowered his gaze, then said that any battle is life and death, and she had made a big mistake. He is a black tiger, and his name is Amor. This is an incredibly strong guy who attacked her with a mountain tiger. He offered to show her what he can do. After a while, Varys said in surprise that this can't be true. They couldn't lose. They outnumbered them and disarmed the enemy, even took a hostage. Why did this happen? Hela was destroyed and lay in a pool of her own blood. They screamed. Why did this happen? Jan approached them and said it was all because they were weak. Uyghur asked again, is this the end? He said yes, he could relax, sage, but it was better for him not to leave here yet. They continued to ask how he was able to repel their attacks. Jan asked how he could repel them, because he remembered the last time he defeated his master with the lightsaber Erectus. That sword had already been broken once, and if they were just students, they were Erectus himself, then, even if the sky fell on his head, he wouldn't lose to them. Jan asked again, doesn't he want to live? Varys asked what? Jan replied that if he answered the question correctly, he would sit him down and let him look closely at this pendant. What comes to mind when he looks at this symbol? At that moment, he froze and realized it was a symbol of the beginning. Jan asked again, a symbol of the beginning? At that moment, bulges began to appear on his face, and he said he couldn't say anything, and Jan realized that it was also taboo, so even Erectus disciples were forbidden to talk about this. It was so important. A moment later, he was killed, and Jan said he wouldn't hear more than one word from them. But despite this, he had a new clue, a symbol of the beginning. First, he needed to figure this out, and now that the sage was with them, they just needed to get off the train. A moment later, the train encountered a strange situation. An explosion occurred at the end of the car. Jan couldn't understand what could have exploded there. He looked at Hela's destroyed body and realized she was alive. She said that the engine room had blown up. Now he couldn't stop this train. It was an overheated magic stone. It would stop the train at Avalon Station. The train would simply crash into it. How loud the explosion would be then. She said it was a pity she wouldn't be able to see it, and began coughing, then suddenly turned blue. This had never happened in his past life, and he didn't understand why this was happening. Momon asked, was that an explosion? It was time to leave. They had to survive this disaster. How were they going to stop this pile of metal? If it's driven by the magic stone, the explosion will be incredible. Yan told her not to panic. Although he hadn't expected such a turn of events, this monster would deal with the problem. At that moment, a 7th rank knight ran straight onto the tracks. Kyle. A moment later, the carriage caught fire, and Kyle said that the Emperor had ordered the sage to be rescued. But he couldn't simply ignore this out-of-control train. It wouldn't be easy. Imperial Knights are the greatest knightly order in the Empire, protecting the Emperor and the capital. People say it only consists of ranks 3 and above, and the strength of each knight is tantamount to a natural disaster. He can't do anything about it, he said. Lord Vigor, let him forgive him. He used the final blow of the Imperial sword. Moments later, a bright magical force began to emanate from his body, and a beam of light pierced the train. The train began to make a loud noise and stop, and at that moment, Jan realized it was too much. A moment later, everything was illuminated by this bright light, and Kyle said that he couldn't believe these cruel rebels had committed such a monstrous act. The train derailed and overturned. Uyghur asked what he was talking about. It was his doing, after all. He replied that it was true, but he was glad the sage was safe. Was he unharmed? Uyghur replied that he thought so, that it was a miracle he survived. He had almost been destroyed along with the train. Kyle said with a smile that he had misunderstood him. He had complete faith in Lady Beowulf, who was on the train, and he was confident that she would be able to protect him. The sage. As expected, she also figured out how to hit the train tracks. She derailed the train to avoid his attack. Only a few cars were damaged, and the hostage and the sage remained unharmed. Everything was as expected from the academy's top graduate. Lorena blurted out that it wasn't so, she hadn't derailed the train, and Cruel approached him and said it was nothing. For a member of the Special Forces, this is basic situational awareness. This means there are other gems in the Special Forces besides Lady Beowulf. Cruel chuckled and said that, frankly, he really is pretty close to number 1. Cheryl was surprised and he said, "What's wrong?" Lorena said, "Sir, Kyle, among those who attacked the sage was he, the Black Tiger Amor, a special class assassin. The Black Tiger got this nickname because his unique black energy resembles a tiger. He was hired by the rebels, he had already reached level 3 10 years ago, and if so, he was fighting him now and was far from his match. He disappeared and sensed his approach after the train derailed. Amor said, 'See you soon, daughter of Beowulf.' She said that the Black Tiger had joined the rebels, which meant it was impressive that she had confronted the Black Tiger himself. She replied, 'No,' and at that moment, Uyghur turned and saw Momin asking Yan, 'Are you hurt?' He replied that he was in great pain and didn't understand what to do now, and he told her to stop clinging to him. She replied that this body wasn't his alone, and that he should try to take better care of himself. Yan told her to stop talking such nonsense. He understands that things are bad, and this is happening to things that didn't exist in his past life. The Black Tiger attack, Kyle's attack, and the train explosion. None of these things happened in his past life, so why are they happening now? There were no volunteers to go north initially, and everything changed when he went there. Could it be that the Black Tiger's appearance in the north caused a chain reaction? It was unknown how far this would go, and he needed to be as careful as possible. Uyghur approached him and said he'd been looking for him, offering to talk for a while. He should stay in the capital. It was hard for him to think that so many people had suffered because of him. His hand, was it injured when he derailed the train? That was also because of him. Yan replied that he'd had a very hard time because of the sage, or had Uyghur said something so blunt? How could he say such things so bluntly? He owed him a favor, let him take it. He handed him the item, and Yan realized it was his nameplate. It would symbolize his status as his representative, and it could be very useful. Yan smiled and asked if he wanted him to accept this, and forget about barking like a dog. Uyghur said he was being so blunt again, he'd go anyway, and if they were destined, they'd meet again. Yan exhaled and said he didn't call him lucky, even though he'd worked hard for it. Momon asked if a nameplate was really that useful. He replied, "It depends on how you use it." Then he looked into the distance and said they were now heading to their next destination, toward the Black Frost. After some time, the blacksmith asked, "This sword?" He could pay 500 gil for repairs and take it. It seemed a bit steep for Yan, so the blacksmith asked again, "What? How on earth had he managed to damage a weapon made of ink iron so much?" He replied that he'd handled it rather roughly. It was a black sword made of ink iron, given to him by the head instructor. He probably thought he couldn't use a regular blade with the dark dragon's sword technique, but even an ink iron couldn't withstand that. He asked if he needed anything else. The protagonist replied, "No, thank you." The blacksmith shouted at him to come in, because next time he'd serve him properly. He hugged him, and Yan couldn't understand it. That face was the opposite of polite. The city was not far from wolf territory, Avilion. Due to bad weather, it was decided to travel through the city's gates. Judging by how long it takes them to recharge their mana in the magic circle, the gate will be closed until noon tomorrow. However, a small town like Villion doesn't need that much time to recharge its mana, and they themselves needed time to rest. For the first time since his reincarnation, the protagonist is in a place with many commoners. After all, as soon as he opened his eyes, he found himself in a business training center. Momon said that, as she thought, it was all strange. He asked what she was muttering. She replied that royal knight or something, didn't he sense the yellow dragon energy emanating from him? Yan asked again, what was that? Momon called him an idiot and asked if he didn't know what power he possessed. The mana heart can store 6 powers: black, red, blue, green, and the golden power of the earth. The yellow dragon dominates the golden power. Isn't this power enough even without the mana heart? It's one of many elements. Momon screamed at him for being stupid, saying that if it were that simple, anyone could have founded an empire. Dragon energy can only be summoned by the breath of a divine dragon and a mana heart. How could he be so superficial about it? Was there anything inside his skull? He thought for a moment and replied, "Of course." The only people Momon had sensed dragon energy from were the chief instructor and the crown prince. This was understandable, considering they were both descendants of Bahamut. But what was the royal knight's connection to them? He should find out more about him. After a while, someone called his number. It turned out to be Lorena and Cheryl, who had met him nearby. They were shopping and had a lot of shopping bags. Cheryl exclaimed joyfully at their luck. Lorena asked again, is he already heading back to his lodgings? He replied that he was coming from the blacksmith, where he had ordered his weapon repaired, and he needed to prepare for the mission in advance. Cheryl noted that they were also preparing for the mission, and he asked, so that's it, but why did this preparation sound more like shopping? Cheryl chuckled, and Lorena replied that they'd only bought the bare necessities, mostly food. He asked, will they eat it all in one day? Cheryl smiled and told Yan to go shopping with them. He wouldn't last in wolf territory in that outfit. He replied that he'd do it himself, but Cheryl threatened him into joining them. He realized that people don't change after all. They continue to persuade him. They have personalized service. They will even select clothes specifically for him. And at that moment, Cruel was watching everything happening around the corner. When the protagonist entered a store with beautiful fashionable women's clothing, he put on gloves and said he'd just take them. If the clothes were too heavy, they'd get in the way. He donned a cold weather coat, cold weather gloves, and winter boots. Momin replied that he was always such a bore, and Yan replied, "Who's talking?" Cheryl asked, "Will he take everything? Then maybe he'd look at Lorena's outfit." He looked surprised and asked again. Cheryl opened the curtains and said they were starting a fashion show. Someone could wear something like this in a new city, and Lorena decided it was too tight. A basic among basics, black and white. It was also a killer outfit, light armor, and she screamed, why would she wear a swimsuit in such a cold land? And now, but suddenly she screamed, enough. She was fed up as she thought nothing suited her. Cheryl said that wasn't true. Each of these outfits was very cute. She turned to Yan and asked, is that true? He replied, yes, they all suit her. She just didn't wear things like this often, so it was unusual for her. She answered, of course, and then turned to Yan and asked him what he thought suited her best. He replied that he thought it was what she was wearing now. All the outfits suited her, but he thought this outfit accentuated her swordsmanship and strength best. She was about to ask him again what he meant when she suddenly stopped, turned sharply, and said that she would go to their lodgings. Cheryl called her and asked Yan what he had just said. He didn't understand what was going on, and Cheryl exclaimed that she would go with Lorena. Momin didn't understand what had just happened, but this was crazy. Yan asked again, does this look like a crazy place? Did he really arrange this? Cheryl called Lorena and apologized, saying that it was all her fault. She replied, no, thank you for helping her choose her clothes today. Cheryl asked her not to pay attention to what these clueless men were saying. How could he even know anything? Lorena replied that she didn't care about the nonsense other people said. It was just nonsense. But while she was saying this, the blush on her cheeks was too noticeable. Yan called after him that in that case, he suggested they meet at the gate at noon tomorrow. Don't be late, they would meet tomorrow. Lorena asked again, would they meet? Why was he saying things so loudly that could be misunderstood? Yan realized she left without even answering. Maybe she didn't hear? Momin said that even she wouldn't pretend she hadn't heard, because that would be even more awkward. Yan replied that they bought clothes, and that meant now, but suddenly he turned around and realized Momon was nowhere to be found and asked where she had gone. Meanwhile, in one of the shops, a clerk thanked him for his order. It was a Shining Moon, a pub located next to the Villian Department of Transportation. Both ordinary townspeople and mercenaries come here, and the food is cheap and delicious. Cruel muttered that it was a curse because he didn't know what to do to defeat Yan. He sat in this pub with a glass of beer and thought, you can't get close to him, even when he sleeps. He's like a monster, and secretly, he feels it. Yan hasn't shown his true skills yet, but why is he trying to hide his strength? Why is he hiding his strength? He wondered about these things while he was alone, and at that moment, he heard the shouts of passersby, shouting that one of them would pay next time. Another shouted at him not to lie, because he'd said that 10 times already. But he still bought the drinks. A fight broke out between them, and they decided to beat each other up. Cruel got angry because of this, and chaos erupted in the pub. People shouting that these guys were noisy and ill-mannered idiots. Can't they see that Cruel from the Dwight clan is currently dining here? Commoners aren't taught any manners. They can't even breathe loudly while eating. If they make noise, he'll show them the difference between commoners and aristocrats. The man didn't understand what he was trying to show, a difference in status. Cruel turned around and wondered who dared do that. Yan approached him and told him to show him how noble aristocrats dine. Cruel couldn't understand how he'd been here. These degenerates didn't know the basic rules of behavior and were so noisy. Yan asked if it wouldn't be better if he didn't interfere. Cruel asked again. What? He'd suffered from the same thing himself. He ended up here precisely because of the difference in status. The protagonist said that if he stopped depending on his status, he could become much stronger. Cruel asked again, can he become stronger? What was he talking about? A man with a huge hand approached him, grabbed him by the shoulder and said, he's not from around here, is he? Cruel turned around angrily and saw the guy say he heard what they were saying. Did he really want to get stronger? Did he need to reveal a secret? This guy's name was Billy, the leader of the Thunderhorn mercenaries. Cruel told him to take his hands off him. Billy said that a man gets stronger by lifting weights. If he joins them, they'll supply him with protein supplements. He'll be allowed to do whatever he wants. Cruel became very angry and, gritting his teeth, started a fight. He yelled at him to eat it himself. The man cried out in pain when Cruel pierced him with his magic and said it looked like he didn't have muscles, but just balloons. Billy fell right among the people, and they realized he destroyed their leader in one blow. The other guys asked how he dared humiliate their leader like that. Cruel asked again, what was that mountain of muscle? It smelled bad. But that was even better. He could destroy them all in one go. Suddenly, the guys started shouting that he was a great skinny and innate strength, someone born to control muscles. Let him teach them how. Cruel looked at them in bewilderment, not understanding what was happening. They laughed at the fact that it was the first time someone had defeated the leader with one blow. He was an aristocrat after all, and it was immediately obvious he was on another level, and besides, he was handsome. Cruel looked at the people around him in bewilderment, not understanding why they were doing this, but he even liked it, so he smiled. They sat down at the table, and people began to discuss the aristocrats' drinking skills. Let them bring them their drinks. This time they would drink together. He was good at arm wrestling too, wasn't he? Cruel replied, well, of course he's She's from a noble family. They shouted, "Glory to the aristocrat." After a while, one of them exclaimed that his glass was empty, and that they should quickly bring them alcohol. Cruel's brother's glass was empty. Cruel was smiling and drunk, his face flushed, and the guys continued shouting that they were rude and had no manners at all. Today, it was all on him. He would show them what high status meant. What a wonderful day. They would now drink to Cruel's brother. To him, he continued to smile in this company. Sometime later, the protagonist dragged a drunk Cruel through the street. He tried to wake him up and bring him to his senses. Yan asked him not to puke here, because if he did, he would kill him. Cruel tried to answer that he was sober, but it didn't work out well. Cruel asked where his friend Billy was. Yan was surprised that he had just considered him unworthy of himself, and now they had become friends. He replied that Billy was very hardworking and kind. Those idiots were praising him for carrying him out. It's strange that they're treating him like this, even though they've only just met today. Isn't it strange, Yan? They were so kind to him, even though they'd only just met him today. He started crying and asking why his family, people of the same blood, had never been so kind. Yan looked at him in bewilderment and remained silent. Cruel kept saying that they would have simply said he was a good man, that they believed in him, or something like that. Momon asked Yan what he'd slipped into his drink. He asked again, had he slipped something into it? She replied that she'd seen him slip something into his drink at the pub. Yan realized she'd seen everything, and said that he'd added some powder to cleanse him of demonic energy. Judging by his condition, it was working. She asked again, what, such an expensive powder? Where did he get so much money? Had he really gotten attached to him, and why had he suddenly decided to take care of him? Yan asked again, did he care? He simply remembered the old days, and when he sees people commit evil under someone else's influence, it gnaws at him, so he did it. And no matter how much he needed to hurry, he felt like he was about to puke. Momon replied that she didn't care, since it wouldn't happen to her. Sometime later, in Duke Wolf's palace, there was a lot of snow and cold all around. Inside, a special portal glowed. Many people and knights gathered around and announced they had finally arrived at the palace. They were the main character, along with Lorena, Cheryl, and Cruel. Cheryl was surprised, so this is what it looks like. Lorena frowned and looked at the floor, after which Cruel said he was cold. Is it always this cold in her homeland? The mission they had come to fulfill was to defeat the barbarians together with the Wolf Knights. There are constant skirmishes over fertile lands, which are scarce in these harsh places. Therefore, the Wolf Knights are constantly short of warriors. But the big problem is, will the proud northern knights accept outside help? Lorena told them to stop. She had something to tell them all. Yan turned to her, and she said they might see something up ahead that they didn't expect, and they should prepare for it. The knights discussed among themselves. Was this the reinforcement sent by the special detachment? They were met by a butler who greeted them and asked them to show courtesy and return where they came. Respected, uninvited guests. Han said the North had requested assistance and didn't say he was ready to receive guests. Did they understand that? Count Hans, the former commander of the Wolf Knights, remained as a butler in this place after retiring. No matter his current physical condition, to lead a detachment of knights, he must be at least a third-rank knight. It's simply incredible that such a warrior works as a butler. Lorena said they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and he looked at her silently. She came to fulfill the assigned mission as a representative of the special squad, so he should watch his words and show respect. He said that she left here without permission. This was too much. They hadn't seen each other for several years, and she was speaking so rudely. She joined the special squad without even telling anyone. Did she really choose the special path instead of them? Did she even imagine how worried they were? Yan replied that he really didn't expect this. Hans continued to shout, "Madam, she has a scratch on her cheek. How could the captain, that old scoundrel, dare to allow this?" She said, "That's why she didn't want to come here." Hans shouted, and again she said such hurtful words. They had all been so looking forward to the day when she would return. Only this gave them the strength to live. Let her stop doing this. She replied that she had been too rude to him. His hair had turned gray while they were apart. Is he feeling well? Hans was surprised that she was worried about him and burst into tears, shouting, "Madam!" She asked him to be quiet and said it was cold in here, so she suggested they go inside. Their cook would be able to demonstrate his skills for the first time in a long time, and these guests could come with them. He also said that the master would soon return from hunting. They could dine together. Lorena was silent for a moment, then addressed him by name and said she didn't want to hear anything about him. Please let him never mention her father again, and she would finish her mission before he returned. Hans tried to explain something to her, since she had misunderstood him, but she left. After a while, they sat down at the table and began to ponder. Was this a joke? They were going to wait here until Lorena arrived? Was this the rule here, waiting without touching the food that was right in front of them? They were trained like mongrels. Why was Lorena fidgeting like that? Cheryl told him to be quiet. Otherwise they would treat him even worse than a mongrels. Cruel asked again. Had he said that it wasn't true? Had he insulted anyone? A maid approached them and said to please mind their manners because they were even worse than mongrels. He asked what she said again. Did she even know he was the son of Count Dwight? The maid asked again. What? After all, she was a maid at the Wolf Estate. He asked why an ordinary maid was so knowledgeable about everything. Cheryl asked him to calm down because Yan hadn't passed yet either. He asked again, but why wasn't he here yet? It turned out he said he had some business. Apparently, he said there was something that could only be obtained here. Meanwhile, the protagonist appeared in the armory of the Wolf Duchy. There were many weapons there, and he thought that the emperor of his past life had wandered across the continent to find a sword. The only dragon, the beginning, the dragon slayer, who defeated the only one, divided his body and made 2 swords. After Bahamut killed him, one of the swords passed to him. The emperor did everything he could to find the other sword the founding emperor had failed to find. He paid large sums of money to a special squad, spreading the search across the continent, but was still unable to locate it. He was ready to give up, but the sword was eventually found. Yan remarked that it was a sword that even the founding emperor had been unable to find, a sword whose whereabouts they could never trace. He would never have thought it was so carelessly stored in the armory in the north. It was the very same dragon sword, Astalon, the brother of the emperor's sword, Nilan, which had pierced him. He smiled and said, "Yes, this is the very sword. Even the emperor cannot kill it." He reached for the sword when suddenly a magical current erupted, and he looked at it in surprise. He heard a voice and realized it was the sword's voice. A bright beam of light rose straight into the sky, and the sword spoke, declaring that it had no right to do this. The protagonist tried to take it into his own hands, but his glove was ruined, and he realized the sword had rejected him. He called the cursed sword a piece of junk. He was sure he heard a voice when he took it. The sword said he had no right, and Momen said, "How interesting." And Yan asked, "Does she know anything about this?" She replied that she hadn't thought such an ego could be less than that, as if a weapon chooses its owner. He asked, "Does it choose its owner?" Sometimes weapons have their own divine quality, in which case the sword chooses its owner. She smiled and said that, in short, it's him. "He's not in this sword's league, kid." Yan was dumbfounded and asked again, "How come? He'll pull it out right now." "So, he's not in this league? This sword will die today." He used magical powers and dark energy and grabbed the sword, which kept saying he had no right to do this. The entire room shone with a bright light, and Yan had to grit his teeth in anger and shouted back that he was suitable because he was a perfectly suitable person. Let it not reject him and just accept him. After some time, a flag was raised in the Wolf Palace. A detachment of knights gathered, and Lorena, who had picked up the sword, asked if this was the sword she used. She asked her to think again. He shouted at the knights to listen to him. Today they must stop the barbarians, which is what they always do. But today they cannot make a mistake, because today she, Lorena, will be with them. In Hans's opinion, it was truly very dangerous, and they exclaimed with joy, "Mistress." Hans asked again, "Perhaps she should wait for the head of the family?" She replied that she had already said she didn't want to hear about it. Does he think she's a fool who can't even fulfill her duty? In that case, she never wants to see him again, Hans. They only have to obtain 10 barbarian banners, right? It's even easier than fighting an ancient lich. Hans asked her not to think it would be that easy. According to barbarian beliefs, the banner represents the spirits of their ancestors. They are ready to protect their own with their lives. After a while, Hans said, "Let them listen carefully. They must protect the mistress with all their might, understand?" Cheryl exclaimed that he should leave it to them. Cruel grinned and replied that they weren't her bodyguards, so he wouldn't do that. Cheryl started arguing with him and thanked the butler, Hans, for the clothes, because without them they would have frozen to death. Lorena asked, "So he gave them this?" He was still so attentive. He was happy that the mistress had praised him, then asked if she was wearing her uniform. She replied that this was her first mission with the special forces. When she turned around, she asked, "By the way, where is this one?" But the protagonist apologized for being late, and said that one problem had taken longer than expected. The guys asked, he didn't even show up for lunch, and what was wrong with his appearance? Cruel laughed and asked what happened to his face, and where did he get so battered? A moment later, his nose was broken and he frowned, staring ahead silently because his mood was ruined. Momen asked, "Is he saying he's a good person? Let him see how dirty and insolent he is." He told her to shut up, and she asked, "Why doesn't he give up the sword? Such annoying people aren't popular." He replied that he had plenty of time. Brother Neelan didn't accept it, so he couldn't bring it up, but it wasn't over yet. Lorena said he might misunderstand, so let him tell her about it. He asked again, "What?" Lorena said it was her first mission as a member of a special squad, so she wore this uniform. It was very practical and comfortable, and while it wasn't very warm, you could wear a coat over it, so she wanted to clear up the misunderstanding. Jan didn't understand what she was talking about, but he said, "Of course. This uniform suits her very well." She became embarrassed and started screaming, and he started saying it again. "Let the knight prepare to leave immediately." She immediately turned away from him, embarrassed, and Jan didn't understand what had happened. She shouted for the knights to open the gates, and they set out. The knights must be inimitable today, because she, Lorena, would be with them today. They shouted with joy, and Cruel said they were just country bumpkins, making so much fuss over some barbarians. Jan wondered what else could he expect from the capital's aristocrats. They weren't afraid of the barbarians at all, because the Wolf family protected the empire from them. However, now they had united the tribes and, under the leadership of powerful leaders, had created a powerful kingdom that threatened the empire's security, and soon it would make its presence felt. The barbarian king, the one called the strongest man in the world, was named Vilega. They possessed a power that threatened even the Kabalan Empire. The barbarian king, one of the 5 warriors threatening the empire, became the strongest man on earth, named Valega. There wasn't a single move he couldn't perform with his incredible physique, but even more frightening was the fact that he could tell an opponent's abilities at a glance. He was the nightmare of the Imperial Knights. In his past life, no means of killing him worked. They currently have little information about his whereabouts, and although he doesn't know where his subordinates are, he hopes they won't have any unsuccessful encounters with him. Sometime later, many knights gathered in the forest in the northwest of Wolf territory. The third squad of knights was marching and preparing for battle. Cruel grew angry and asked how much longer they had to go. They were aimlessly trudging through knee-deep snow. Why had they even dismounted? He was told to stop. Riding in this weather was even more difficult. Jan kept saying that everything here was so white. However, it was harder to navigate and maintain distance. Lorena asked what they still thought of these places. Perhaps they thought of them as deserted? This winter lasts 200 days a year. In Wolf territory there was nothing but snow to see. It was difficult to live here, and the land was free. However, there are people who live here permanently, stronger and braver than anyone, and for this she respects them. And don't they find these places beautiful in their own way? Yan replied that she was a role model for the other lords. Cheryl confirmed that it was Lorena after all. The knights began shouting that their light and reason for living, Lady Lorena, was the best. Cheryl agreed with them, and they shouted that the landscapes of Wolf territory had become even more beautiful now that Lady Lorena was with them. Lady Lorena exclaimed that they were too noisy. The troops were at the ready, and one of the third asked, "Lady Lorena, does she see that?" They noticed a red signal fire in the distance, the signal scouts give when they spot barbarians, so they would encounter barbarians if they went that way. Cruel grinned and said that they would finally have something fun. The knight confirmed that he was overconfident, but he would have to muster up his courage. It was the squad leader, Sabo, who said he would witness an extremely brutal scene. He asked again, "A brutal scene? That was ridiculous." Did he even know what they'd had to deal with? It ranged from goblins and cockatoo griffins to an ancient lich. Compared to these barbarians, it was child's play. Sabo was surprised, so, in that case, they should go. They were members of a special squad who had fought numerous monsters without risking their lives. Therefore, they were confident they could handle any monster, no matter how cruel. However, what they would see would be on a completely different level. This was in a small village that was embarrassing to even call a base. There they had staged a real bloodbath. People begged for at least the children to be spared. They lay in pools of their own blood, motionless. Cheryl didn't understand what this was all about. Knights are supposed to protect the weak. Hadn't they sworn to dedicate their swords to their lord? It's as if it belongs to a demon, and it's still unknown who the barbarians are here. Cruel told Cheryl to close her eyes, because there's nothing to see here. Jan reflected that even the sight of blood left him unmoved, which was good, and meant he'd now learn to control his inner demonic energy. They were all shocked, but international wars have always been like this. There are no wars where armies simply stand on their own territory. The slaughter continues until one side disappears, so they killed everyone, children and adults alike. Lorena, before Territory Lord Wolf, couldn't have been unaware of this. But hearing and seeing something with your own eyes are two different things. This is the burden Lorena was forced to bear in the future. And will she be able to bear it? Jan silently turned his attention to the girl who was killed with a baby in her arms. Cheryl said that perhaps they were bad guys and they should approach them and save them. Cruel replied that if she decided to approach, everything would be bad. They approached the infant, and one of the knights said that this child was lucky. He will die here and will not live any longer as a vicious barbarian. At that moment, he swung his weapon at the child, when Cheryl suddenly cried out, "Stop, don't do this." The knight still wanted to destroy the child, and everyone exchanged fearful glances. But at that moment, Lorena intervened and stopped his weapon with her sword. The knight asked again, "Lady Lorena?" She said, "Enough, that's enough. They've killed everyone who was armed, and now they'll replenish their supplies and return. And they mustn't kill this child. That was her decision." Yan considered it her decision. But the knights who heard what she said began to discuss it among themselves. Did she really just tell them not to kill the barbarian? That was a joke, right? They began to feel a strong desire to kill. Lorena was determined, and in Wolf's territory, she had trained in swordsmanship since childhood. She knew what it meant to fight barbarians and was ready to bear this burden. However, although this barbarian was dressed too lightly to withstand the northern frosts, the child was wrapped in magnificent furs, and the sight of this changed something in Lorena. The knight asked, but why did she think so? She said not to kill the child and that she would take responsibility for him. No one understood what the mistress was doing with a loudly crying infant. The knight was saying that even one surviving barbarian could seriously harm their kingdom and its inhabitants. Even if she's the Lord's daughter, she has no authority to do this. She said it was too much, just because he was a barbarian. He's just a baby who hadn't yet committed a crime. How dare a knight who served her question her decisions? The knight told her to send the guests away. Or was she now interfering with Knight Wolf on their territory? Cheryl said they were bad knights, and she didn't know their duties included killing babies. Aren't they ashamed? Cruel said that allowing him to be killed would tarnish his reputation. How could he sleep at night after that? Knight Boz told her to be careful with her jokes, mistress, because right under their noses she was defending the barbarian. Did she understand what this all meant? As Jan thought, there was a conflict between them. The knights protecting Wolf's territory would never change their minds. Emotions are not controlled by logic and morality. Too much blood has been cursed for them to overcome hatred. How could he so easily speak of forgiveness in front of them? Suddenly he felt something was wrong and asked himself, what is this energy? They sensed something was wrong and exchanged glances when suddenly the chieftain began to fall on them from above. The chieftain had arrived, so they should prepare for an attack. This chieftain clenched his fist and shattered the ground they stood on. Everything around them began to glow with bright rays of light and flame. People noted that this was incredible energy, and Lorena became angry. At that moment, everything around began to spin and burn loudly. A moment later, everything stopped, and the knight said that he couldn't even imagine that they would attack them. Where were their scouts even looking? The chieftain grabbed one of the knights by the head and asked, did they kill them? That is, his family and his fellow tribesmen were killed. Habru grabbed one of the knights and twisted his neck. He threateningly said that he would kill them too. It would be slow and painful. He destroyed the first knight, and Lorena screamed for him to stop. She attacked him from behind, and a moment later, there was a bright flash of light. She confidently looked him in the eye and struck him in the head with her sword, but the sword simply shattered on his bare head. The fight continued, and she realized he was too fast. His hand was already aimed at her, but then they interceded and shouted for her to retreat. One of them apologized to her and said it seemed there was nothing more they could do. They struck his body with their weapons, but the weapons simply shattered. The knights apologized for raising their voices at her earlier and told her to take care of herself. At that moment, she opened her eyes in shock, and the knight was destroyed by a single swing of the leader. His blood spilled, and Habru screamed for her to die too. He swung at her when the protagonist suddenly cast the Black Wolf spell. Moments later, blood began to spurt from Habru's wound. He wondered if it was really a wound on his body. Jan replied that it was too bad, it was just a scratch, but soon he would cut him in half. He approached him with a weapon in his hand, and Habru tensed. A juman is the name for the tattoos applied to the bodies of barbarian leaders. Barbarians had devised a way to harness mana through tattoos. Instead of a dungeon, tattoos applied to the body channel mana directly into the skin and muscles. They enhance the body's invulnerability, and when skillfully combined with incredible martial arts, this made the barbarians unimaginably destructive. Jan declared that he was stronger than he thought, and Habru began screaming for him to die. The boys came to his aid and shouted for him to die. They charged at Habru from the other side, but their swords crossed. Cruel shouted at Cheryl that this was why he told her to stay back, princess. Habru didn't understand what kind of children these were. He exclaimed how pathetic they were and struck them. The boys landed, and Cruel said his sword didn't even scratch him. Was he really human? Lorena replied that his sudden attack had caught the knights off guard and they should deal with him. Cheryl ran up to Lady Lorena and said that she had delivered the child to safety. Cruel replied that if it weren't for her, he would have definitely cut down this chieftain. Lorena asked him again, what did he say? He replied that he was attacking him and she was in the way. Lorena began to argue that he was the one interfering with her. So maybe she didn't remember losing to him during her last training session? Lorena didn't understand how this related to real life. Yan shouted at them to shut up because their showdown in front of the enemy was what would really hinder them. They asked him again, Yan, does he think he can defeat this creature alone? He replied that he hadn't said that, but she was certainly right about that. Lorena asked again, what? Wait, he couldn't attack him now, and if the leader attacked, things would be bad. At that moment, Habru used his magical powers and attacked everyone with a single blow. He shouted that they had killed them all, and he would kill them all too. He was attacking, and they shouldn't interfere this time. They also rushed to attack. Yan, who had been watching from the sidelines, realized that things wouldn't go this way. If Lorena and Cruel were experienced, it would be fine. But since each of them wanted to do this, it was creating a cacophony. Cheryl exclaimed that she would attack with them, and Jan told her to wait because they didn't need her help right now. Suddenly he froze, and Cheryl exclaimed, Lady Lorena, he will help her. So let her act at her own discretion, she replied. Okay. With Cheryl's intervention, everything changed. Habru also noticed this change and was confused. Her attacks were nothing special, and her hand movements were quite simple, but these small attacks exploded between the notes that wanted to make a statement, and they diluted the cacophony. This wasn't bad, or rather, it was amazing, and he hadn't thought she had such talent. He never heard of Cheryl in his past life. Why is that? The guys began discussing how they now needed to attack with all their might, and argued among themselves. The fight continued, with Habru, and after a moment, he suffered several cuts on his body. He was surprised by this, after which he continued to try to fend off the attacks, his body still gradually being destroyed. Suddenly, Jan appeared right in front of him and used the 15th form of the Dark Spirit. Dark Spirit, victory or defeat. And he struck Habru and shouted that it was enough. Habru was dumbfounded and wondered what was happening. Jan used the reverse rotation of his 15th form of Dark Spirit and took advantage of the defeat of the heavens, defeating his enemy, who began screaming in pain and terror. He cut his chest and Habru cried out before falling to the ground. When he knelt, the guys asked, did he really fall? They shouldn't relax. Habru said that but was surprised and asked again, what? Lorena approached him and said that they could still feel his energy. This wasn't the end. He looked at them menacingly, and, a moment later, leaped into the air. When he evaporated, they realized he had simply fled. It was incredible, and it seemed he had no honor at all. Lorena was sorry they had lost him, but at least they were all alive. They had to go back and report this to command. They decided to stop and asked, Did they see Yan? He was just here, after all. Did he really escape with him? After some time, Habru tried to move, clutching his wound. He understood that these wounds were nothing compared to the suffering of his tribe, and he would survive and definitely avenge his tribe. At that moment, he heard Yan say how cold-blooded he was. He was dumbfounded, and Yan said that his decision to flee was the right one. If he had delayed a little longer, things would have been difficult. Some might say it was shameful, but only fools say that. To live is to win. Habru asked how he managed to get here. He told him to be quiet because he wasn't going to kill him, and Habru was surprised and asked, "What?" Yan told him to just answer a few questions and he would let him go. Maybe he'd heard of this before? He mentioned the name Valega and asked if he knew anything about it. For example, where he was. Habru told him to shut up and Yan frowned at him. Habru grew angry and, raising his fist, shouted at him not to open his mouth or say that name. A moment later, the surrounding rocks began to crumble. Yan asked again, "So you've decided to die, Habru?" He shouted. "A dark wolf is attacking," but he said he wasn't going to kill him. He was just being impudent. Yan continued to fight him, shouting that if he kept swinging his fist, he wouldn't be able to harm him. He would certainly kill whoever wanted to harm Valega. He once decided to create a beautiful world with him, because if they united, this world would be a better place. Yan realized he'd thought so, after which he cast a special spell, and Habru didn't understand what it was. He commanded the stone wall to rise, and Habru realized it was magic. He found himself among these sharp stone walls and exclaimed, "This is it." Could dirt really have been his trump card? He grabbed Yan's shoulder and yelled at him to die, swinging it, telling him to pull out his hidden trump card. Momon stood next to him, defending him and casting a lightning spell. Habru was stunned and paused for a second. Everything around him was in flames, and he realized this couldn't be happening. He began to dissolve into thin air, and Momon exclaimed, "Do you understand, Yan? He would never survive without her. She always said that without imagination, magic becomes meager. With her, magic would be like this." So he was still her student? He told her to shut up, and she said she hadn't fought like this in a long time. Habru mentally apologized to the chieftain, because it seemed he couldn't keep the promise he made that sunset. He hoped for a wonderful world to come one day. At that moment, Momon said that it had been hard for him to stop that barbarian, and if only he had mastered what she had taught him, everything would be different. But he hadn't learned even half of it. Yan replied that it was a powerful enemy, and Chief Habru was completely defeated. Habru asked again why his tribe had to die like that. They just fought and tried to survive in these harsh lands. Couldn't they even put down roots here? Yan replied that the wolf family was also fighting to defeat an enemy like them. Habru asked if he was joking after such a victory. He replied that he was sincere. He was a strong and confident warrior. Habru asked if he could then fulfill his request. He saw how they took the child of their tribe. He was the last one, and let them spare him. He said he was even thinking about it and shouldn't worry, because the child was taken by a good man and he would not live as a slave. Habru pulled out a special symbol of the chieftain from his pocket and said that it was a symbol of his life and would become a symbol of his promise. This item was the chieftain's bone necklace, and receiving it meant assuming the title. He was not obligated to keep a promise made to a man on his deathbed, but he decided he would, because he doesn't want to refuse him. Habru hoped that this was a wonderful world. Yan said that in his next life he would be reborn in a better place. Sometime later, in the Duchy of Wolf, the commander-in-chief shouted that they had all done a great job. In this battle, they were able to destroy 2 outposts and defeat the Habru chieftain. This glory belongs to no one but to everyone who shed their blood. Now they will raise their mugs, and the commander-in-chief of the knights, Yilliam, will make all the sober bastards crawl on the ground with his own hands. All the guys shouted for the glory of Wolf and raised their mugs. Cruel was also among them, smiling as he drank, as was Yan, who was watching Lorena, who stood silently alone behind the barrels. Yilliam approached her and asked if she was okay. She addressed him by name, and he said he was glad she was okay, and, what's more, she managed to defeat the chieftain. She replied that it wasn't her doing, but William said he would get the remaining tribal banners if only she could say so. She replied that there was no need to do that, and William asked if it was because of Baz. It seemed she wasn't very used to this place. She shouldn't be sad after all. They were knights of the north, knights of the Duchy of Wolf. Uninformed people think that knights are honorable noblemen, that they are people who fight on the spot, people who fight and die with honor on the battlefield. Baz should have been pleased with this, because he died protecting his young mistress from the enemy. He would have liked to die for her himself, but he was too strong and couldn't die. How he envied him, Baz. Lorena told him not to say that, and he continued to say that the child she brought here would turn a blind eye to this, since that was her wish, Lady Lorena. She smiled and asked again, "Really?" He replied that in return, she shouldn't become attached to him, mistakenly thinking he was human. She understands that he's just an animal, right? He looked at her menacingly as he asked this question. She exclaimed that calling them that was too much, and he disagreed with her. They were no different from animals. On the contrary, barbarians were even more dangerous. Internal disorder was more frightening than an external enemy. If this were allowed to happen, the duchy would be in danger in the future. She exclaimed that he couldn't know that, She would take full responsibility, so he shouldn't worry about it. Their duchy was strong. It wasn't so weak that it would fall because of one child. He remembered what had happened when he had taken responsibility and nervously clenched his teeth, telling her not to think that bearing responsibility was that easy. People could easily die even if the enemy didn't set foot on their territory. Could she take responsibility for the grief that families would experience? This was his advice to her. She should think about it carefully again. He left, and she shouted after him that he had always been kind. But why was he so cruel to a barbarian child? He ignored her, and she puffed out her cheeks in offense. Then Hans came up to her and asked, "Was William just here?" He thought he heard a scream from here. She said that it seemed like he was angry because of the barbarian child they brought with them. And he asked with displeasure, how dare he be angry at her? He can't see anything at all behind his armor. He took a breath and calmed down, asking her to try to understand him. There is a reason why he says that. About 30 years ago, the time came to deal with the barbarians once and for all. A young knight who took part in the campaign found himself in a burnt village where he met a barbarian child. He was standing in the cold completely naked, not to mention unarmed. The knight took the child in, although others dissuaded him, and of course, he was against it too. But the child was eventually brought to the mansion. The knight was often away from home, and his young bride looked after the child. She cared for him with all her heart for a year, believing that with love, she could re-educate him. One day, tragedy struck. He suddenly attacked her, killed her, and fled, and the knight discovered the girl's dead body too late. He hugged her and began to beg for forgiveness. What would have happened if he had been by her side? After that, he became the commander of the knights, and did not spare even the children of the barbarians. Lorena understood who this story was about. That young knight was William, and from that moment on, he was filled with hatred for the barbarians. She looked down and said that she had no idea this had happened to him, and Hans said that it had happened to him too. Many knights had lost family members or friends at the hands of the barbarians. Now she understood how her actions had caused the knights, and Hans told her not to be too hard on herself. Meanwhile, MC was hiding behind the barrels and eavesdropping. He thought this meant the commander wouldn't change his mind, but he needed to keep his promise to Kapur. Hans said that wasn't the end of that story. The barbarians were now uniting, and at their head was a great leader, Vilai, and he was the same child William had adopted. Jan was very surprised why his name had surfaced here. Information about Vilai, which he had tried so hard to obtain. All this time, he had been connected with Beowulf's territory. Apparently, Beowulf had decided to hide it at all costs, but now he knew everything. An unexpected stroke of luck. This would be useful in the future when searching for Vilai. Hans said he understood that she was doing this out of good intentions. He didn't think she was wrong, but it would be difficult. Let her just leave him unattended for a while. He would take care of everything. She exclaimed indignantly that this was impossible. She would never forgive him for this, and he asked, "Does this mean she has another way out?" She didn't know what to say, and then MC approached them, saying that there is a way out, but they are looking for overly complicated solutions to a simple problem. She asked in confusion, did he really think this was a simple problem? He confirmed it and told them to stop worrying so much. Hans said that even if he was her close friend, this did not allow him to interfere in the internal affairs of the duchy. He smiled and said that he would simply tell them a simple solution to this problem. Isn't it enough for them to simply convince Duke Beowulf and get his permission? The Duke is the ruler of the entire North. If he gives permission, who will dare to argue with him? Hans exclaimed that this was nonsense. He would never allow this. And who would dare ask for such a thing? Lorena thought about it and declared that she would do it. She would ask her father and accept whatever his decision. Meanwhile, William was walking around the neighborhood and remembered his recent conversation with Lorena and reproached himself for being too rude to her. Will she hate him now? However, he cannot allow her to get hurt. The bell rang, which confused him because it was quite late, and then he saw the flag of the Frost Knights raised above the walls, which meant that they had returned. He was surprised and thought, was it thanks to the Duke's power that they returned from the campaign so quickly? A man approached him and noticed that he looked unwell. Was something bothering him? It was the captain of the Frost Knights, Gion, and William was very glad to see him. He asked if the Frost Knights had returned, then the Duke was here too. Gion answered him that he had said that there were still things to do and sent the knights ahead of him. William worriedly noted that he was left all alone in the Northern Sea. He hoped everything would be fine. Gion told him not to worry. For him, the Northern Sea was like a paddling pool. They shouldn't worry about the Duke, but about the demonic creatures he was left with. By the way, he heard that Miss Lorena brought a barbarian child here. Apparently, it caused a lot of trouble. William told him that he was fine, and he asked, what does it have to do with him? He was worried that this would cause trouble for Miss. Everyone knows what a kind heart she has. Just seeing a wounded animal, she sits next to it all day. William wondered if he really looked the same in the eyes of others. Gion asked, what about the special squad that arrived with her? Does he think they can be trusted with her safety? He answered that they are certainly skilled guys, but they are still wet behind the ears. However, there is one guy, Jan. He is quite extraordinary. With him, Miss seems to have nothing to worry about. Gion said that he understood everything. Is it really that he is worried because he has gotten old? Although Miss was back with them, he had a bad feeling. William asked what was bothering him, and he replied that he had a feeling they would be engulfed by a typhoon. Time passed, and now, Yan and the others were in the castle wing. Momon tried the drink, and noted that everything here was free, and thought about it. They had been arguing over the child for several days, but had calmed down recently. MC warned that the attack on the barbarians would be suspended for a few days. 3 banners had been captured, and it was unclear when they would decide to collect the rest. But that still didn't stop her. She gave Yan a lesson and, creating several magic circles, told him to watch carefully. When will he stop mindlessly stabbing with his sword and learn to use magic? Because of this, she spent all the mana she had secretly saved, but he acknowledged her. But it turns out he deceived her. He had the courage to take all the Lich's mana from her. At the moment, William and Cruel were fighting with swords on the training ground nearby. Their swords clashed, and the knight told him to dodge to the right and to be bolder when the enemy attacks. Cruel blocked his blow and struck back, and he cheerfully said that it was too rough, let him lunge deeper. The guy cursed and asked, "Is it fair? His sword is wooden, and he has a real one. How can you win with this stick? It's unfair to fight with such an advantage." William laughed and noted that he was really determined to win. MC meanwhile was watching them, and Momen asked why he was suddenly sparring. He seemed bored. He said that he felt it when he fought Kabur. He still has many shortcomings. If not for her, he would have been in danger too. She giggled and told him not to lie to her. He was just trying to suck up to her, and said that he found a lead regarding Astalon. Every time he touched it, it resisted, but the Northern Knights didn't feel anything. They just found it heavy. Perhaps it was all because of Beowulf's special magical technique. This Snow Spirit technique that increased the amount of mana in the dungeon. The Snow Spirit works the same way as the mana heart, so he tried to find out if there was any way to learn this technique. Momen asked, so why was Cruel sparring with him? He told her that he was just tired of being beaten and asked for hits from others. Momon said that she is a lich, and even she sometimes feels that he is too inhuman. Is it because of childhood trauma? She promises to find him a psychologist. Jian approached him and said that he was glad to meet him. They hadn't met before, had they? He introduced himself to him, and he asked, so, he is the captain of the knights? He introduced himself in return and apologized to him for not doing this sooner. He answered him that it was nonsense. He heard that he defeated Kabur, which is very good for his age. He replied that he was just lucky. Lorena and the other squad members fought him harmoniously, and he simply finished the battle. The man laughed and said that he wanted to ask him something. Why was he calling Miss by her first name? Wasn't that too familiar? Were they more than friends? What did he do to her? Let him answer him immediately. Jan mentally noted that all the men here were somehow strange. Maybe it was because of the climate? He replied that he had misunderstood everything. They hardly even communicated. The man calmed down and apologized to him, and then asked again with displeasure. So why didn't they communicate? Did their miss really not like him? And why didn't he like her? What did he do to her? Did he offend her, hurt her? MC remained silent, and Gion thought that now he understood why William praised him. He was level 5, and it was clear that this was not the limit. He had enormous potential. He threw a wooden sword into his hands and asked if he wanted to spar with them. Even the youngest of them could beat him. A knight from his squad stepped forward and told Jan that his name was Mir, and he smirked and thought that this was a wonderful opportunity. He said that although it made no difference to him, if they wanted to use a real sword, they could use it. Mir was surprised, as were the other knights, and their captain cheerfully noted that the youth of today were insolent, after which he seriously told Mir not to hold back and fight with all his might. He agreed and pounced on Yan, saying that he should have taken a real sword. He prepared himself, and when the knight struck, the wooden sword slipped from the hands of one of them. The piece of wood flew to the ceiling and quickly spun, then fell, and Jion stared in shock as Yan brought the tip of the sword to Mir's neck. Everyone was very surprised that he defeated the Knight of the Frost Squad with one blow. MC asked his opponent if he was okay, and in the eyes of that knight, he now looked very creepy. Meanwhile, in the northern forest of stone spikes, Valai asked if he was still in the northern sea. The old man confirmed it. Beowulf had not returned to the duchy. Dalai thought about it and ordered him to summon the chieftains on his behalf. Meanwhile, Cruel lost in a sparring match with William, and he praised him. His skills are improving right during sparring. He has a frightening talent. He asked, was he kidding? He had never even come close to hitting. William said that he almost hit. The distance was equal to 600 sheets of paper. He exclaimed that this is a huge distance, and he laughed, saying that he was joking. Even if he leaves now, he will become stronger in the future. He thanked him, and William heard surprised voices behind him and turned around, noticing that a squad of Frost Knights had already arrived here. What's the matter? He came closer and saw Jan, who had defeated the knight. The knights exclaimed that this was a disgrace to their squad, and MC already thought that he had hurt the knight's pride. But it turned out to be the opposite. He only impressed them. Mir stood up and thanked him for the sparring. He lost, and he is very good for his age. His comrades laughed at him, saying that he is useless for his old age. He is only pretending to be cool. These jokes angered him slightly, and Jan thought that he was so careless about it. For many knights, honor and pride are above all else. They usually get upset when they lose or dispute the results. In such a place, they risk their lives in every battle. It is surprising that this did not hurt his pride. Apparently, this is where their strength lies. It is not for nothing that they are called the Northern Wall. A man approached him and said that he was next. He is knight number 99 of the Frost Squad, Logan. He introduced himself with a smile and prepared for a sparring match, realizing that he hadn't yet learned how to use Northern mana, but that wasn't a bad thing. Their swords clashed, and Logan said he'd like to apologize for Mir's behavior. He'd treated him disrespectfully, so he'd fight him at full strength from the start. MC clearly saw the trajectory of his sword. He was using the ice and snow sword technique. He delivered several quick strikes, and asked if he wasn't being too systematic. Yan responded by moving around him with incredible speed, and Logan waited for the right moment, and soon it arrived. His opponent's cloak flashed behind him, and he immediately turned around. He struck out and thought he'd already caught it, but suddenly the strike came from the other side. MC elbowed him in the chest, and he asked, "So he decided to bait him with his clothes?" Coughing up blood, he fell and laughed, saying he'd lost. When their swords clashed, he realized even better how incredible he was. He thanked him, and the knights started arguing over who would fight him next, and even complaining about someone cutting in line. Jion stood to the side and watched, and William came up to him and asked him what he thought of that guy. He replied that now he understood why he was praised so much. William said that his friend, with whom he came here, Cruel, was also good, but he was on a completely different level. Chief Instructor, that snake made him like this. He thought he was just an amateur at playing politics, but in the end, he achieved such success. Is he really that greedy for such talented people? Jion agreed with him. It would be better if he sent him to their duchy. Although it would be better so, they can't allow such a fly to fly near their miss. He will want to seduce her, so they need to be prepared. William agreed with him. How can he even speak to her so rudely? Meanwhile, Yan had won another victory, and they were about to finish. But suddenly, the barbarians began to attack. A loud horn blared, signaling an emergency, and the knights immediately became alarmed. Hansa's loud voice rang out. He called everyone together and ordered all knights in the area to take up arms. Seeing the butler in armor, they realized that everything was serious and became even more worried. He approached William and Jian and informed them that their lands were under attack. Meanwhile, the fortress gates were breached. The barbarians advanced further, led by Vilai, and Hans told the knights that it was he who had attacked them. Hearing this, MC frowned. Now was not the time for his attack. Had the course of history really changed again? After this, the command went to the walls. Seeing the fire, Hans noted that they had already broken through the third wall. They were advancing quite quickly. William asked the knight about the situation, and he informed him that the third detachment of knights was currently strengthening the wall. It was no longer possible to defend the wall. They needed to evacuate the residents and retreat to the second wall. But there were too many enemies, so it wouldn't be easy to fight them. According to their rough estimates, there were about 30,000 of them. William exclaimed, "Why didn't they notice their army moving? Where were their rangers?" He supposed that they all seemed to have been killed. Apparently, having learned whose men they were, the enemy decided to take advantage of the moment and attack. William cursed and began giving orders. Jion and the Frost Knights are helping to evacuate the residents and retreat to the castle walls. He and his squad were heading to the second wall to meet the enemy there. He understood how they felt, but they had to defend the castle. Yan, meanwhile, cursed and thought that history had changed again, and precisely because of the event that troubled him the most. What difference from his past life had such an impact? What had changed since he arrived in Beowulf's territory? Beowulf was holding Vilai back, and he hadn't invaded the territory. Would Vilai be able to defeat Beowulf? What changed when Lorena, he, and the others decided to go north? And then he understood everything. Meanwhile, one of the barbarian warriors informed their leader that they had broken through the third wall and were moving on. He told them to take their time and send the quick and sharp ones there. They must definitely break through the next wall. MC, meanwhile, realized what Vilai was aiming for. Lorena, he was going to take her hostage. After a while, at the western gate of the second wall, the third squad of White Knight Knights held their positions. The knights fought with all their might to prevent the barbarians from breaking into the castle. Their second captain shouted that even if they were on the brink of death, they should fight with gritting their teeth. They needed to hold out until the Duke returned. Immediately after these words, he fell in battle, and Vilai ordered his brothers to put all their anger into it. The time for bloody revenge had come. Today, they would honor the memory of their fallen brothers by praying for them. Today will pass, and they will become the masters of the North. Meanwhile, Lorena was fighting alongside Cheryl. She looked around for enemies and asked if she was okay. She confirmed it and noted that the barbarians were fleeing here. There was no end to them. At this rate, they would have to retreat. She ordered Cheryl not to fight here, but to go help evacuate the children, and she worriedly asked how she would be alone here. She answered that it would be easier for her to escape alone, so she should go. Cheryl ran to carry out her order and promised her that she would return soon. The main thing was for her to hold out until then. Now she was alone, and while she was thinking about how the barbarians had suddenly invaded here, laughter was heard behind her, and the barbarian exclaimed that he had found her. He raised his axe over his head, but suddenly froze in place, and she asked what he was doing. Why was he hesitating before striking? The barbarian let out a painful wheeze and then fell to the ground, and she saw Jan behind him. He said he had finally found her, and she asked why he was even looking for her. He immediately grabbed her hand and ran, and she exclaimed in confusion, why did he do that? And where were they running? He told her that they needed to hurry. She had to return to the castle immediately. She was the enemy's target. She frowned, asking why they needed her, and he explained to her that the great chief was targeting her because she was the Duke's weak point. He wanted to use her as bait to lure the Duke out. They could hold him off for now, but if the chief decided to act, he would defeat them in an instant. If she was captured here, they definitely wouldn't stand a chance. She had to escape, even if everyone here died. She countered, how could he escape alone? They ran near the tower and MC heard a suspicious sound above, looked up and saw the top of the tower falling towards them. He immediately let go of the girl and ordered her to run, and then there was a crash. The tower fell on them, separating them. Lorena came to her her senses. Due to the bad fall, she injured her leg. Looking at the tower, she thought, who could do such a thing? She loudly called out to Yan. He did not answer, and she shouted his name again, asking him to answer her. She was already starting to think that something had happened to him, when a man's voice rang out, asking if the introduction had been too abrupt. She immediately realized who he was. "This is the greatest leader, Vilai," he asked. So she knew him? That meant he didn't need to introduce himself. Looking at him, she realized how terrified she was. For the first time, someone other than her father made her feel such fear. If the battle lasted long, with an injured leg, she definitely had no chance of winning. She had to finish him off with one blow. He noticed how she focused all her mana in one place and suddenly appeared right in front of her, asking, does she think she can kill him with one blow? She was frightened by how he appeared there in an instant. She didn't even notice, didn't even feel how he approached her. Now she understood the great leader's power. He told her that if she remained quiet, she wouldn't be harmed. She was a valuable asset. She remained silent and looked off to the side, and Vilai smirked and remarked on his youth. He immediately turned around and struck Yan, exclaiming that the dark wolf was visible through and through. Lorena called out to him in fear, and Vilai smirked, saying that he knew from the start that he was in ambush, but the smile quickly disappeared from his face, because his body evaporated in magic. MC was already behind him with the girl and asked if he hadn't noticed the difference, relying only on his eyes. It was just a magical illusion. Lorena asked in surprise how he was able to do this, and he told the great leader that their meeting was supposed to take place later. Lorena asked him to let her go. He ignored her, and then she lightly hit him in the face, already giving orders. Vilai said that he was bragging too much about how he managed to deceive him once, but he would tear him to pieces in a minute. He smiled and asked, does he think he has that much time? While he is busy with him, his target will already have slipped away. He said that he was talking nonsense. His target is already in front of him. He clarified that he was talking about his true goal, Astalon. This is what he really wants, right? The dragon sword Astalon. They say this sword gives its owner the power to win every battle. With this sword, conquering the empire will no longer be just a dream for him. If he wants, he will tell him where the sword is, but in exchange he will take her away. He has important business with her. He finally put the girl down, and Vilai asked if he lets them go. He will tell him where he can find Astalon. Lorena quietly asked, does the dragon sword really exist? He answered her that it is in the armory, and she asked, does he really want to give it to him? He answered her with a smile that instead of the sword, he will give him a fake. He was worried by the fact that Vilai spent his childhood in the Duchy of Beowulf. He thought that Vilai might know about the dragon sword. His eyes would allow him to easily determine its essence. Even without knowing Astalon's true value, he would not ignore it. So he'd thrown out a tasty bait. Would he take it? Vilai asked furiously. So that's what they call it? This sword was the ruler's sword. A legendary sword passed down in their tribe from generation to generation. Yan was glad he'd succeeded and said he was running out of time. The knights were about to carry the sword to safety. Moreover, Duke Beowulf was about to return. He would have to make a choice, either the sword or her. Vilai said he didn't like having to choose, but he would settle for the third option. He would kill him and have her and the sword. As soon as he said this, he appeared between them in the blink of an eye, and they were both surprised by how fast he was. Vilai wished him death and then released his battle aura, which threw them apart. MC called out to the girl worriedly, and the barbarian immediately appeared in front of him, calling him an arrogant brat. How dare he try to negotiate with him? He raised his leg over him, and said that he would make him beg for a chance to tell him where the sword was. There was a blow. Yan smirked for some reason, and then an enormous pressure fell on him, breaking everything in the area. MC survived. He landed on a piece of debris, and said that he barely managed to dodge. He held back the attack. Did he really doubt? Vilai told him to shut up. He stopped because he had a question. That thing on his belt is Kabor's bracelet. Where did he get it? He answered him that he got it from Kabor, and he was surprised. Yan said that he entrusted it to him, and asked him to fulfill his last will. Vilai asked what the last moments of his life were, and he answered him that Kabor thought about the tribe until the end. He was a strong warrior. After listening to him, he asked him to tell him where the sword was kept. He would let him go if he did so. This is a sign of respect for the person who has accepted Kabor's last will. He asked, was he asking him to abandon his comrade? Vilai said that if he refused, he would die. He knew he couldn't defeat him, and that's why he used the information about the sword. He wasn't even from the Beowulf Duchy. He shouldn't get involved in a pointless fight that would risk his life. MC clicked his tongue in annoyance. He had no other choice. Lorena was sitting near a fragment of a wall, resting. A shadow fell over her, and Vilai said that he had made her wait. He extended his hand to her and said that he was eagerly awaiting the Duke's reaction. He wondered what expression he would have on his face after seeing his daughter in this state. But suddenly Jan's voice was heard, calling him an idiot and saying that he relied too much on his eyesight. That's why he was deceived time and time again. Right before his eyes, the illusion dissipated, and MC told him not to worry. The information about the sword is genuine, but he should hurry. Vilai gritted his teeth and screamed curses in rage. Meanwhile, Jan was already running with Lorena. He said that he told him where to look for the sword, and they managed to go quite far. Now he will go not after them, but after the sword. Momon laughed and asked if he saw what level of magic is. Her magic is truly exceptional, which cannot be said about his toy. He said that it was impressive, and she asked if he took the Kabor bracelet on purpose. He told her that he knew about the impossibility of reaching Vilai, and the bracelet helped. He needs to wake up Lorena to get the sword with her help. Momon asked if he hadn't given up. He told her that of course he hadn't. Did she really think that he would be able to retreat after going through so many trials for this? She asked. So he was going to defeat him? But how would he do it? He told her that the sword had a protective spell cast on it. Even Vilai wouldn't be able to get to it that easily. As he thought, he went to the armory. He knocked down the door and went inside, thinking, is it here? What if he lied to him? But he quickly realized that he was telling the truth, as the sword's magic was emanating from the center of the room. He approached it and thought that with the ruler's sword, he could confront the Duke. He would kill him with this sword. He wanted to take it, but suddenly sparks began to come from the sword. And then, along with a ray of light, words thundered that he was unworthy of it. The sword still didn't let him approach, and he smiled, thinking, did this weapon dare to make a noise? It was so cute. He grabbed the sword and ordered it to stop whining, let it not resist, and become his. Seeing the sparks die down, he laughed and asked, did it seem to have calmed down? He pulled it out and declared that the ruler's sword would be his, and at that moment, Hans burst into the armory and said that this would never happen. He wished him death, and he turned around, asking how dare he interfere with him at such an important moment. They clashed in battle. Meanwhile, MC brought Lorena to the castle. He asked if there was a shelter near the tower, protected from mana detection. He offered her to stay here and rest until everything was over, but she objected and declared that she could and would fight. He said that she couldn't fight with an injured leg. She had gotten hurt falling from the tower, hadn't she? She told him it was nothing. She can't hide here while everyone is fighting. He wants her to sit back and watch blood spill on her lands. He said that she had always seemed cold-blooded to him, but it seemed that when it came to family, she lost that trait. Did she really think it was her role to go out onto the battlefield? She wouldn't sit idle, and for them to capture Vilai, she had to do something. She asked what exactly she had to do, and when he didn't answer, she exclaimed impatiently that she would do anything to capture him. He leaned his hand on the wall behind her, and with a serious face, told her to give him the most precious thing she kept inside her. With that thing, they could defeat Vilai. She didn't quite understand what he was talking about, and thought of something completely different, causing her face to flush, and Momon hit Yan on the back of the head, asking how he could say something like that. He realized he had expressed himself ambiguously and awkwardly, said that she had misunderstood him. He needed the Snow Soul steps, let her teach him this technique. She was very surprised and indignant, and he said that he didn't have time to go into details, but this was their only chance to defeat Vilai. Without it, he couldn't do it, she exclaimed. Have you lost your mind? Snow Soul steps is a secret technique, passed down in the Beowulf family. She can't teach this technique to anyone, not even him. This is a rule their family has observed for centuries. Meanwhile, the spire, inside which the second floor of the armory is located, collapsed. Hans pounced on the barbarian and exclaimed, so, while his subordinates are dying, he's taken up theft? He yelled back, does he even understand what he's doing? He said he came here to kill the rat that got into his house, and then used the 12th form of the Snow Soul, White Flower. Swinging his sword, he threw white petals at his opponent, destroying everything they touched. Vilai exclaimed in surprise, is each petal covered in the sword's enhanced aura? Who would have thought there was someone here equal to the Duke in strength? However, this wasn't enough to stop him. He covered his body in a fighting aura and used the rainstorm technique, which quickly deflected the falling petals. Hans was surprised that he was able to resist this, and then the barbarian pounced on him, ordering him to get out of the way. Hans tried his best to fight back, but if only he were younger. Meanwhile, MC reached the sword. He approached it and said that it looks like he got there just in time. It's good that Hans went there first, but he won't last long. Momon said that as soon as the sword reacted, Vilai would immediately understand everything, and he answered her that he knew it. Therefore, before that happened, he would put an end to all this. He took the sword and magic immediately covered him, and looking at this bright light, he remembered the conversation with Lorena. She exclaimed that this is the rule of her house. It has existed for centuries. He asked, does this mean the rule is more important to her than her people? Her gaze immediately changed, and he told her to decide faster. Either she follows the rule, or she will lose her subordinates. She will have to go against the rule if she wants to protect her people. She hesitated and remembered the one who broke the rule and how he was treated. She was even forbidden to say his name. Despite this, she said that he was right. She must do it. She took his hand and placed it on her chest, saying that she will entrust him with everything she has. He was confused by this, and she told him to focus on the flow of mana. Can he feel it? He felt mana swaying beneath his palm, and she told him to listen to what she was saying and to accept this mana. The perfection of silence lies within the ice. Once he knows this calm, even during a blizzard, he will be able to make his soul blossom. A beam of frosty mana shot into the sky from the spire, and Jan saw writing in the air, just like back then, in the past. He felt it with his whole body. He opened his eyes and raised his sword, saying that he had finally obtained the dragon sword Astalon. The sword responded to his technique and began to crust over with ice, taking on its true form. Meanwhile, Hans continued the battle. he retreated and gritted his teeth, calling him a monster. Who would have thought that he would be able to decipher his techniques? Was his stamina and mana reserves truly endless? So this was the power of the great leader Vilai? The barbarian approached him and said he hadn't expected him to last so long, expending his life force. However, this was the end for him, the old knight. He wanted to finish him off, but suddenly felt a surge of energy and saw a beam of light coming from the spire, and exclaimed, "Has he really reached the ruler's sword? This rat." He spared him out of respect for Kabur, and he dared to deceive him. The old man saw his chance. He pounced on him and shouted, "What is he distracted by during a fight?" But Vilai stopped his sword with his bare hand and said that their fight had ended long ago. He gripped the blade, breaking it, and furiously attacked him, shouting that if he hadn't stood in his way, this would not have happened. It seemed he was about to kill him, but for some reason his hand froze right next to his face. Someone had placed frosty shackles on him. Hans was surprised and exclaimed that no one could use magic in this place. Who did this? It was Jan, heading toward them, and Vilai exclaimed that it really was him. How dare he touch the ruler's sword with his filthy hands? He said he never thought Astalon contained such power. It was simply incredible. He had been right when he assumed that the snow soul enhanced ice magic, and having obtained Astalon, he greatly increased his magic. The barbarian, perplexed, asked how he managed to get hold of the ruler's sword, and there were 3 mana clusters in his body. What had he done to himself? MC thought he had noticed it right away. His God's Eye ability was quite troublesome. Vilai grinned and asked, "So this power belongs to the ruler's sword? That's just perfect. This sword suits him perfectly." He broke the shackles and raised his hand, gathering energy, and said that if he chose him, he would gather as much strength as possible and simply take the sword, killing him. A black sphere appeared in his palm. Then in an instant it was next to him, about to strike him with this black sun. Jan raised the sword and concentrated. The whole world around him fell silent, and he felt calm. After that, he made a slight movement, using the basic sword technique of the Frost Knights, a slanting cut. A few seconds later, the castle walls collapsed under a smooth cut, and a huge cut appeared on the barbarian's chest. The black sun went out for a moment, but then reappeared, and the barbarian exclaimed that this power was still not enough. MC immediately opened his eyes and looked at the sphere in fear. And then a bright flash and an explosion blinded him. A huge stream of energy crashed down on him and pinned him to the wall, after which the barbarian touched his chest and said that he hadn't received such serious injuries in a long time. So it was the ruler's sword? He was able to break through his muscles and oppose his fighting aura. Even the enhanced sword couldn't stand against his power. Jan said he barely managed to block the blow, and Vilai said with admiration that he now understood. This sword's attacks pass through mana. This sword is perfect for him, because he can see the flows of mana. MC said he was wrong. It's not that simple. Astalon is a sword that can stop the flow of mana. If he doesn't understand the difference, he won't be able to handle this sword. Vilai told him not to talk nonsense. He will understand once he receives the sword. Let him give it to him. And then he felt a strange cold in his leg. It turned out that by this time, the ice had already managed to bind his leg. Vilai felt the cold air for the first time, despite the fact that he was born in the north, and the breath of death behind him meant that the master of these lands, Duke Beowulf, had arrived. He looked down at him from the top of the castle and asked how the pathetic barbarian dared to come here. What was he doing in his domain? The ice froze even the air to create a staircase for the Duke to descend, and this sight surprised the barbarian. He approached him and said menacingly that he had asked what he was doing here. Let him choose his excuses wisely. They could be his last words. Vilai said that they had finally met. He knew his name, didn't he? He was a great leader who united 20 tribes. The Duke ordered him to remain silent. Why on earth should he know the name of a pathetic barbarian? He called him a fool and thought he was arrogant, but he had every right to be. He had never seen a man with so much mana. How come he didn't notice him approaching? Could it really be because he was under the influence of the ruler's sword? So this is that rat's plan? He tore his foot from the ice and pounced on him, exclaiming that their meeting was destined, and that he should fight him. The Duke said that he was nothing but dust beneath his feet, and had no right to even speak his name. A magic circle began to grow beneath his feet, and Vilai said that it was too late. Now, he would die. But as soon as the Duke took a step, the magic circle instantly expanded several meters due to the territory expansion technique, and the barbarian was frightened by the frosty glow. The absolute form of the snow soul, eternal frost, covered the entire castle territory, and the barbarians began to turn into ice. Seeing this, the knights defending the walls realized that the Duke had returned and were overjoyed. The same fate befell the barbarian leader. The Duke turned to Hans and asked if he was alright. He confirmed this and said with admiration that he hadn't seen his techniques in action for so long. He had only become stronger. He looked at the barbarian encased in ice and asked if this was the power of eternal frost. The Duke said that he wasn't getting any younger. How did it happen that the barbarian wounded him? He answered that he almost killed him. Territory expansion is the absolute form of the snow soul, eternal frost. Under the influence of the eternal frost, all enemies turn to ice, while the Duke's allies are unaffected by this technique. And the leader of the Duchy of Beowulf, Bacchus Beowulf, the master of this technique, who tirelessly defends the north. Bacchus asked Hans how something like this could happen to him. He answered that he was ashamed, and he told him to forget about it. The main thing is that Lorena and the inhabitants of the duchy are safe. Hans said that he had helped them a lot and asked Jan to come and introduce himself to the Duke, but he had already gone somewhere. Bacchus asked if he seemed to have a talent for escape. He answered that Jan was not that kind of person at all. The Duke was about to leave, but suddenly Vili woke up, and his hand, which was outside the ice, again created a black sun. He shattered the ice, again attracting the Duke's attention, and said that he had let his guard down. Bacchus noted that this was not bad, but it was not enough to kill him. He responded that he couldn't kill him. He was right. But what about the others? He threw the black sun at the tower where the refugees were resting. The barbarian smiled and thought that he would get out of here while the Duke would save them, but his plan failed. MC appeared in the way of the sphere and cut it in two, exclaiming that he was incredibly annoying to the last. The barbarian shouted in rage at him not to stand in his way, and half of the black sun shone brightly and exploded. Under the blow, Jan lost all his strength and fell down. He thought that he was so tired. Besides trying to cope with the new sword and new magical power, he must protect Lorena even during the fight with this monster. He had no strength or mana left. He spent everything to the last drop. It was time to rest. It was time for the others to replace him. He closed his eyes and suddenly Lorena called out to him. He looked at her, and she extended her hand, begging him to wake up. He grinned and thought that it looked like he had no chance to rest. However, this wasn't so bad. After that, news of the barbarian invasion quickly spread throughout the empire. Damien smiled upon hearing of Jan's deeds, and Leon became very interested in him. And so the era, albeit slowly, is beginning to change.